So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if King Naruto had forcefully to a queen in bedroom movie. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. It was a nice summer day to take a stroll and listen to the birds chirping as he traveled village to village. A gentle breeze wafted around him and he inhaled it, taking in just how fresh and cool it was. It was so invigorating. So unlike it was just 6 months before at the end of the 4th Great Shinobi War. While it had only lasted 5 days, those 5 days were horrendous and caused untold damages that could never be repaired to the shinobi, their villages and the landscape that would forever be scarred by the war. This very spot he stood was marred by the damages of Kabuto and Tobi. The air was fouled by the stench of blood and waste. Bodies of both the Shinobi Alliance and the mass clones of the one known as Zetsu littered the landscape. The anguished screams of the injured having a limb amputated still haunted many that heard them. And now that it was over, a great deal of their forces had enlisted for retirement but had to be kept on due to the lack of numbers left for the Great Five. It would take so long to recover from the damages that they couldn't let anyone retire until they were back on their feet, and many knew that would take decades. The Alliance had agreed to stay together and ease the transition as one so they could keep their forces strong. Their pride was no longer intact and they had to settle on this agreement, for no one of the villages was capable of defending itself properly. Their forces were spread out amongst the villages, and even shinobi that held grudges in the villages they were ordered to settle within were making great contributions and helping everyone in the cause, for each village lost so much. Konoha had literally been wiped off the map previously, just days before the war, by pain, and with the loss of Yamato and other great shinobi the village itself would take a great deal of time to recover. Iwa, Kiri and Suna had lost a great deal of their forces during the short span of the war. They had suffered so many losses that they were dealing with inner turmoil caused by the grieving citizens that had lost their spouses and children, making their rebuilding process ever more slower than it already was. Kumo had taken what would be considered the least damaging in a sense, however they felt the sting just as much. They had lost many of their elites, with on the A, Darui and Karabi making it through along with 2 of the trio that he remembered, and would have difficulties restoring power within their village. Yet they worked in unison, as one, to get through these difficult times. They stood by each other and made it work even when they butted heads. Jiraiya would have loved to see this day almost as much as he loved to peep on women, specifically Tsunade. And he would have been proud that he, his final pupil, led the charge and helped bring this about. It was he that turned the tides and brought around even the hardest of hearts to his ideas. Even the toughest and most stubborn of the Kages, Ei and Onoki, were moved by his strength of heart, will and body in their darkest time. And it was he who ended the war, though he couldn't take full credit. A revived Itachi took care of Kabuto and stopped the Edo Tensei just in the nick of time, and Ever Ninja played their part and helped bring it to a full end. It was he, however, that saved so many on the front lines with his widespread shadow clones. He was the one that stopped some of the most difficult of the revived shinobi and helped turn the tide. And he was the one that took care of Tobi and learned his true identity and revealed it to the Alliance as Uchiha Kagami. And finally it was he who defeated and captured Sasuke and brought him back, tied up in a heavy-duty wire and chakra cuffs. Unfortunately he was unable to turn the Uchiha from his ways, but at least he made the last Uchiha civil enough for people that visited him in his cell. There was no way he wasn't going to be punished for his crimes against the Alliance, mostly Konoha and Kumo, and he was simply being let off easily so that the clan could be rebuilt within the next few decades. Ino, Sakura and a few girls he didn't know made sure of that. To be blunt, he was quite upset that Sakura decided to be part of the group and willingly chose to be one of the surrogate mothers for the Uchiha clan. He had tried to convince her otherwise, but in the end her decision was final and he couldn't change her mind, which soured his mood. He still crushed after her. It also hurt to hear that Hinata, the girl who proclaimed her love to him and defend him from pain, had fallen for Choji during the short time the war lasted, for his heroics in overcoming the obstacles, saving her life quite a few times in the process. However, in the end it didn't hurt him all that much. Hinata had never really knew him and only had fallen in love with his determination and his will, something Choji showed during the war, and had the Hyuga fall for him. And honestly he was happy for both of them, though his heart ached at the loss of yet another he cared for. But there wasn't much he could do other than that, so he let it be. A lot of love bloomed during those 5 days, and to be honest it wasn't something he was going to throw a fit over. She didn't scorn him on purpose, still admitting she cared deeply for him but not in the way she had before, and Choji was a good friend. The worst news came much, much later, and was why he was wandering the lands with Sannin status, having been granted by the Council of Kages for his actions in the war. The next Rokudame had been announced, and it was Hitaki Kakashi, not him. To be honest, this was the one thing that had riled Naruto into a fit. There was no one better for the job than he was, and even Kakashi told him he'd rather have him, his student, take the role for what he had done and shown to everyone. But in the end it was Tsunade's decision, and that what truly irked him. She, his godmother, had scorned him, and that left an empty pit in his stomach. Flashback. Why? Naruto roared as he barged into the rebuilt Hokage's office, just as many were expecting, and was the reason why no Anbu bothered to jump to the Hokage's aid. He had the right to be furious. He had done much for this village, and his goal had just been taken from him for that much longer. Sighing as she pushed aside some of the papers she had been working on, Tsunade looked up at the young man that she had watched grow before her own eyes. It just saddened her it had to come to this. Naruto. I am sorry. You have every right to vent, and I won't dock you or think less of you for it, but I am standing by my decision. Growling at the buxom blonde Hokage, Naruto clenched his fists tightly and narrowed his eyes ever so slightly at these words. Why? That is what I want to know. Why is it not me? What have I not done? Sadly gazing at the young sage, Tsunade took a deep breath. Your accomplishments, while great and while everyone is very, very thankful for, aren't enough. You lack one very important requirement that keeps you from rising to this position. Looking on impatiently, waiting as Tsunade paused and not caring for the remorseful glint coming from the Hokage's eyes, the fifth finished with great regret. You are only a chunin by the laws of Konoha, and therefore are unable to qualify for the position of Hokage, as only a shinobi of Junin rank may take the title. What? Naruto's voice echoed throughout the room and very well could be heard throughout the village. It wouldn't have surprised anyone from the sheer unveiled anger and the indecency to hear that was the only reason Naruto wasn't up for the job. That is the only thing that is holding me back. He continued on it, at least a more controlled, even if he was close to losing it, tone, though the edge had even the Anbu on guard. It sounded as like the voice of someone that had broken, something many were accustomed to thanks to the trials they went through, and the worst person that could happen to was a Jinchuriki that had more power to throw around than most were able to even comprehend. You're telling me that everything I did. Even Tsunade leaned back in her chair as chakra began to visibly form around Naruto, thankfully not in the Kyuubi's golden aura, before dissipating and leaving a crestfallen Naruto with tears welling in his eyes. Was it all for nothing? Falling to his knees, not bothering to wipe the tears that flowed freely down his cheeks, Naruto cracked and his sobs filled the room. All I ever did was for this village. I gave up so much, protected as many as I could, and aspired for the top only to be denied. What the hell was it all for? In the next instant the test was tossed into the wall, leaving a deep crack in it, and papers showed the room as Tsunade went straight the weeping blonde and wrapped him in a tense yet tender embrace. No. No, it was. You did everything right. She soon realized those words didn't help in the slightest as Naruto began to cry harder and she wanted to hit herself for them. Of course that wasn't going to help him. To hear he did everything right but wasn't even considered for what he believed to be his title for the taking. That was simply torture. So instead she held on to him and coaxed him with relaxing yet grief-ridden words. I'm sorry. I am ever so sorry. Flashback end. Needless to say he still hadn't forgiven her. When he pressed her later for why she couldn't promote him to Junin like how Suna did for Gaara before promoting him to Kazekage, Tsunade stated that Gaara had been a chunin for 6 months, the minimum time one had to wait for promotion to Junin, while he was recently instated as a chunin due to his accomplishments. And by 6 months' time Kakashi would be Hokage, and there would be a great amount of time before a new Hokage was actively sought for unless a crisis occur and Kakashi was put out of commission. And that was something Naruto wasn't hoping for. He respected Kakashi, and while he felt jaded that his sensei, who admitted he was beyond even his level and abilities, he wished him no harm. He had a good relationship with the Cyclops and he knew the Scarecrow would make a good Hokage. Just not nearly as good as he would be. At the very least Tsunade granted him Sannin leave, after it was premised by the other 4 cages, and was allowed to travel throughout their lands and stop at the villages. Of course each time he stopped at one of the main villages there was a temptation to stay there that he had to overcome just to head out. Like in Suna, Gaara was willing to claim him as a shinobi of his village and would help groom him to become the Rokudame Kazekage. That was difficult to pass up as it was coming right after the events in Konoha, and he seriously was tempted to take the offer, if accepted by the other cages, which he doubted would be too willing to let him just go to another village and not theirs. He was a popular commodity and everyone knew his allegiance to Konoha had waned. Hell, he was hit on by Mei during his time in the mist and he damn near ended up with a bed with her. Or so he told to the public. He wasn't willing to admit that she got the better of him and seduced him into a night of passionate love. Thankfully she wasn't one to sit and tell, and he got out of that situation with his dignity intact. It was almost a similar situation in Iwa with Kuretsuchi, but thankfully his experience with Mei had taught him quite a deal and he was able to turn the tables with her. Though that didn't stop the girl from her original goal in the slightest, and once again Naruto left with his dignity intact, though far more satisfied. At least in Kumo he wasn't seduced by the lures of power or women. They only wanted him to bolster their strength in terms compared to the others due to losing their elites, though they weren't above trying to seduce him with the two. They just didn't want to go that far in order to do so. And his time there was enjoyable as he trained against with Kurabi and was taught the black lighting arts from Darui as compensation for saving their asses. It was a nice little gift really, as they proved to be very useful techniques and, unknown to them, he was experimenting with how to turn black lighting into an armor technique like a used. But in the end, despite everything, Naruto still felt empty and a sense of longing. He really no longer had a purpose, and despite all the sightseeing, setting up a spy network of his own to keep tabs on everyone and meeting old friends, it had all lost its meaning. There was nothing to do, and that left one very, very bored Uzumaki Naruto. And with great boredom came an incredibly stupid idea. "Hey Kurama." Naruto spoke out loud as there wasn't anyone around to call him crazy before finding a place to meditate, against a tree on the road, and entered his mind to see the great Kitsune. Is it possible to travel back in time or even into the future? Okay. What the hell? Kurama twitched as he responded to his vessel's seemingly idiotic question. I know you wouldn't be asking just for the hell of it. What is it that you want to do, boy? Yeah. Naruto scratched the back of his head and looked sheepishly at the fox demon. I was thinking, since it finally seems to be at a time of peace that doesn't look like it is on the verge of dissolving. I was thinking, what if we could go back in time or even into the future? Owlishly blinking at his vessel, just wondering how bored and scorned his vessel was to even be thinking of such an idea, Kurama shook his head. He would humor the boy with a response. Time travel to the past is possible thanks to the seals you ninja have made over the years. But it is incredibly stupid. Just think about all the paradoxes that could come from you messing with the past. You could very well shatter everything you've worked for. Good point. Didn't think about that. Naruto winced as that was the last thing he wanted to do. While there were a lot of horrible things that had happened, he could very well cause this timeline to cease existing was something he wasn't willing to be the cause of. Wait, but what if I did go back into the past originally and help set this entire up? I seriously doubt it, Naruto. I seriously doubt it. Kurama shook his head and wanted to roll his eyes. And while going into the future is all and good as you can't cause any serious damage, it isn't recommended. When you do so, a copy of you is left in this era and goes on as it would have if you were here, and when you arrive in your destination time, a time where you don't exist, as let's not even get into the doppelganger scenarios, you could theoretically end up in bed with your daughter or granddaughter the way you've been rutting lately. Simply blinking back at the fox, Naruto again winced. Okay. That takes that option away. No way in hell I want to end up having sex with my own decedents. Wait. You've been watching me in BED? Of course, dingus. What else am I going to do while locked up behind these bars? Kurama responded as if it was only natural and shrugged his shoulders. And Naruto could only sagely nod his head in response. The Nine Tails had a point. However, one last idea came to him and he snapped his fingers. What about traveling through dimensions that are currently within the same linear time era as ours? Again blinking owlishly at Naruto, Kurama was left agape at that idea and once again had to wonder just how scorned and bored the blonde had to be. However, this time a small smirk appeared on the fox's lips. Now that is an idea I can get behind. A whole new world to explore, plunder and terrorize. Hey, Naruto stopped the fox as it was about to go on one of his tangents about destruction and mayhem, and he wasn't going to have it. There will be no terrorizing if we do this. The plundering was a given, as I'm not going to dimensionally travel without having some kind of trophy before coming back, but the real reason is. You still feel as if there is good left to be done. Kurama spoke in a slightly annoyed tone with his vessel, not understanding how he was just so good, but sighed in defeat. Well. There is a problem with great idea. Only one being has ever traveled between dimensions, and I'm not so sure how she's going to react to me asking how she did it. Matabi? Naruto asked, having a feeling that it was the two-tailed Nekomata that Kyuubi was speaking of. How in the hell did you figure that out? I didn't even leave any clues. Kurama yelled at Naruto, angry and begrudgingly curious on just how in the blazes he figured that out. Well, her name means travel again, and I know she is female thanks to that night a few days ago. Naruto spouted off before trailing off with a slight amount of drool escaping from the corner of his lips. Damn, she had a damn fine body. You're telling me? Kurama perversely agreed and giggled under his massive breath before getting back to the point. Well, back to business. Since you have a better relationship with her, why don't you convince her to give the secrets of dimensional travel to us so we can get off this rock and take our loot? Yeah, back to the land of iron. Naruto exited his mind, cracked and popped his neck and stood up, gazing down the road he had just come from. This might actually be fun. And maybe I'll finally find my purpose again. Halt, who goes there? One of two samurai blocked a small, metallic gate that was elegantly designed built into a mountain pass that led to valley protected on all sides by the mountain, samurai and shinobi. And within this valley was a massive prairie. A prairie that was made as a reserve for the more cooperative Biju to live out their lives freely and not in danger of a war like the fourth would ever occur again. Of course there was always the chance they could rebel, but Son Goku was doing a good job in keeping the peace. Of course Shukaku had to be sealed away again, back into Gaara. There was no way anyone, not even the Biju, wanted that lunatic set free. He always seemed to be insane, from what the other eight would say, and only listened to their father, and since the Sage of Six Paths was no longer around, it was just better off without him around. Really? Naruto raised his eyebrow at the samurai that confronted him, giving the other a brief look that reflected what he had just said, before twitching his left eyebrow. I just left here a few days ago. How in the hell do you not know that? The samurai that was blocking Naruto's path looked towards his partner, seeing if he knew anything about this, and it seemed he didn't, so he turned back to the ninja clad in a strange mix of what seemed to be a neon orange and brown Enbu gear, except without the standard ninjutsu, with the shinobi symbol on his headband. I am sorry sir, but not just anyone can come here. Only high-ranking officials or those with the proper status may be allowed in. Proper status? Seriously, that's why you were keeping me, a Jinchuriki that just happened to have left this place not even a week ago, out of the sanctuary. Naruto responded in an annoyed tone while keeping just enough control of his arms so he didn't reach over there and slap the idiot. Serious, did Mifune just let anyone join the samurai ranks now? Wasn't there some sort of intelligence test to keep the retards out? The two samurai nervously looked at each other for a moment before the other that hadn't impeded Naruto on his way to the sanctuary stepped forward to help his partner out. I am terribly sorry sir, but you have to get permission from our commanders and show them proof you are what you say. Naruto's hand twitched for his pouch, an action that thankfully went unnoticed by the two samurai, and under a barely veiled control he spoke. I've already have done that just last week. I came here, left before I reminded I left something I needed with Matabi. So I'm going back there one way or another to get what I need, and there isn't a damn thing you can do to stop, because if I can beat Kagami and 6 of Biju when they were possessed, I can surely as hell beat 2 idiot samurai. Okay. He lost control there at the end and nearly went ballistic. He was just thankful he didn't revert to chakra form and wail on the two before they let him back in. Seriously, why did he of all people have to be checked going in? He was Uzumaki Naruto, known vessel of the 9 Tails, and the hero of the 4th Great Shinobi War. Out of all people he should be one of the most recognizable, outside of maybe the Kages, and be led into the Biju Sanctuary after only a light checkup. It wasn't like anyone could truly pose as him. They would have to find a way to mimic Kurama, and that just wasn't going to happen. The samurai guards were now on edge and their hands had reached for their katanas and were ready to draw in case the situation went beyond reach. Honestly, neither felt their chances were good if they were truly dealing with a Jinchuriki, as there was only 3 since 6 Biju were within the sanctum, and prayed they could solve this diplomatically. And that was something Naruto was running thin on. He was supposed to be one of the few allowed in without any real qualms, so how did these two not get the message? One last time, you two. Let me through and I will willingly allow the checkup and prove who I am. Otherwise I'm just going to be the crap out the two of you and go in anyways. Naruto. Stop antagonizing my men. Mifune's voice echoed from behind the gate before it slowly opened and the leader of the Land of Iron stood before him, standing with 2 of his most trusted samurai. Stand down. He is who he says and is allowed to access the sanctum as he pleases. However, the leader of the samurai continued after a short intermission as his gaze focused entirely on the sage. I must ask, why are you here again so soon? You only left a few days ago after checking on how they're settling in this place. There must be a reason for it. Research on a new technique, and it seems I need the help of a specific Biju. Naruto answered honestly without actually telling Mifune what he was truly there for. I was having a discussion with Kurama about the practicality of it and he seemed to agree with me. However, he informed me that the 2 Tails had more information about it and I should address her. And undress her. Kurama's voice echoed in his head, remembering the images of his vessel having some fun with Nibi. God, that woman is gorgeous. How did I never notice that before? Too busy going around and destroying things and then becoming the Uchiha's little bitch. Naruto responded with a mental grin, knowing the onslaught that was about to begin. Go fuck yourself. The 9 Tails roared at his vessel's rip on his past. I'll admit I fell in love with destruction and carnage pretty quickly after Dad passed away, but I was never the Uchiha's toy to play with. I joined them on my own free will before that dick Madara came around and screwed everything up. Got it? Yeah. Believe what you want. Naruto snidely commented, making Kurama roar and go on a diatribe, but unfortunately for him Naruto stopped paying attention and focused back on the real world outside. Thankfully just in time too, as it seemed Mifune had been speaking and he only just caught the tail end of what he was saying. Kind of technique you were working on. I hardly believe that anything drastic would be necessary, as it seems the world is finally at peace, so it leaves me wonder. Just what are you planning? Glad he zoned in just in time and didn't miss something very important. Naruto came up with an excuse quickly to cover his tracks. It's a jutsu that bends space and time, kind of like what Kagami was using, but having the ability to jump further and at an accelerated rate like that of my father's Hiraishin. Kurama mentioned that Matabi had the most knowledge of the Biju on such technique. I was coming to see her for research. Just like you did last time? Mifune raised his eyebrow at the blonde, which left Naruto pale as Orochimaru at the thought someone saw that event, before shaking his head. You could have just said I'm here for what happened last time. Let him through. Seeing the samurai stand to the side of the gates and allow him passage through, the sage blinked as he took the opportunity and walked on through. And as he did, Mifune turned and called for him. Can't wait to see you continue your sensei's legacy. We'll be waiting in anticipation. Naruto only looked back at them slack-jawed for a moment before turning around with a twitch in his eyebrow. Seriously? Does everyone think I'm like Ero Sennin that much? I'm not going to write that kind of trash. And another thing. I only did what they said because those damn eyes had the ability to possess my will. I never did anything Madara or Kagami said on my own free will. I would have killed them then gone on to do those things as they were good ideas. Kurama roared, still on the same rant he was on when Naruto last left on him. And that only made the blonde twitch further. Are you still on about that? Grow a pair and move on, we got work to do. Eat me. After a few hours of arguing with Kurama about the trivial matters of his allegiance to the Uchiha and having a few conversations with Son Goku, Kakuo and Saiken, Naruto finally found himself in the area that Matabi had claimed as her own. The mountain's wall most northern edge. Damn. It has only been a few days since I've been gone and she has really made herself home. Naruto whistled, seeing a giant cave that had been carved into the mountain's wall. She was always a freak when it came to architecture. She loved building and designing things, though she always had difficulty with anything delicate thanks to the fact that she pretty much is a being of fire. Kurama stated, thoroughly impressed by the shape and the old Chinese design of the entrance to her cave and the spiraling pillars that stood on the outside. Only being able to nod, as he knew firsthand that she had difficulty with anything delicate, Naruto walked up to the cave entrance. And as soon as he did, a loud feline roar echoed through the cave before a blue glow began to gleam from the cave's walls and slowly come closer to him. A massive cat of fire soon came into view with one eye yellow, the other green, and glared at the intruder in her den. Just who thinks they can come here, wake me up, not offering me some kind of treat, and thinks they get away with it? Oh, Naruto, I didn't think you would come back so soon. The blue fire that consumed the two tails erupted with great ferocity that scorched the walls of the cave, which Matabi thankfully had designed yet, before the massive burst of flame began to shrink till it was a ball of flames the size of a human before it sputtered out, revealing the two tails' human form. Wearing a ripped-up blue gown that barely covered her assets, which were considerable, the two tails smirked as she brushed the bangs of her long blue hair from her eyes. So Naruto-kun, what brings you back here? Are you here to ravish me once more? Shall I find a good spot? We kind of ruined that last area? No kidding, you didn't understand the concept of slowing down or not so rough. Naruto commented with a slight twitch before a satisfied grin, as it was still all good and his sage form kept him from really getting hurt anyways. And as much as I wish I came back for that, I'm here unfortunately on business and needed to ask you a few questions. Matabi snapped her fingers and meowed pathetically for a moment before placing a hand on her hip and seductively smiling at the sage. Ah, and I so wanted Chome to join us. Oh well, let's get on with it then. What is it that you came to see me for? Naruto's face fell and his eyes bulged at the mere mention of a possibility of a threesome that he just missed out on. And there was only one response that he, and a certain nine-tailed fox, had to say for that. Oh son of a bitch. Nibby only smirked and swayed her hips for a moment before wincing, rubbing her behind. Sorry love, but I'm not going to be able to do that for a while anyways. You were just as rough. Grumbling under his breath at missing out on a golden opportunity, though glad that she was only teasing, Naruto forewent his normal pouting that would have usually followed and looked seriously at the Nekomata. I had a conversation with Kurama yesterday about the possibilities of time travel, and eventually we decided against it before I came up with another idea. Dimensional travel. Matabi caught wind of where this was going before she humanized Cat Demon's side and rubbed her temples. And obviously Kurama led you to me knowing that I have dimensionally traveled a couple of times. And you came here to see if I could help you on your way. Naruto had the decency to sheepishly shrug and scratch the back of his neck. Yeah. Though I wouldn't mind if you just gave me a few pointers so I could create my own portal and... No, Matabi narrowed her off-colored eyes and crossed her arms around her ample chest. I will not teach you a damn thing about interdimensional travel nor will I create the portal for you. What? Naruto hissed out at the demon and narrowed his eyes in a dangerous fashion. Why the hell not? I have nothing to do here anymore other than be courted by the 5 powers and I feel like I can do some good for another world. The 2 tails matched his intense gaze and did not budge from her stance. You have no idea on how dangerous it is travel between dimensions. Not only are there dimensions with beings stronger than the Biju and possibly stronger than even Jubi, the damage the portal causes such strain on the body that it is nearly lethal for even for me, so what do you think it will do to a human body? Every time I have transported myself to another dimension I had to take nearly a year of rest to fully recover from the blow. She continued on the dangers of traveling dimensions. Further, the one time I took Yugito to get away from it all Wait, you took your last vessel between dimensions yet you're adamant I won't make the trip? I fought Yugito and the other vessel and beat them into the ground and you're saying I can't do the same? Naruto immediately jumped on Matabi when she made it clear she had traveled once with her previous vessel. The 2 tails winced as she baited herself there and turned away for a moment to gather herself. Once she did, she turned back and caught Naruto's eye and he immediately noted the look of agony on her face. Yes, I took her to another dimension. However, my chakra alone wasn't enough to protect her and she took serious damage. As soon as we were able to return we did so, but she was never the same. She had lost a quarter of her physical capacity and was never able to fully recover from it. That is why we were easily captured by those 2 bastards, as she overestimated her strength as we were still recovering. And the last thing I want is to lose someone else important to me, and you have indeed become vital to me. Matabi finished with a sorrow-laden voice. You remind me so much of father and it would pain me to lose you due to something that I could have prevented. Naruto was silent. He was kind of shocked by the display of caring the 2 tails was showing him, and he hadn't thought that their fling a few days ago had been all that meaningful. And now it was obvious that it was for her and he felt like an ass since it wasn't for him. To make this all worse, it seemed like now it was impossible for him to travel to other dimensions without some serious side effects, and he wasn't looking forward to that. Matabi. I'm sorry, I didn't. Excuse me. Giant Fox has something to say, Kurama blurted out, ignoring his fellow Biju's plight and his vessel's sentimental response. I can easily elude those problems for a couple of reasons. 1. My chakra is more potent and as such thicker than hers and better able to shield you. 2. You have your own considerable chakra reservoir and added on with natural chakra you can shield yourself from the strain from the travel. And finally 3. You are an Uzumaki. They are known for their extreme luck, demon-like vitality and the ability to make the impossible become reality. With those 3 factors you will feel very little side effects and will be mostly okay. If anything, I'll be the one that takes the brunt of damage and you are more than capable of handling yourself. And you would still have what was left of my chakra to use afterwards anyways if things got too out of hand. Kurama finished with his explanation on why Naruto would be safe during interdimensional travel. Of course, while Naruto heard this he was pretty irate at the fox's response to his sister's plight. Kurama, you jerk. Matabi is spill her heart out and tells us why she doesn't want us to go and you are. No. He's actually right. I didn't add in those factors. Matabi interrupted Naruto's rant towards her brother, shaking her head in the process and ignoring the stunned look on Naruto's face. There is still a slight risk, but that fatality of the trip is diminished considerably by those factors which gives you an edge even I didn't have. However, this all revolves around Kurama's cooperation, so we might be boned as there is probably something he wants. Damn right. Go in the back with Dingus here and go at it. Until that happens I am not helping in this endeavor, especially since it will be my ass on the line if it does. The 9 tails bellowed, wanting to see some good action before being out of it for a considerable amount of time, or so it was seeming. Kurama, you sick bastard. She's your sister. That's like incest. Naruto yelled back at the fox, somewhat grossed out by the fact that the demon didn't seem to care that she was literally his family. Oh come on. Every single clan in the world practices it to keep their blood strong. Kurama countered Naruto's weak argument and added more to seal the deal. And anyways, we're beings of chakra. We have no blood and therefore have no blood relations. And even though we are all connected together by Jubi, that doesn't mean we're sibling. Seeing no way he could really counter that argument, or really wanting to, Naruto turned to Matabi and blinked at her. He's got a good point there. He does. He was always logical in his ideas, just never in their execution, which explains why he was the first to be sealed out of all of us. Matabi nodded in agreement, which of course inflamed Kurama further, and he started cursing at the two only for it to stop immediately on a few words. "Well, let's do this," Matabi stated before grabbing Naruto by his armor and dragging him into the back of the cave to get it over with. Not that Naruto had any problem with that. "Take these." Matabi handed Naruto two massive scrolls while managing to cover her body with a blanket and not revealing an inch of skin. "While you were out, I drew the seals onto those scrolls. You won't see much difference in the two, however the small difference is one I labeled home will return you here without fail. The other will take you to another dimension, though which I'm not sure, as it is rather random." Nodding for a moment, stretching the stiffness out of his joints, Naruto sealed away the home scroll into his body before looking puzzled. "Wait, why is it random yet you were able to make one to return home?" "The seal has a portion that requires the insignia of that world to be placed within it, and I know of this world's symbol, so I was able to create a portal back. However, what I did learn was that if you leave it blank is that it acts as a randomizer and will send you to any dimension that has connections to this world." Matabi explained the creation of the return seal. Naruto nodded in understanding. "So all I would need to return back to that world would be the symbol of that world? Alright, I might want to learn that to help start labeling the other worlds for you." The two tails smiled at that and nodded in return. "That would be wonderful. During my times in the few worlds I journeyed across, I was never able to label them outside of what the world looked like. Now, I have a few requests I would like to make of you before you go," Matabi stated as Naruto unraveled the scroll that would send him to a new world, stopping him in the process and turning his attention back to her. "Number 1. I want you back within 5 years to make sure you are alright, otherwise I'm just going to jump world to world until I can find you. As I said, you are important to me and I damn well am not going to take it well if you die from interdimensional travel. Number 2. Do not reveal too much of what you are capable of until you are sure you can. Some of these worlds or powers could be considered threatening and it could cause you to be hunted before you were able to return home. And finally, my last request. There was a world I once visited that had vampires twinkled in the sunlight. If you end up in that world, kill every single one of them with no remorse. They're disgrace to true vampires everywhere, and the multiverse will be much better off without them. So kill them, no matter who nice and good-natured they seem. They don't deserve to exist." Up until the third request, Naruto thought that they were very reasonable requests. Hell, he hadn't planned on being away for more than a year really, but if it took Kurama more time to recover, then he would stay a little longer. And of course he was going to stay on the down low as best as he could. He didn't want to have to answer any bothersome questions. Ignoring that Shikamaru-like remark there, Naruto owlishly blinked at Matabi for a few moments before just deciding to nod. "Alright, I will. Thank you. Now take care. Brother, one tail is all that is needed. The rest will be needed to shield my little sage." Matabi smiled before informing Kyuubi just how much chakra was needed to perform the act. However, Naruto simply twitched at the very end of her statement. Did she just claim possession of me? Consider that a good thing and leave it be. Kurama mumbled to his Jinchuriki before taking control of his chakra, which was in Naruto's possession, and began to charge it. "Are you ready, brat? I want to get this on the road already. There's loot to plunder." Giving the two tails a wave goodbye, Naruto stood at the center of the seal and mentally nodded to the fox. "Alright, let's get this show on the road." And golden aura burst around Naruto as he activated chakra mode, and exactly one tail of chakra flowed from his feet and into the seal, which in turn began to glow a bright gold, and runes spread out from the seal and made a massive array on the ground. Numerous baseball-sized balls of multicolored light began to flutter from the seal wrap around Naruto, while the golden aura of the seal began to flare upwards in a magnificent display as it slowly closed in onto Naruto and finally enveloped him. And in a brilliant burst of dazzling light, it was like Naruto was never there in the first place. It had worked, and Naruto currently traveling to a new world. It was in that very instant Matabi frowned. Never once when she activated the seal had it acted like that before. Everything was normal up until the energy balls began to shower the seal array. That never once happened to her, and that made her very, very nervous. Something happened, but she was sure that seal had not gone wrong. "It seems like you were right, Naruto-kun. Something was calling you. Another world needs you and has brought you to it." Matabi gazed at the spot Naruto possessed only moments before. "I just hope you will be okay there for a while. I need to tell the others about this disturbing development. We may be needed there too. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 2. A quick update, which I know you will be happy with, and now I can actually focus onto the crossover portion of the story, though I might have a few scene shifts to return back to the Narutoverse to check on what the others are doing. And while I'm still playing around with the small harem scenario, Matabi will part of it, and as of now I'm going with Yuna. It might just stop there, or I might just one other kid, but no more than that. If that doesn't work, it will be Naruto paired with Matabi. Also, I might change the second filter from suspense to comedy, as it seems more and more that the later will be more pronounced as the story goes on, but I'll wait until I'm sure. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and now for some more enjoyment, an omake. Omake. Oh god. What just hit me? Naruto complained in a groan, laying on what seemed to be a bed and not 100% sure on what just happened or where the hell he was. Hey there, are you alright? A feminine voice called out to him before someone lightly shook him. Oh great. This dumb broad is yelling in my ear and I have a damn migraine. Naruto winced in pain as her voice echoed through his head, causing his brain to rumble in agony. How would you not do that? Why are you twinkling? He finally yelled out and stopped the woman from shaking him before opening his eyes to see a young woman, not much older than he was, with brown hair that just happened to be sparkling like the rest of her in the light coming from the window. Blinking at his odd question, the young woman sighed in relief. Oh good. You're all right. Edward, he's up and seems to be doing fine. Hearing the door open, he turned to see a rather dashing man, if he had to say so himself, with a rather stupid haircut, that negate his attractiveness by a few points, and walk over him with relief written on his face. That's a relief to hear. What happened to you? You dropped out of nowhere while I was out on my midnight stroll. Seeing him walk into the light and seeing him sparkle like the woman, Naruto simply blinked at this situation before coming up with an excuse. Fell out of the sky. Now why are you twinkling like that? Odd. I can feel you have intense energy within you, but you don't know what we are? Edward stated in confusion, having sensed that this young man before him held a great deal of power. Maybe you have amnesia, for I seriously doubt that someone with the energy you radiate wouldn't know about vampires. Vampires? I thought they... Oh son of... Really, is my luck that bad? Naruto started out confused, as from what he knew of vampires they burned to death in sunlight, before he finally remembered Matabi's final request. So withdrawing a kunai from one of his storage seals, just in case anyone had disarmed him of his pouch or he just lost it, he quickly and without hesitation slit Edward's throat. Sorry about this. Orders from the wife. Edward. Bella cried out before her throat was cut open just as Edward's. Again sorry. Just follow orders. Naruto apologized before wiping the kunai on the sheets. Well, better get rid of the evidence and burn their corpses. Who knows if they can regenerate or not. Kaden. Gokakyu. Naruto blew a stream of fire into the room, catching everything within it on fire, before jumping out of the window and slowly making his way away from their apartment. Man. Why did it have to be this world? Kill vampires is all and good, but I just feel kind of bad about this. They did help me. Oh well. People do crazy things for love. Naruto chirped and walked away from the crime scene, not hearing the cries of a young child coming from the burning house. In a desolate and windy desert with unforgiving heat that bore down onto the seemingly never-ending sands, a mysterious and golden glow began to form, mid-air mind you, between the massive dunes. Then in an eruption of light that emanated far beyond the horizon, one Uzumaki Naruto screamed out with Kyuubi's golden chakra surrounding his and plummeted the 20 to 30 feet distance and smack face first into the shifting sands. And there for a few minutes the said sage moaned in agony, and mostly because of the fall and not so much because of the travel. Kurama had been completely correct in his assumptions that he would be mostly fine outside of a few muscle aches and a splitting headache. Though he wasn't sure the later didn't come from the collision with the ground. He reminded himself to get back at Matabi for that one. She didn't warn him at all that there would be a fall afterwards. And because of that sudden stop, Naruto groaned out before finally sitting upright and releasing his chakra mode so that he could conserve on Kyuubi's chakra for later use. And speaking about the fox. Hey Fuzz Bucket, you okay? Naruto tenderly asked his tenant, stressing the fuzz bucket part to annoy the Biju a little more. Eat. Me. Was the only response he got from Kurama, and that was after a full moment of waiting for his response. This actually did make him worry and had him meditate to enter his mind to see how the fox was doing. And needless to say, he was surprised to see Kurama laboring like he was and seeming so taxed. Whoa. That took a lot more out of you than either of us thought. No. Shit. Sherlock. Kurama labored and fought off his weariness to stay awake long enough to get the point across to his vessel. I'm gonna beat Matabi ass. For this was more taxing than I thought. You're telling me? Looks like you just got hit with multiple meteors and then lost a race around the world to Bushibrow Sr. 7 times. Naruto stated the obvious with a slightly bemused smile. For once Kurama didn't immediately fire back a retort and simply growled at his incompetent vessel for a moment. But as the fatigue grew and he found it ever more difficult to stay awake, he had to break his growl and actually speak. I'm out of time. I'm tired and it is going to take a while for me to recover. You're on your own, kid. Kyuubi finished with the last of his strength before his head slipped to the floor with the rest of his body and passed out. And for once Naruto was actually surprised. There had to be a massive amount of strain to wear the fox down like this. He was out cold, which was confirmed by a chakra-enhanced kick to the muzzle, and surprising Kurama didn't lash out at him for that, and didn't seem like he would recovering anytime soon. Coming out of his trance and exerting his still sore muscles, Naruto stretched a little before a small curse escaped his lips. Well. Shit. This is gonna be a little more difficult than I thought. Does this place ever end? Naruto screamed out to the world in the middle of the Beacon Desert, not that he knew that was where he was currently lost at this exact moment, hoping that anyone heard him, took him from this hellish nightmare. Of course no one did, as this author ignored his star and decided to forsake him for just a while longer, and he had to begrudgingly tread on forward, hoping that he would at least come to the end soon. There had to be an end to this seemingly unending desert. Right? Oh Kami. Please don't tell me I'm in a world that isn't nothing but a forsaken desert that just stretch on forever and ever. What next? Monsters that have white masks on their face that can only use the spiritual energy? Naruto complained to himself despite getting tired that he had no one to talk. I miss Kurama. At least then I would have some form of communication with someone, even if he is telling to go fuck myself the majority of the time. He added as he started talking to himself, losing what was left of already slim sanity. And doesn't it seem like all of this just all too convenient? Naruto stopped in his place to continue on his rant to you, the readers, without even knowing you existed. I just happened to be talking to myself, slowly trudging away to nothingness, when instead I could be running at ninja speed to see if there was an edge or at least some sort of beast that I could kill and scavenge food off of. Just as he was beginning to learn the truth of my existence, the earth conveniently began to shake just in the nick of time to bring Naruto's focus to something that actually mattered. Okay. Not good. Earthquake, and I'm in a desert with dunes taller than Gamabunta. This could be tricky. Naruto muttered to himself, ready to take on this next challenge as the sands shifted all around him and seemed like they were about to collapse. But instead collapsing in on themselves, or worse, onto him, they instead began slowly trickle down in a diagonal pattern in several different spots. It was almost as if they were being parted by a massive being, or a couple of beings at that. Narrowing his eyes and preparing for battle by draw for a kunai, Naruto began to draw upon the natural chakra of this world. His eyes suddenly widened as he felt a rush of energy far more potent than that of what he was used to, with mixture of something else that he couldn't quite put his finger on. There was something else mixed into this world's energy. Now the question was what it was, and why did it seem to give him an extra power boost? He wasn't complaining about it, just felt off, and that was a feeling he didn't like. He could no longer focus on the weird rush he was feeling as two skeleton-like creatures, which possessed one arm on the side not facing the other, that wore red body armor on the shoulders and heads, pushed their way through the sands. And due to having bad deals with things that were recently resurrected, Naruto just decided that these things meant to cause him harm. Without hesitation, Naruto let out a battle cry and threw his kunai that quickly multiplied into hundreds after a few hand seals. To Naruto's great relief, and some alarm, most of the kunai did their job and cut open the skeleton on the right and broke a few bones in the process, but on the left they all just simply bounced off, even the ones that made contact to bone. Now he wasn't one to say how dense an armor and bone was on the left side, but when it could take a kunai thrown by him and bounce it like it was nothing, that was damn good armor. He would have to craft a chestplate of that after he was finished taking these two. Then he noted that their bottom portions of their bodies were still sunk into the sand and that they had no legs. His first reasonable thought was to think they were some sort of lamia-like creature, however he quickly threw that idea out. These guys weren't slithering out of the sands. They were being pushed out. Just what in the hell was that strong to push these two massive things out of several tons of sand? His answer was thankfully answered as a loud roar bellowed beneath the sand and full body emerged from the sand dune, completely destroying it and showering the sage fighting for his life. The creature was massive in size and its main body was composed of whatever that armor was, which Naruto had to guess was actually skin now, and the two skeleton warrior just happened to be hands. Quite massive hands, but still hands nonetheless. And the two arms reached to an end, almost seemingly connect to only a massive torso, but he could just see the figure of what seemed to be a body of human-like entity fused into the torso, which was probably the head. Oh son of. Just when I knew Kurama to match something of this size. It's fucking gigantic. Naruto yelled out at the top of a dune, managing to escape the shower of sand that nearly filled the ditch he had been in earlier. However, he regained his sense of pride and a certain glint gleamed from eyes as he gazed at the Angra Mainyu. Well, there's that old say. The bigger they're, the harder they fall. Let's go wild. Diving off the dune, he quickly righted himself after gaining enough velocity and applied chakra to his feet to stick to the sand, a difficult feat due to that sand wasn't the most stable of ground, and rushed the rest of the length at an accelerated speed. Hitting the bottom, a large impact smoke cloud from the sand, but was immediately divided as he blasted out of it faster than the eye could see. And that was just what the colossal fiend saw and wasn't able to react until it was too late. Naruto was already on it. Ignoring the arms straight up, having a feeling that they were just in the way, he went for the head of the creature to finish the fight quickly. And he did. He sliced into deeply, nearly severing the head of the head, with a quick drawn kunai. However, to Naruto's shock, that the fiend only screamed out before sensing the static in the air. Using a quick replacement, thankful that he could still draw upon a log somehow, an immense lightning bolt struck and charred the log, yet left the head of the creature relatively unharmed. However, he had no time to adjust this into his next move of attack, as the skeleton on the right moved much quicker than Naruto had expected and swung its only fist in a sweep. Being a small and quick target, Naruto was able to avoid with quick dodge roll, but only by the skin of pants. Landing in a crouch, he was already finishing the hand seals to return the favor as he finished with the Torah seal. Kaden. Goenku. Breathing out a superheated stream of fire, it quickly began to gather into a vast ball that seemed to further intensify its own heat and become almost pink hue as it barreled down and onto Angraminyu. The creature didn't seem fast at all and was not able to avoid the blast, and now that he got a good vantage point, it hadn't even attempted to dodge and allowed itself to be enveloped. It was like it knew the flames weren't enough to kill, or even harm it. And Naruto immediately went with the later as the flames dispersed around the enormous fiend before he felt an intense pressure build around him. It reminded him of the feeling of being caught by Shinra Tensei. He used yet another replacement, thanking the seemingly unlimited supply of logs that came to his aid, and avoided the gravitational attack the enemy had used. It was spherical in shape, but it had just appeared where he happened to be. It was as if it was auto-locked on the spot he had been at moments before. There was also the fact that he hadn't noticed the fiend activate such a technique or give any clues to it outside of a growl it echoed just moments before he was nearly crushed. And he had to admit, being able to have a technique he could create anywhere in the immediate vicinity was a difficult move to counter and avoid. However, he would be able to not only avoid them but take this thing down. He was Uzumaki Naruto, badass shinobi extraordinaire. Planning out his next attack, Naruto waited for Angraminyu to make its move. A counterattack would be his best option at the moment, as it would give him another view and just how this thing attack and give him just one more advantage. And it finally seemed to attack, but not in the way he expected. An aura began to form around the left skeleton, somewhat similar to that of someone flaring their chakra around them wildly like he tended to do in order to intimidate his opponents. He noticed the air become cooler around him. Easily being able to jump away in time, he took note of the giant chunks of ice crystal that formed where he was before. It seemed as if the left arm was capable of elemental attacks, though ice was definitely a difficult elemental to control, and he had to figure it had charged just as he attacked the main body and used the lighting attack. Drawing a few shuriken from his pouch, he enhanced his throw with chakra, and the shuriken sailed through the air and multiplied like they had before after another replication usage. And just like his kunai before, those on the left skeleton simply bounce off while the rest ripped into the flesh of the main body and the right arm. And by seeing that, he drew a conclusion that bothered him. It seems like the left arm is immune to physical damage. But let's see how well it will take my shuriken imbued with wind chakra. Taking out a few more, he repeated his last action while imbuing his wind nature along the ninja stars and tossed them at the fiend as it closed the distance between them. This time the results were a little more surprising. This time the left skeleton was cut into by his nature-powered shuriken, and it seemed the main body had the same problem too, not that it horribly affected it in the first place. The real surprise came in that his shuriken bounced to the right skeleton like they had been doing to the left. Oh, you got to be kidding. One arm immune to physical attacks, the other immune to chakra attacks. Naruto complained to no one in particular before evading the right skeleton as it swung for him again and going through a quick mantra of seals. Futon. Daitopa. A gale of monstrous wind blasted the fiend a few goods yards from Naruto, allowing him to jump back and formulate a plan of attack against this creature. Okay. He's a lot like Pain in the fact that he can block my attacks, only instead this guy uses his arms to do it. I guess I'm going to have to treat this guy in a similar fashion. Preparing to act accordingly and ready to form a few clones to run off to focus on natural chakra in case he needed more, Naruto suddenly saw the air pulse around the head of the fiend. Wondering just what it was up to, he couldn't help but be surprised when he saw it simply disappear before his eyes. Genjutsu. Naruto uttered in horror at seeing such a massive creature cloak itself, but soon found that his answer was wrong, and this time he had no forewarning. The sand beneath him turned blood red, and in a second flat multiple pockets flames erupted around him, catching him and engulfing Naruto in concentrated and superheat bursts of fire. He was only able to barely shield his arms before his face, as there was no time to dodge, nor was there a chance to replace himself with another log. He took the full brunt of the attack, and it packed quite a punch. Once the flames stopped and the dust cleared, Naruto grunted as he stood back to his feet as he was knocked back and off his feet from the force of the bursts. Patting out any residual flames, he immediately caught sight of the creature again, and it was right where it was before, only the right arm was breathing out some sort of toxic mist. Covering his mouth and nose, Naruto leapt from his spot and did not inhale until he was well clear of the mist that had almost enshrouded him. Creating multiple clones and sending a few to safety to charge for extra natural chakra, he held out his hand above him and prepared for one of his most powerful jutsu. His clones assisted, and the orb filled with wind chakra began to take its shuriken shape. Taking careful aim and noting that the left arm was glowing and was most likely preparing another elemental attack. Knowing he probably wouldn't taking the hit this time, he focused on taking care of this fight once and for all. And with a roar he tossed the chakra shuriken just as a lightning burst hit him seconds after the toss, destroying his clones in the process. Rasenshuriken. The deadly attack cut through the air like butter, with the slight buzzing sound filling the air as it closed in on the feminine body in the middle. Yet as soon as it neared, the left arm lashed out and sacrificed itself to protect the body. However, the Rasenshuriken did its job, and in an explosion of severe wind it eviscerated the skeleton and nearly disintegrated it in the process. And the fiend screamed in torment as its arm would never be able to be used again. Throwing off the lighting attack as if it was nothing, Naruto charged forward with a Rasengan glowing in his right hand. The right arm swung for him, impeding his path chakra-powered kick. He knocked it back and then flung himself to the heart of the beast and slammed the orb into the feminine body. While the Rasengan tore into and did brutal damage, it still was not enough, and it was obvious that he was going to have to hit it a few more times, if not a lot more, to finish this bastard off. But before he could do so, the skeleton arm was not finished, and its one hand managed to grab a hold of Naruto and toss him to the side. Skidding across the sand, Naruto punched his hand into the shifting sands to stop his tumbling and created a small trench in the process. Keeping a good eye on the Angra Mainyu, he knew what he had to do. The first thing he was going to have to do was take out the other arm so he could focus on taking out this fiend. Almost covering his ears as the fiend screeched again, Naruto was able to pick up a large mass of people on the horizon due to his sensory thanks to the sage chakra. He grinned at this, knowing that these people, hopefully, were chasing this thing, or at the very least coming to investigate what caused the earthquake. Of course there was the worst case scenario where they viewed this thing as a god, and then he could be in more trouble, but he would deal with that only if turned out that way. He rather believed the best case scenario, as it made him feel just tiny bit better. Keeping an mental eye on them as they approached, Naruto reached into his pouch and drew out 2 kunai with explosive tags connected. Again he charged forward towards the fiend, but this time he focused on the arm. Barreling through a green mist that suddenly condensed before him, holding his breath and closing his eyes as he did, he saw his target in his mind's eye and lunged for it. And he drove the kunai into the rib cage of the skeleton before using a chakra-enhanced push to leap off just in time as they exploded, shredding the rib cage and absolutely decimating the arm. However, it was still intact, but he sensed the life draining from the arm, which was extremely odd. It was almost as if the skeletons had their own life forces and were simply connected to the other portion, and that was a little creepy to Naruto. Landing in a crouch, skidding only a few feet, Naruto grinned. This was a little easier than taking out Pain, but then again, now that he had a good plan against something with similar defensive abilities, it wasn't really surprising. All he had to do now was charge another Rasenshuriken, and that would be all that was wrote. What the? Naruto felt as if the sand was about to erupt in fire again, and he was right, but it was much different than last time. A single pillar of fire erupted and caught Naruto's left arm as he moved to avoid it. Grimacing and yelling out in pain was about the most he could do outside of falling to his knees and smothering his arm into the sand, trying to put out the flames. However, he forgot a key composition in sand was salt. So it was literally putting salt in the burnt wounds, making the pain 2 times as extreme as before, and he couldn't help but curse. Motherfucker. Taking his arm out of the sand, he grimaced at sight of his charred arm. That was going to take a little time to recover from, and since there are fights still going, he couldn't use his hand seals any longer without intense pain. And he knew that because he attempted to make a seal only to let another curse. Rauget. A voice echoed over a loud, mechanical roar as what seemed to be a hovercraft, followed by dozens more, swooped into the area before the man who called out to him, a bald man with an odd tattoo on his skull, jumped from the hovercraft along with a few armed guards and rushed to his aid. Rauget, Hot Kusarab. Seeing a mass of people there brought his spirits up, however he frowned. He did not understand a word that they said and part of him just wanted to slap his face in annoyance. Of course there was going to be a language barrier and of course he didn't think about that before he came here. He also didn't think a creature that could actually push him, though he would be the first to admit he didn't have a clue on its abilities and therefore made it a tad more difficult, to this extent would exist here either. However, Matabi did state there were even creatures more powerful than Jubi in the others' worlds. Damn it. My luck is turning for the worst. Naruto muttered as he pushed himself to his feet and glared at the fiend before him, that was now being hit by small projectiles fired from the weapons the people that came to his aid were wielding. I find myself lost in this forsaken desert, get attacked by this asshole and then I can't understand a word the people say here. I want to go home already. Sorry, forget most people don't speak our language, the man suddenly said, catching Naruto's attention, who nearly snapped his neck, turning his head to him. Let's get you out of here. That arm needs to be treated. It's fine for now. I need to get rid of this damn thing. Naruto grunted before managing to form the hand seals to create 2 more shadow clones before lifting his right arm above him once more. Now that the arms is finished, he can't stop this attack again. Forming yet another Rasenshuriken to the amazement of all of the albed there, never having seen a magic like this before. However, the bald man only nodded. Heck, our bullets are doing anything to that big sucker. If you can finish him here, take him the fuck out. Ent. It's a her actually. And I'm going to. Naruto corrected the leader of the group on the creature's gender, as he found that out up close, before grunting and tossing the slicing sphere again. This is the end. Rasenshuriken. Once more the Rasenshuriken whirled through the air, cutting through the air at almost record speed if Naruto ever kept track of such a thing, and had almost reached Angra Mainyu when the least likely thing happened. It threw its already dead right arm before it, and against all of Naruto's luck it was still immune to chakra and absorbed the blow like it was nothing. And Naruto's response was completely natural for one in that situation. Go fuck yourself. It can still absorb my attacks. That was one of my better shots and you fucking absorb it, go to hell. Without realizing he could, as normally he was only able to use 2 shurikens before his nature chakra was drained, he formed yet another and ran in closer this time, ignoring the bullets whizzing by and doing practically no damage to the fiend while occasionally scrapping him. And with the last of its might it swung its dead arm, but Naruto jumped past its final defense and landed on the elbow of the arm. I said this is the end, and with a powerful toss the Rasenshuriken this time hit its mark and Naruto once more used the power of the log to avoid taking sure damage as his technique did its job and eviscerated and obliterated the main body of the Angra Mainyu. And as the destructive buzz saw like winds came to an end, the same strange rainbow-colored orbs that he saw during the activation of the seal poured from the body of the creature, floating away in the sky as what was left of the corpse vanished from the sands. At his vantage point, a little away from the hovercrafts, Naruto frowned at this sight. Something was wrong about that. Its body just disappeared and there was no explanation as to why it did that. There was a lot of strange things about this world, and he was going to figure them out as he wasn't going to be going anywhere for a while. And as the man that saved him jogged towards after catching sight of the injured sage, Naruto knew one thing. This is gonna be one wild ride. It was taking longer than he expected to recover from the wounds the Angra Mainyu, or so what the few people that could speak his language had called the fiend, inflicted upon him. Of course his arm was heavily burnt and was almost as bad as when he first used the Rasenshuriken without throwing it, but still. He was used to healing quickly. Considering that Kurama was out for the count and going to be down for a while, Naruto figured that the slow recovery speed of his arm had to deal with that. The fox was responsible for his near regeneration during the heat of the moment, and while he never really questioned his own healing rate, he always had a feeling the fox had his paw imprinted somewhere on it. There was a time that the doctors looking after him had thought his arm was too far gone and they needed to remove it, but he was having none of that. In fact, he had learned just enough of their language to say, "The hell you will take my arm," but hadn't learned to say anything else outside of yes and no. He didn't care that they had a plan to implant a Machina arm outfitted with some weapons that he would most likely adore. He liked his arm. It had been good to him for years, especially on long, lonely nights. And unfortunately the pain medication they had given him was starting to wear off and his arm still felt nearly unbearable. If it wasn't for years and years of undergoing intense training along physical stress and pain, he knew he would be able to deal with it. It also helped that he took a few vials of the pain's meds they were giving him and a syringe to inject it himself. So after taking a moment to take care of that problem, Naruto left the room against the orders of all the nurses and doctors there to go find this Sid, the guy that helped him out after, and technically during, his battle against the powerful fiend. He wasn't the type to sit around and wait when there were things to be done and questions to be answered. Finding his way through the massive building these people called home, occasionally getting lost due to dead ends and getting distracted by the occasional treasure chest that was oddly left out, Naruto found his way to where he could sense Sid and made his way into what he guessed was his office. Thankfully it was, and not a bedroom, as he noted that the man was twitching as he dealt with a massive amount of paperwork on his desk. He also noted a young girl with blonde hair that was braided in certain areas and wearing a similar red and yellow outfit of what most albeds wore. However, she wasn't his main concern as he came to speak to Sid. There were a few things he needed to learn before he headed out again. Excuse. ZICD fro dra p muto ram ec drana cusyo by bank vun sa du tame feder. Sid cursed the papers in his native language and seemed ready to set them all on fire, possibly the room just so he could get out of doing the papers that he seemingly was forced being done. And his paperwork slave driver tapped her foot and twitched at the man's annoying reaction yet seemed to sigh as if this was a normal occurrence. Palyitsa vidran, wynaymfyoc nihek uvv duku tu kuzadrek yht majaween tidiak ihyd data. E2 hud nihuvv, drana ynazicd tekluyaniak eys hatat du yd dot, eyszicd vumufek so tidiak yc matan. Sid furiously refuted and yelled back at the blonde girl, denying whatever it was that she had convicted him of. The said woman sighed and shrugged her shoulders and flailed her arms in an exacerbating manner before seemingly giving up. Fridagen we cyo bbc. Watching with a bemused smile at the two hold a conversation, Naruto had to admit even though he didn't know what they were saying he understood quite well what was going on through their body language. It almost reminded him of Tsunade and Shizune's interactions with one another when the latter was drunk and didn't understand why she had so much work to do. Frowning as the thought of the former Hokage came up, he shook his head. That was the entire reason he wanted to jump dimensions in the first place. He wanted to get away from it all for a while and be his own man without having to deal with Konoha. Pushing those thoughts aside, the sage coughed to draw attention away from this comical exchange between the two and to the reason why he was here. If you wouldn't mind putting aside your bickering for a moment. Oh. The girl was the first to verbally speak, startled by Naruto's presence, before noticing that his arm was still in its cast. Shouldn't you still be in the hospital wing? Your arm was badly damaged. It's mostly fine. Naruto lied through his teeth as he still had to take painkillers to numb the pain away. In fact, it has been recovering slower than it normally does. I truthfully have done worse than this to my arm before. I just naturally heal at an accelerated rate. The girl only frowned. She felt he was lying on his condition, having years of practices of knowing when her brother and father were lying, yet she knew he was telling the truth about his recovery rate. So just what in the world was this guy? A wound like that on anyone she knew and they would have had to amputate the arm, yet here he was standing before her, only on pain meds, and seemed relatively normal and healthy individual. There was something wrong about that picture. Glad to see you're up and about. Good on you. Sid jumped from his seat, glad to get away from the work he was forced to be doing, and patted the young sage on his non-injured arm's shoulder. You must be one heck of a warrior to fight off that thing and still be walking around with that kind of injury, kid. If you were old enough I'd buy you a drink. Technically I am old enough to drink by my home standards, so you can still do so. Our warrior class is viewed as adults no matter what age they're officially accepted. Naruto explained as he wouldn't mind a drink or two at the very moment. He just reminded himself to keep his drinking mild. He didn't want to end up like Jiraiya or worse, Tsunade. Again falling into a moment of depression thinking about the two of them, for two entirely separate reasons, he easily shook those away memories before getting to the actual reason he was here. However, before he could, Sid had cut him off with a hearty laugh. Haha. I like you already, boy. Oh, I forgot to introduce you too. This is my daughter. Takes after me, she does. The hell I do. Riku exploded at her father, indigent at the very mention of being grouped in the same category as her old man, before turning to Naruto and removing her mask and chirped. Riku's the name. If you have a problem with mechanics or need some top quality weapons, I'm your gal. Naruto. And I'll keep that in mind. Naruto introduced himself and made a mental note to see how good the quality of Riku's weapons actually were before finally getting to why he was there. Now, I left the hospital bay in order to come speak with you. There are a few things I need to know as I am not familiar with these lands. Not familiar. Riku raised an eyebrow at his choice of words before rolling her eyes, realizing that he was used to the desert. Oh right. Not many people know about Bikanel, so it is understandable. I'm sure we can get you back to the mainland soon enough. That isn't what I meant, and I'm sorry if I led you that. Naruto stopped her in her tracks, seeing that she misunderstood what he was asking. I meant I don't know anything about this place. Or the mainland. I am not from this world and I would like to know more about before heading out into it so I don't get caught into something over my head." Both Sid and Riku gasped and were taken aback by this startling revelation. Riku even tripped over her own 2 feet, barely keeping enough balance to not fall over, and Sid simply took a step back. Sighing and shaking his head, knowing that telling anyone that he is an alien, by the definition the word anyways, would be a frightening experience to endure if not unbelievable for anyone, he waited until they at least settled down before explaining. "Whether you believe it or not, I came here from another dimension as my world is finally at peace, yet I still feel there is good to be done left out in the multiverse. I came here to help people like I did back home and to lead them to a better tomorrow. And as I have been sensing over the past couple of days, this world is in desperate turmoil, yet I don't know why. Everything feels off here and it seems to me that something massive is about to erupt. That is why I need to know what is going on here so that I may be able to help." Naruto finished in a calm and collected tone, conveying that what he was speaking was the truth and he was there to help. Of course it was a little too much to simply accept and believe he was telling the truth, and while his demeanor seemed to indeed convey that he wanted to help, there was just something fishy about it. It seemed like something a supervillain would say after transporting themselves to another world. Not that either of them met any supervillains that had done such a thing, or met a supervillain at that. Seeing that they still weren't buying it, but had not yet regained the ability to speak, Naruto groaned and rubbed his temple in an attempt to find a way to actually convince them. Then with a snap of his fingers he knew of just one way to do it. "To show you I am not here for some world conquest or some other greedy purpose, I will give you something very precious," Naruto stated before drawing a massive scroll out of a seal from his injured arm, another reason why he didn't want it to be amputated, and laid it on Sid's desk. "Inside that scroll there happens to be the only means for me to return home. I will let you hold it until I can prove you of my worth to you." "What?" Sid was actually stunned before opening the scroll to see a palette of runes stretched amongst the paper before gazing back at the blonde warrior. "Why would you do such a thing to prove yourself? To give up your way back home?" "Well, the first reason is easy. Only I can use it, so I have no worries about anyone else doing so as they don't have the means or the knowledge to activate it," Naruto answered honestly, as there was no real reason to fear anyone using it. "And it shows that I'm willing to give up whatever it takes to help people in need, just like I gave up on my greatest dream to save my own world and bring forth the calm." After being shell-shocked yet again by the surprising sage, Sid could only shake his head and mutter as he slumped into his chair. "The calm. How long have I waited for a true calm to be bestowed on these lands? To hear those words of someone willing to step up and to sacrifice everything." Braska. Riku moved to her father's side to comfort him after hearing her uncle-in-law's name, the man that left a considerable impression on her father whether he liked to admit it or not, Vidran. "Kid." Sid spoke up before rolling the scroll back up and rolled it towards the edge of his desk to give it back. "I'm not sure if you will be able to do anything to help. But I'm willing to hear you out and tell you all I know, as I'm desperate. I don't want to lose any more than what I already have. So let's start from the beginning. 1,000 years ago, as the Great War raged between Bevel and Zanarkand. It was a bloody war, one that still has left this world scarred from the battles. It seemed that there was no end in sight, and no matter who won, it was going to be Pyrrhic at best, when a great being of immense power arose from the conflict. It obliterated Zanarkand in one night and began its reign of terror. Sin was born and this world would never be the same again. It was a horrible story, that Naruto was sure of. This Sin entity just seemed unstoppable. And even when it was stopped at the hands of the High Summoners, who lost their lives in the conflict, it only gave the people of the world a brief moment of peace, as then in a few years Sin was reborn and began its unending spiral of death. Yet there were also many inconsistencies to the story as well, and he couldn't help but notice them. The main religion that governed the land as the law had outright forbade almost every kind of machina, with just only a few exceptions, like this so-called blitzball sphere, so that the people may drown their sorrows in watching in some sort of underwater sport. But they made sure that high-powered guns, helper droids and other machines like them were outlawed when they were just simply tools. It was the wielder of the tools that decided how they were used, and he wasn't even going to get into the fact that the Yevon forces seemed to break those same laws for their own benefit. Damn corrupt politicians. But there was also other things that just did not seem to add up. One was why the summoner that defeated Sin was killed by their final Eon no matter what. Why would something that they summoned and gained control of turn on them after the battle was finished and kill them? Was there some sort of contract that Yevon did not allow the summoners to know of? That he didn't know, but he was sure they were withholding vital information, and that was a critical element he needed to investigate. And yet another was that seemingly all historical records vanished or were in the possession of Yevon yet not released to the public. It was general rule of thumb that humanity was bound to repeat the past if they had no knowledge of it. It took 4 great ninja wars for his people to realize that and join forces to help the world finally grow. Why couldn't the leaders of Yevon see that, and just what were they hiding? All in all, nothing made sense. And the more he heard of it and the plight of these people, albed, he began to see that there was something terribly wrong in the way this world was governed. And the only way to take care of it was revolution. Well, he didn't want to go that far yet, so he stuck with the idea that maybe if sin was taken care of permanently, that there could finally be some change. Or at least he hoped there would be. If not, then he would have to do some serious damage control. I see. This world is in far more turmoil than I could have ever imagined, Naruto commented once Sid was finished telling what he knew of this world's troubles. No kidding. Those damn Yevonites keep screwing everything up. If it wasn't for them, we could have at least found ways to better our lives, at the very least, if not find a way to defeat sin. Sid ripped on the governing body, and for good cause, seeing how much harm they had inflicted upon the albed race over the years. It seemed that racial discrimination was a factor in this world, unfortunately. Nodding in agreement as he had already drew upon that conclusion, Naruto sighed for a moment before gazing at his bandaged arm. However, not all is lost. Coming through the portal of this world has left me in less than 100%, and that monster didn't help anything. And it doesn't help that I'm still new to this world and don't understand the intricate details of magic, so I'm at a distinctive disadvantage. Wait a second. Are you saying you believe you can beat sin? Riku narrowed her eyes and hissed at his overconfidence in his own abilities. I don't care who you think you are, but to believe that just one man can come in and save everyone is ludicrous. It's going to take a miracle to defeat sin for an entire race, much less one person. You are correct. But never underestimate the power of an individual's will. You'd be sorely mistaken to think I am not capable, as you saw back there. I was not at even 50% of my full capacity. Naruto told the girl off before deciding to tell something of himself. Let me tell you something about me in my world now. Half a millennia ago, in my world, a demon of immense power, one that was said to have the power to destroy worlds, devastated and left my world in ruins. But from those ashes a single man rose up from them, a power no one had ever seen before, and was able to defeat the demon, seal it away, and then separate into 9 separate entities. He led my world to greatness and taught people how to wield his power, giving us abilities that we could never dream about before. The world prospered under his rule, and eventually, after many years, 5 great villages arose in his image. However, they had forgotten his teachings and waged war upon one another after sealing away the 9 great beasts separated from the Jubi, the immense demon, into human vessel to wield their powers without repercussions. Yet there was so much sadness was created, and a seemingly never-ending cycle of war enslaved my world. Those that were vessel were mistreated and often just allowed their wills to be corroded. Hardly anyone ever sought to make their lives easier, so they each faced their own hardships. No one ever thought of what the others thought, and therefore peace was naught but a fantasy. Yet unknowingly to everyone, a man at this time came up with a plot to enslave the world in his power so that there finally would be rest. And due to his actions against the world, when he made his move, the 5 powers finally understood one another as a single person's will, showed them what was necessary to stop the insanity and work together as one. Following this one person's lead, they were victorious, and although weakened from the struggle, stayed united and worked with another to keep the peace that was finally brought before. So you see, it is possible for just one person to make a difference. Naruto wrapped up his speech and gazed into Riku's emerald eyes, startling her with the intensity of his own. I know this to be true, as it was I that led the way to the peace my world so craved. Many others contributed and sacrificed, but it was I that opened the way and made it possible. I, the 3rd vessel of the strongest of the 9 entities separated from the great demon. To his great surprise, they seemed to take the fact that he had a demon sealed in his stomach in stride rather than panicking like he was expecting. It was actually quite a relief. It seemed that, or at least in their case, people were reasonable here. However, he couldn't vouch for the entire world, especially considering the persecution the albed faced on a daily basis. And after a moment of silence, it was Sid that broke it and had a certain glint in his eyes, a glint that seemed to make it look as if he had a plan. So you are saying you know of a way to defeat sin? At this current moment, no, I do not. Naruto honestly answered before following with an explanation. I do not have any physical information on his abilities or his power, and because of such I am unable to measure its power and come up with a viable plan of defeating it. At the very worst, a sealing may have to take place, but I rather not. Those tend to be dangerous and can be unfortunately undone. Instead of seeming upset at his answer, it seemed that Sid had expected and sagely nodded his head. However, that glint did not leave his eyes, and Naruto began to worry just what the bald man was thinking of. He didn't have to wait long as Sid finally spoke. I have a proposal if you are willing to hear me out. I don't see that I have a choice in the matter, so go ahead. Naruto shrugged, as he had a feeling he was going to have to accept this proposal whether he liked it or not. It wasn't like there was any way off of this damn rock, and heading to the mainland would be a difficult chore on its own. As you have said on multiple occasions, you simply don't know enough about this world. I, however, am willing to teach you all I know and have others fill in the gaps along with helping you gather any and all information you can on Sin for a small price. Sid stated with a grin on his face that made Riku shudder as she knew this was his business face. And Naruto had a good feeling what he was about to ask and was confirmed when the leader of the albed proposed his offer. I would like you to work under my authority during your time spent here helping us on excavations and whatever else comes up. You will work under my orders and help keep my people safe from the fiends that lurk in the desert. I can't help but think about what would have happened if we had run into that thing. I accept. Naruto answered without hesitation, surprising both father and daughter with his quick response. Your offer is reasonable and it is advantageous to my goals. I see no reason not to accept it, as I would also be granted shelter and food to eat. It would be stupid of me to pass up on such a generous offer. Riku opened her mouth to find some fault in her father's proposal, however she shut after thinking about it. For once her father was actually being truly generous and was making a wise investment after seeing what the young man before her was capable of. There was already talk amongst the others that there was one amongst them that was capable of taking down such great fiends that not even their weapons could harm. Just thinking about the moral that this person was helping them and keeping them safe would drastically increase morale in their people. And they hadn't had anything in a while to feel jovial over outside of the creation of home. Smiling seeing that the kid was so willing to help, Sid motioned towards his daughter. Riku, if you wouldn't mind taking him back to the hospital wing so he may rest and start teaching him a little of language so he can adjust during his time here. I've got work to do. Glaring at her father, not believing that he was actually going to willingly start doing his job and being subtly surprised seeing him looking over the papers, she only nodded. Okay. Vidran. Come with me please. Naruto could only nod as he followed Riku out of the room. He didn't have a single clue on where he actually wound up. He was using his sage sensory to find his way up here. He didn't know where anything else was and he was going to spending a lot of time here. A lot of time here. Riku. Are you in position? Naruto spoke in albed, having picked up on the language very quickly. It took just a few months. With only a few hiccups on pronunciation every now and then, and into a headpiece as he leaned against a worn down and beaten wall of an old ruins within the Beaconel Desert. I'm here. What's the count? Riku responded after a moment and took a few gasps, most likely having difficulty keeping up with the pace that Naruto had set. Looking out in the small sand dune, glad that he was wearing goggles due to the sand that was beginning to whip up from the wind, and got a quick count. I count. 6, no, 7 out of control Machina drones about 20 meters to where you are stationed. They seem to be scavenging on something. I seriously doubt it is a carcass. Odd. Drones shouldn't be acting like such. Riku muttered over the comm and was actually stumped by their behavior. Help me take them out, but try to leave enough so that the others can fiddle with them later. Spare parts are a godsend to us mechanics. Yeah. I'll leave them mostly intact. Over and out. He waved her off as she had begun to learn that he was very capable of destroying things and always seemed to leave them in a barely recognizable condition after he was done with it. He seemed to share that trait with Kurama. He just seemed to be a natural when it came to random and mass destruction. Pulling forth a yellow-shaded grenade, Naruto pulled the pin and tossed into the crowd of drones with pinpoint accuracy before it went off. And a blast of bright light followed, blinding everything that was in the vicinity and or looked directly into it. Riku had been around Naruto enough to know he had a fancy for flashbangs and smoke grenades and waited until she heard the snap of the grenade before rushing into the mix. He seemed in favor of dirty tactics like starting out with one of the said types of grenades in order to get the upper hand in any situation, and she couldn't help but agree with them. The faster an engagement ended, the less likely you were to end up taking unnecessary damage. So diving in the mist, noting that Naruto had blasted 2 Machina with his favored technique, the Rasengan was what he called it, before she quickly locked onto the drones that were left. Her eyes were sharp and she could see exactly what cords and parts she needed to take out of them to disable them, and had swift enough hands to disable them in near seconds. With a quick burst to the closest of the 4 remaining, Riku's hand snapped into the chest of the drone and with a quick tug pulled out just 1 wire. However, that 1 wire caused the drone's eyes to flicker before the power drained from its body and it shut down. Pulling the outlet cord tended to do that. Another moved behind her and nearly smashed its massive arm into her, only for its arm to suddenly just fall off, which was soon followed by its head. Then it was promptly kicked over and then used like pedestal by Naruto. You go and get that last one? I already took care of the other 5. Almost twitching as she noted that there were 2 more drones laying in a heap, Riku caught sight of the last drone that almost seemed shell-shocked at what was happening. Ignoring yet another odd behavior from the drones, she rushed into its guard and with a quick flick of her wrist the droid was disabled by the removal of a single part. Then every single limb, including the head, disconnected from the body and fell to the shifting sands below. And that is how you take care of these things without obliterating them, Riku said before tossing the part she had pulled from the drone to Naruto before placing her hand on her hip and glared at him. Just how many times do I have to teach you and show you the parts to pull out to disable them? And to her great annoyance the orange-wearing sage simply grinned at her and tossed her the part back. Oh, I know how to do it. It's just so much easier to do it my way. Plus I don't waste any time looking for the correct parts to rip out of them. Riku growled at Naruto before chunking the part into Naruto's skull, who made no attempt to dodge, and screamed at him, "You jerk." Ow. Naruto muttered in his normal tongue while rubbing the side of his head. That wasn't very nice. Of course it wasn't. Riku snapped back at him, not bothering with her native tongue any longer as Naruto had gotten the hang of it and she needed to freshen up on her Spirion as she had a feeling she would have a mainland mission soon. Recomposing herself and muttered to herself that this was just how Naruto was, Riku sighed and finally glanced over to what the Machina had been hovering over before they dismantled them. Huh. No way. This is exactly what we were looking for. Yes. What? Naruto looked over at conic object that was sticking out of the sand and was wondering why Riku was suddenly hyperventilating over. Just what is this thing? Doesn't look that special to me. Are you kidding? Oh right, you hardly know of this world's tech. Riku was about to reprimand Naruto, having become used to him and thought of him on occasion as another of the albed, before shaking her head. This is part of hyper-powered energy cannon. In fact, this is actually the cannon portion of the weapon, which means. Ignoring Naruto, who was wondering why a cannon was shaped like a cone and didn't seem to be able to hold any cannonballs, Riku flicked on her comm and changed the frequency. Kyaku. Kyaku, come in. Naruto and I have found it. I'm activating my beacon. Come to our location and check it out. One of the main cannons is here and I'm sure the rest is in the vicinity. After a moment of static a male voice echoed on the other side, bubbling with excitement. Seriously. I'll contact Sid and let him know before bringing the team to excavate. Over and out. Clicking the comm off, Riku pumped her fist out before she started to do an excited jig, twirling in her spot occasionally. Yes. Yes. About damn time we found this. Now we might have something to stop Sin. While he was starting to get excited too seeing Riku really get into it, it all suddenly came to a crash and Naruto found his eyes narrowing. Excuse me? Stopping her little dance, having forgotten her dignity and the fact that she was in Naruto's company, Riku turned and faced the blonde sage to see him cross his arms and give her a stern look. Vidran forgot to mention that, didn't he? Her answer was a simple nod from him, and then she began to curse her father. No good sack of lazy bones. I swear if it isn't beneficial to him he just seems to forget about it until bites him in the ass. It is just like him too. Naruto redirected her attention and tapped his foot impatiently. Care to explain? From what I've heard Sin is able to literally change landscapes yet this cannon may pack enough punch to destroy him. I'm finding that hard to believe considering I have being inside of me capable of changing landscapes and I know just how tough that son of bitch is to hurt much less to kill and I doubt Sin is that much different. Well. You see we actually don't know just how powerful weapon actually is. Riku stuttered for a moment and winced under the intense glare coming from Naruto before she lashed out. It's not our fault, okay. We don't know how strong it is because of those damn Yevon fools. Even our own history is unknown and since Machina is forbidden it isn't like we can openly research it. What we're doing illegal if you haven't forgot. No I haven't. Naruto stated, knowing that it was illegal to use, possess and research most forms of Machina unless you were a soldier or research of Bevel. However no one thought to inform me of what we were searching for. If you haven't forgot once of the reason I'm here with you is to research and look into finding a way to defeat Sin. This kind of falls under that category. Riku blushed indignantly but after a moment she nodded. You're right and I am sorry. But pick it up with Vidran. I know a lot of things escape him but since you work for him your beef is with him, not me, okay? While that was mostly true as Sid was his employer it was also equally true that out of all the crew, Riku included, someone should have told him about this. In a sense yes. But someone, anyone, should have told me. Riku could only nod in agreement. She would be quite frustrated too if such information was not told to her, especially if she was in Naruto's predicament, and would be taking it out on the closest person which was unfortunately her. Again I'm sorry. It slipped my thoughts as I didn't think we would actually find it. It was luck that we did. Naruto simply nodded as that was understatement. If they hadn't been out on Portal, looking out for anything strange and searching for the occasional scraps of Machina buried beneath the sands, they would have never found it. It was even further lucky that it was him and Riku out as he was able to spot the Machina in the distance and Riku was able to figure out what this thing was. And seeing the hovercrafts pull into the area, Naruto homed in on one particular person and stepped right in front of him with his arms crossed and a particularly nasty look on his face, radiating just enough killing intent to let be known he was not in a good mood. "I think you and I need to have a conversation, Sid." The leader of the albed could only gulp after just one glance at the shinobi before him. He was about to get his ass chewed out. If he was lucky. It was a clear day, sunny. Okay, no, it was a clear but scorching hot day that was baking everyone to the bone as they worked to clear the sand the cannon. Fortunately, most of it was intact in the parts that were nearby, but it had still taken nearly a week of digging to uncover the main control center of the machina. And on a few of the days there was a terrible sandstorm that made their efforts seem almost in vain. Thankfully, with Naruto's clones they were able to make up for the sandstorm and regain lost time. So because of him, morale was high and everyone's spirits were up as they dug the machina from its grave. And it had been that long since Naruto reamed Sid for not telling him about this weapon, which could have the possibility of taking care of Sin for good. He seriously doubted it, but nonetheless it was the principle of the matter. He needed to know about anything and everything there was that directly, and indirectly, involved Sin, and that included ancient weapons that might have possessed enough power to do so. So Sid came clean about what he knew of this weapon and the plans he had for it. Unfortunately, it appeared that Sid was willing to work with Yevon for a way to defeat the Leviathan, and both sides were willing to put aside their difference to work towards defeating a common enemy. However, Naruto didn't buy that for a second. Just hearing that Yevon had given them the specs for the weapon left him uneasy, as it did with the albed that knew of the project's origins. Why would Yevon give the albed, a people that they have a grave discrepancy against and at times had attacked them without warning, the plans of such a powerful weapon to control? It didn't make sense, and in the pit of his stomach Naruto knew that this weapon was not capable of doing what it was hoped for. However, he would not impose or speak of the ill feeling he had. Just seeing how hard everyone was working and how high everyone's spirits were that they found the machina that could be their salvation. He couldn't bring himself to let them know that it would most likely be all for nothing, as there was the hope that it just might work. "How are you holding up?" He heard Riku's voice before the girl plopped down next to him and leaned against the hovercraft Naruto was using to rest on. "It's hot as hell. I feel as if this is all for nothing, but I can't say anything for the slim hope that it might actually work, and then not to mention that I'm still upset about not being let in on this earlier. So how do you think I feel?" Naruto sarcastically responded as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand and then flicked it onto the sand below. "You're still sore about that?" Riku was a little surprised, as from what she could see Naruto didn't hold grudges, before shaking her head and wiping the sweat from her face as well. "But I know how you're feeling. I just don't trust those damn bastards. They've tried to wipe us out before, but now they're willing to work with us. Something's fishy, all right." "You said it." "Whoa." Naruto spat out before turning and noticing that she had stripped off her normal clothing, only keeping the goggles to protect her eyes, and was clad in nothing but a skin-tight orange shirt and green short shorts that almost classified as underwear. And not to mention she was sweating heavily, so it was all sticking to her skin, almost showing every detail of her body beneath. "What? Hey mister." Riku wondered what it was that Naruto saw before she followed his eyes and found they were looking directly at her. "I don't think it is very good for you to be hitting on your boss's daughter." "Well, when you're dressed that skimpy, I'd say it hard not to. You practically have nothing on," Naruto fired back, trying to deflect the conversation from him being the one at fault here. She was wearing that skimpy outfit that was giving him quite the trouble down below the belt. Blushing scarlet as she knew just how tightly her clothes were clinging and how drenched they were, Riku turned her head away. "Well, like you said, it is hot as hell out here, and I couldn't bear another minute in those heavy clothes of mine. And look who's talking." Riku went back to the offensive and pointed at Naruto's bare chest, drenched in his own sweat. "You took off that armor of yours and bared that chiseled chest for all to see. Think of how many of the women are having difficulty looking at your ripped pecs and abs of the gods." Naruto wanted to retort. He really did. In fact, he had a good combat stating that it was okay for a man to bare his chest, as there wasn't anything horribly sexual about it, as guys did it all the time. However, it was a moot point as their conversation was interrupted by a scream and the working albed sprinting from the dig site. Sandworm. Jumping up and dashing to the site, as the hovercrafts were parked a little ways away so that those that were on break had a place to rest, Naruto's eyes widened as a worm of gigantic proportions had rolled into the site and was nearly upon the still buried weapon. "Oh son of... How did my clones not report this?" And then his answer came as he noted that off in the distance, behind the worm, 3 of his clones were sprawled and seemingly unconscious. How they were knocked unconscious with dispelling Naruto could not answer, however he did have a response for it. "You guy fucking suck, I have to do everything." Glad that he kept a few extra clones over by the hovercrafts to meditate and draw upon natural chakra just in case of a situation like this, Naruto dispelled one and received the natural chakra it had been building to convert into Sage mode. Riku. Evacuate the rest. I'll deal with this. Riku nodded and quickly ran to the remaining workers that had not escaped yet in order to shield them and help them get to the hovercrafts. After seeing Naruto take care of that one fiend when she first saw him, she was sure he could handle this small fry. Well, small by strength comparison. However, her eyes widened as the creature had turned on a dime and swung its tail at the few people that were still running by the cannons. And she knew that not only they were in danger but the weapon that had everyone's spirits up could be demolished. No. To the great shock of all there, Naruto stood before the tail and had stopped it with a single hand like it was a child's plaything. Turning to the stunned workers that he rescued, he motioned his head to escape. Get to the hovers. You'll be safe there. The workers scrambled to their feet, one of them stumbling and falling back to the sands for a moment, and rushed past Riku, who was looking on in shock, as were many others on the edge of the dunes having retrieved their guns to fight the fiend. He glanced at her for only a moment before turning his attention to the several-ton fiend that he caught in his hand. And then with a single flick he had tossed the fiend nearly over 100 meters. Child's play. Naruto muttered before drawing forth one kunai and attached a high-grade explosive tag to it. All I need is a single kunai to kill this beast. As the sandworm roared out in obvious pain, never having been thrown like that by anything in its short lifetime, the fiend hardly realized that its time was at its end. A single projectile zoomed over the distance and went straight to its open mouth. Swallowing the small object with relative ease, it was about to make it retreat, not wanting to deal with something that could throw it, but it was all too late. The tag on the kunai went off and its belly burst open, pouring its gut onto the sand. It roared one last time before its body slumped over and fireflies began to dissipate from its body before the corpse, like all fiend corpses did, disappeared from the rolling sands. Releasing his sage form, as to be honest it was almost overkill against such a creature, Naruto sighed and rolled his eyes. Just how hard was that? My clones really need to learn how to actually do something for a change. Turning around, he was alarmed by just how many people were swarming him with amazement in their eyes, and each was clamoring on about just what he did and asking how he did it. It truly was a humble experience. Back home this had only happened on one occasion, the day he defeated Pain, yet each of them knew about the legendary sage form and were amazed on how strong he became with it. Here, however, these people were just grateful that they were alive and no one was lost in the sandworm's attack. They were used to death, and to see everyone's life saved to them, it was a miracle. Just smiling at them, he graciously took their words of praise as he moved on, and as he did he caught Riku's eyes and he could see even she was amazed by just what happened. Naruto could only shake his head. If only these people knew that this kind of thing was something quite a few in his world could do, but not too many, as only the elites could do something like that, and it happened to be quite commonplace. However, it wasn't here in the world of Spira, and he had no clue just how much his legend was beginning to grow. And Chapter 5 complete. Yet another chapter fired out in a rapid rate, but as I said, I have a lot of spare time and that won't change until about a month for now, when I'll only have weekends to write. Until then I hope to get as much of this done as possible, as this is what's stuck in my brain. Now for your enjoyment, and new omake. Omake. And look who's talking. Riku went back to the offensive and pointed at Naruto's bare chest, drenched in his own sweat. You took off that armor of yours and bared that chiseled chest for all to see. Think of how many of the women are having difficulty looking at your ripped pecs and abs of the gods. Naruto wanted to retort. He really did. In fact, he had a good combat stating that it was okay for a man to bare his chest, as there wasn't anything horribly sexual about it, as guys did it all the time. However, it was a moot point as their conversation was interrupted by a scream and the working albed sprinting from the dig site. Guy with really big knife. Did they just say? Naruto questioned as he noted the workers running by him before shrugging his shoulders and popping his neck. Oh well. Time for me to get to work. Moving quickly to the work site, passing by the workers as they ran in fear from whoever this guy was, Naruto finally stopped before a man of massive stature. So you must be the one that's scaring everyone. And what's with that giant pyramid helmet on your head? Compensation for something. Dodging the swing of his massive sword, which he swung quite quickly for a blade of that size, Naruto was impressed. Nice. Your swing is almost as fast as Zabuza's. But that's not going to be nearly enough to beat me. Rushing into the guy's guard, bypassing the sword in the process, Naruto landed a good and solid hit to his solar plexus. Only to jump away and groan in pain as he shook his hand. Oh son of a. Just what are you made of? Titanium. The pyramid head didn't answer this time, ran towards the sage, catching him off guard on fast he was, and sliced him in half. Or at least the log that came to save its summoner. Son of. Got to end this quickly. Naruto narrowed his eyes before dispelling one of his clones that was gathering natural chakra and turned to sage form. And forming two more clones, he brought the Rasen Shuriken to life and grinned at the big guy. Sorry about this, but I'm ending this fight now. Go to hell. And with that, the Rasen Shuriken buzzed through the air and hit its target, going off and eviscerating everything as it always did while creating a massive plum of sand in the air. Turning to the workers over the dunes, he motioned everything to be fine when he felt the presence of the pyramid head next to him, and it wasn't even scratched from his attack. Just being able to dodge, a large bead of nervous sweat dripped down the back of Naruto's head as he landed in a crouch a good distance from this freak. I just might be boned. Oh well. And with a battle cry he charged in. Scene break. So how'd you ever beat that guy? He seemed unstoppable. Riku asked as she leaned against the hovercraft next to Naruto, enjoying the nice and cool temperature. Naruto grimaced for a moment before sighing out loud, I didn't. Riku's eyes widened at hearing that and was very worried, wondering just what happened. Wait, but that would mean. Riku. Look above me. What do you see? Naruto pointed just above his head, and doing so she followed his finger until she reached a golden halo swaying above his head. Now look above your head. No. We're dead. She screamed out in horror and jumped up and looked around and noticed that they were sitting a small puffy cloud that was slowly rising into the sky. But. They guy bifurcated you after he split me down the middle. I've got to admit. That guy was just unstoppable. Maybe he could defeat Sin. Who knows? Naruto answered before going off on a random tangent, hoping that the pyramid head would go after Sin and kick its ass. That wasn't what I was going to ask. Riku paused for a moment before pointing at the hovercraft. Just how in the world did the hovercraft die? I didn't even think it could die. Opening his mouth to say it was just all in her head, Naruto turned to the hovercraft and noted there was indeed a halo above it. Blinking at that, he turned back to Riku with wide eyes. I don't know. And the two continued to puzzle just how the hovercraft died. Rumors had begun to spread amongst the albed people about him. At first he tried to undercut these rumors, by either proving them to be true or false. However, he quickly learned that it was an extremely difficult task, as despite how good he was, he just couldn't match the word spreading about him. And at first practically everything that was stated was pretty much true. Like on multiple occasions he manhandled the giant fiends of the area single-handedly without even breaking a sweat, or say he threw the sandworm over 100 meters like a blitzball. Or even when he captured that zoo and rode it into the dirt for putting out the fire he made to boil his ramen. That zoo had it coming. No one messed with his ramen, no one. But it didn't take long for the rumors to balloon and run rampant with no way to stop them. And unfortunately they were mostly about on how and why he arrived, and most were pretty ridiculous. The rumors that stated that he was sent down from the heavens to finally free the world from the tyranny of Yevon, rid the destruction of Sin, and to lead everyone to a peaceful future were pretty far-fetched. Now they had some elements right, like he was searching for a way to defeat Sin and bring peace, but that wasn't his original intent for coming here. He really just wanted to get away from Konoha truthfully and help the occasional person out with a good deed. And yet there were others that were actually pretty damn close to the truth. One particular rumor stated that he was an alien from another world of humans, much like they were, that possessed powers that were unimaginable to the people of this world, that transcended dimensions to help those in need. That his people could defeat great beasts with literal ease, one such beast that was said to have the power to destroy worlds, and he was there to save them. Something told him that a certain blonde albed girl was the one spreading that rumor. But of course, with all these rumors floating about, he had become a sensation amongst the albed. He had achieved celebrity status, above even their blitzball team known as the Psyches, and was treated with just a little too much reverence. It was actually beginning to get to him, especially when he went out on guard duty for excavations and they were adamant about letting him rest and not do too much work. That was very annoying. He was out there to work and he was starting to get a little chippy when people asked him just to relax. It was his job to protect them while out there, and it would be better if they just let him do his work. He was a damn good guard. When his clones weren't out and about, goofing off and forgetting their purpose, he swore Kurama somehow had his paw on that flaw with his clones just to show Naruto what it was like for him to deal with him every single day. Naruto wouldn't put it past the cunning fox to do something of that nature. However, it was very endearing when the children came around and asked if he could teach them how to be a ninja. And being the ever so generous person, he showed off just enough to keep them entertained and let them play around with a dull wooden kunai so that they wouldn't hurt themselves playing the game he taught them. And then afterwards the children taught him how to put together a flying spherical machina drone made for the purpose of scouting and recording events, something Naruto was very impressed with, and asked if they could make a few more of those for him to use and if they could make the receiver computer portable, possibly handheld. They enthusiastically agreed to try and went off in search for everything they needed, directed by their leader who was sure he could make the portable receiver. And Naruto was impressed on how quickly they seemed to be getting it together and how far along the project already was. He would keep his eye on this Shinra kid. The little bugger was a mechanical genius. The funny thing about that was that the parents, for the ones that weren't orphans from either Sin's or Yevon's attacks or just from complications, were absolutely thrilled that he had their children out trying to advance their creations further and to take them to limits of their abilities. That was something else that was a little different about the people here of this world. They weren't against having their children work hard as they never knew what the future could hold and their children could end up on their own. It was a good life lesson to be taught and they weren't afraid to teach their children about the values of hard work while at the same time letting them be kids and have their fun. To be honest, he was glad at seeing this instead of some of the overbearing parents protecting their children like he saw back when he was younger, keeping them shielded from the harsh world that they would eventually have to be a part of. At least these children would be strong. That was a guarantee. But there was also another downside to his newfound popularity and unfortunately he sort of understood what Sasuke felt like growing up. Outside of being emo and having watched his family killed before him. Fangirls and fanboys. These people were so enthused with him that they just wouldn't leave him alone. After failing to entertain their odd behaviors he tried to tell them in several polite ways to piss off yet they just kept coming. So then he resorted to the Sasuke tactic of ignoring them and he soon realized something. That tactic never worked for Sasuke and it wasn't working for him. So eventually he had his own bodyguard to shield him from having to deal with these people. And that bodyguard just happened to be someone he was expecting to be one of his fanboys and also happened to be Sid's eldest brother. Odd name to be sure, as he even asked Sid why he named his son that only to receive a "I dunno" response from the bald man. It also didn't help that he had more tattoos than a wannabe Yakuza thug and didn't even bother wearing a shirt to cover some of the decals up, but having a mohawk along with those just made him look utterly bizarre. More bizarre than Rock Lee hugging Guy and that weird sunset setting genjutsu that appeared behind them every time they hugged. And he was more bizarre than that. Enough said. So now he was heading to go have a meeting with Sid as there was something the man wanted of him. What he wasn't sure, but he had a good feeling he was about to get assigned on the excavation that he had been buzzing around. Apparently there was an important discovery near the island southeast of Bikanel known as the Baj Islands. Outside of that no one really knew of just what was found there and all there was to know was that there was large crew being gathered and there was a lot of aquatic equipment being brought to the docks. But whatever it was it had everyone worked into a frenzy even greater than that when they found the cannon. There was just something about this find that trumped the cannon's finding and he was actually somewhat interested in it. Could it have been a new, more powerful weapon? Or was it something else entirely? Seeing that he would have his answers soon enough he made his way to where he knew Sid to be, in his office unlike the majority of the time. It seemed Riku was correct about her father. He couldn't sit still for very long and always had to run off and go do something though he couldn't fault the man for his reasoning. Paperwork was the bane of any leader's existence. And then just as the fiend is about to drag Riku underwater I blasted with thunder. But I also hit Riku too so she's now afraid of thunderstorms and lighting because of that. Brother was telling a story that Naruto was pay particular attention to, having just learned how to mentally block off his random tangents. It was better that way as the guy could just be a complete nut job at times. Yeah. That sounds great. Naruto absent-mindedly responded, hardly having heard what his bodyguard had even said and only caught key tidbits of Riku, thunder and afraid. He would probably tease, prank her about that later. Cammy knew the girl was good for a laugh every now and then. Brother smirked, glad that someone outside of Buddy actually listened to his stories, before looking over his shoulder just to make sure no one was following them. He had to make sure he was doing his job occasionally, just so his father wouldn't chastise him and Naruto to smack him to the ground. Once he was sure no one was there, or around, the Mohawk blonde realized where they were heading as the path started to become familiar. Oh no. We're heading father's office. Why are we going there? Naruto shook his head and refrained from sighing and also kept from reaching over and smacking him across the back of his head. Not only did he not do his job very well, outside of providing Naruto a meat shield, human sacrifice, he was extremely forgetful and... well, he wasn't too bright either. For the last time. Sid called me as he's something to discuss with me. It probably has to deal with the job in Baj and I will most likely be sent there to provide protection to the workers and to secure the discovery. Naruto chastised his guard and re-informed him of just why they were going to see Sid. He swore Sid had gave brother paint thinner or something when he was younger. Not even he was that bad even in his academy days. Or so he hoped. Thankfully brother understood this time, and didn't seem like he was on the verge of forgetting it once more, and they finally arrived at the albed leader's office, and uncharacteristically brother once acted more like a bodyguard. All right. I'll be waiting out here for you, sir. Blinking, not sure what brought that about and just taking it as brother fearing his father's wrath, Naruto shook his head before entering to see Sid doing as he always did, ignoring his papers while tinkering with a handheld version of the guns he had seen before. A pistol was what he believed it was called. I'm here as you requested. Naruto alerted to the bald man with his name tattooed to the side of his skull for some odd reason. Pulling his attention from his tinkering, Sid waved Naruto off before turning back to it before checking the sights. You can relax and use Spirion here. I have no problem with it and at times prefer it. It makes sure that no is listening in. Especially in front of the door. Oh shit. Naruto smiled in amusement at brother's curse before heard a few tumbles and a couple of people stumbling away. Sid however wasn't so amused and simply twitched as his son. I swear. That boy has issues that even I can't understand. And just who else was at the door just now? Buddy. I sensed that he was following and brother was trying to be secretive and keep his position unknown, but I picked him up anyways. Naruto answered, having easily been able to sense the presence of brother's only friend. They're probably interested to know just what's going on, as are many here after hearing of a grand discovery at the Baj Islands. They'll know soon enough. I've been careful with any new information ever since coming into contact with Yevon. Who knows if they were able to slip a few spies in. Sid admitted as he didn't trust Yevon in the slightest and knew that there was an angle that they were working on. Understandable. Naruto agreed, as years of being a shinobi had honed his instincts and told him as much. However, if we may, I would like to get this over with. The Psyches wanted to teach me a little about blitzball today, and since I didn't have anything scheduled today, I thought why not? It should be entertaining to say the least. Sid couldn't help but grin at that, loving the sport just as much as about every resident of Spira did, before laying the pistol on his desk. That it is, my boy. The greatest thing Spira still has is blitzball, and it would be wise to at least understand the game. And who knows, with your skills you could probably play and take the game by storm. Yeah. I rather not. I already have a fan club and I don't need more jumping onto that ship. Naruto mildly complained and started to feel more like Sasuke and wondered just how he actually managed it. Shrugging at the sage, Sid turned his full attention onto Naruto. Seeing that you already have caught wind of our newest expedition and have probably come to the conclusion that you will be on it, I will simply confirm that you are going, as this discovery is so monumental that I will risk lowering home's defenses to retrieve it. Raising an eyebrow at that, just wondering what in the world was vital that he would lower their forces just to retrieve along with sending him, Naruto had to admit he was intrigued. Alright, you've got me wondering. Just what did you find? Another weapon? No. Though weapons can be mounted on it. Sid responded and left Naruto more puzzled than before. No. This is a breakthrough unlike any other before. We've found an airship in excellent condition considering that it is submerged and partially buried in the seafloor. An airship? Naruto questioned, as he was entirely sure just what that was before he suddenly recognized where he had heard it from before. Wait, you mean one of those flying machines that went missing after the Great War and the appearance of Sin? Sid's grin grew and nodded in confirmation. Yes indeed, and everything seems to be okay considering what I said previously. No doubt we'll have to replace certain parts and equipment, but once we completely unearth it, there isn't a doubt we'll get that thing up and flying again. Understanding why Sid was sending him on this expedition, Naruto couldn't help but match Sid's grin. One of the few things he had always wished for was to one day soar through the skies, and with their help he just might get to fulfill that one last wish. Seriously, he only had 2 goals left: flying and becoming Hokage. He had done everything else he had set out to accomplish. Alright, I'll be ready. Not so fast, there is still a little more to discuss. Sid interrupted Naruto and kept him from heading out just yet. There is another reason I sent for you, as you've earned my trust and I am willing to send you and only you to accomplish this job I have. Raising his eyebrow again in surprise, not having expected another job when he was just assigned to airship retrieval, Naruto gave the albed leader a puzzled glance. What else do you have in mind? Sighing before taking a sphere from his drawer, he rolled it across his desk and to Naruto, who in turn activated it. Watching the video of a young woman with brown hair wearing a dress similar to the fashion of Priestess of Yevon, though he admitted it varied in many ways and was far more colorful than what most Yevon priestess wore. However, there was a certain feature that quickly caught his attention and had noted that it was an albed trait. Her right eye was the spiraled, deep emerald tint that each and every albed possessed. Yet her left was just a normal crystal blue colorization, which mildly surprised Naruto. People with heterochromia, in any world, were very rare. Is she half albed? Naruto asked after examining the video for a while longer before bringing his attention back to Sid. The said bald man nodded and tiredly sighed. She is my niece. Her mother was my sister. A sister that I cut off after she married a priest from Yevon, who ironically enough was cast out from their ranks for doing so. Letting Sid continue without interrupting, Naruto listened as the man poured out his heart. It was my fault really. I introduced the two as I kind of liked Braska, for he wasn't like those other damn Yevonites, but once she married him I let my mistrust of Yevon get the better of me and cut them off too, and for that I am ashamed. However, once she was born I began to see the error of my ways, but it was too late. My sister came back to mend our broken ties, but she never made it back home. Her ship was destroyed after it crossed paths with Sin, and I lost the chance to tell her I was sorry. I couldn't do anything, and before I knew it Braska had become a summoner and eventually obtained the final summon and died using it to defeat Sin, leaving his baby girl orphaned. Yet once again I couldn't do anything, and instead she was taken by one of his guardian's friends to be saved, to be raised in the care of someone that could watch after her. But now, she is about to become a summoner just like her father, and I dread that she will succeed just as Braska did. Sid stopped for a moment, wiping away the tears that freely fell down his cheeks before gazing directly into Naruto's eyes. I have failed her so many times, so I have no right to be part of her life. But I want to stop this stupidity. I don't want her to die just like her father. I don't want to lose the last thing I have left of my darling sister. You want me to kidnap her and bring her here just like you've been doing with other summoners recently? Naruto stated, more than asked, yet still let it linger to give the man room to explain his intentions. If there is no other choice. Yes. Sid honestly responded and wiped the last remaining tears from his eyes. However, I would rather it if you were to join her, to become her guardian. Seeing the puzzled look Naruto was giving him, and to be honest it was a confusing request, Sid took a deep breath and regained his composure. I want you to be at her side to protect just like you have been protecting our people. I want to make sure she is damn safe on her journey, but moreover, this will give you exposure to the world as a whole, and maybe through that exposure, maybe, just maybe, you will find a way that can defeat Sin and put a stop to the foolishness that Yevon has allowed to go on for so long. Sid finished with a straight face, having faith in the young man that stood before him and having seen just how capable he was. And hearing this abode of confidence Sid had in him, Naruto lightly bowed in respect of the man. I give you my word I will protect her. And I will find a way to defeat Sin, even if I have to resort to drastic measures. I promise Sin will perish and your niece will survive as long as I still draw breath. And I never go back on my word. Just from seeing the fire in his eyes and feeling the near tangible determination that emanating from the boy, Sid felt at ease. He knew he was putting Yuna in good hands. Very well. After the retrieval is over I will have ship ready for you to head out to Besaid, where Yuna is currently located, and thankfully as of this moment she hasn't become a full-fledged summoner, but she soon will be. Until then, keep an eye out for Riku for me. She'll be heading to Baj too, and if she learns that Yuna has become a summoner, well, let's just say you'll be seeing much more of her. Sid added before wincing, as he knew Riku would blow a gasket if she heard Yuna was a summoner. And he'd probably never hear the end of it from her until she was allowed to do something. She was like his little sister in that regard. I always do, and I'll keep this from her ears as best as I can. Naruto passively waved the albed off before heading to the door and began to grumble. Oh great. The slacker ran off and now I got to go find him. Some kind of bodyguard he is. Don't worry about him. Knowing him, he's probably at the springs trying to get a good view, if you know what I mean. Sid heartily laughed as he knew his boy too well and wasn't exactly condemning what he was doing. Naruto simply twitched as he knew all too well what that meant. Brother was pulling a Jiraiya. And most likely he would have the same end result as the said pervert had when he went off to do his research. Half dead and crawling his way back to the hotel. Grumbling and starting his search for brother, Naruto headed out. However, as he left, Sid couldn't help but feel some pride in the boy, even if he wasn't his. There was just something about this youngster that he couldn't explain. The one thing he could explain, however, was that he wished the boy was his son. I've never seen anyone or anything like you, kid. It is as if you are a storm building out at sea. And don't even think we have even begun to see just what you are capable of. Maybe you are the one to bring us the eternal calm. And there is chapter 6. I'm still on a roll and I'm still really not slowing down, as the only that kept this from coming out earlier was that I don't have very much time to write on the weekends. There's not much to explain about this chapter outside the fact that it is a setup to allow me to merge in with the canon storyline. However, just because I'm merging with canon soon doesn't mean it is going to be like canon. If anything, it's going to be a wild ride. The bit about Sid's relationship with Braska is a little of truth and of my creation. I seriously doubt that he didn't approve of Braska entirely. However, since you see so little of Braska and Yuna's mom, I used the little leeway there was to build around the reason for Sid sending Naruto to be Yuna's guardian. Now for your amusement and mine, and perverted, possibly M-rated, omake. Omake. Oh my god. Just look at them. Brother drooled over the sight before him, holding a pair of binoculars and using the shade of the palm tree, and the tree itself, to hide his presence as he watched many of the albed women bath in the oasis. Besides him, his best and only friend Buddy sighed and could only shake his head, somewhat upset that he didn't have a pair of binoculars on him. I think we should get out of here. We're pressing our luck already. You worry too much. Brother nearly yelled at him but kept his voice just under control so that it didn't draw the attention of any of the nearby girls bathing, one of which happened to be Riku, but he just didn't seem to care or give incest a thought in the slightest. As long as we're quiet they won't spot us, okay? Man, I still don't know about this. Being this close is pretty risk. Buddy commented, keeping himself just out of view, and tried to convince his friend to get the heck of Dodge. And don't you have a job guarding Naruto? I mean, he's going to be pretty pissed if he finds out you're skipping on your duties again just to get a good look at the women here. Wincing as he remembered the last time Naruto had caught him peeping instead of staying on task, brother grumbled. Just what is his problem? I mean, I know he's into them just from how he looks at my sister. And damn does she have a smoking hot body, so I can't fault him for that, but why punish us when he does the same? Because I don't blow off work to go chase tail or spy on the ladies, idiot. Naruto's voice boomed from behind them. And both brother and Buddy froze in place hearing the sage behind them before they picked up by their collar, or in brother's case the right string of his overalls, and forced to look him in the eyes. I told you both what would happen if I caught you doing this again, and I am not going to be lenient this time. So. Without warning, both Buddy and brother were flung from their hiding spot and splashed into the middle of albed women bathing before Naruto's voice echoed from the edge of the pool. Just to let you ladies know. Those two peeping toms were googling all over you. Have fun. Naruto waved goodbye as he turned around and left the two to their horrible fate and ignored their screams of agony and their calls for help. And once he was out of sight, Naruto shook his head as he found a comfortable, shaded spot to relax in before plopping to the ground. After a moment, just to make sure there was nothing and no one around, he pulled out a small screen out of his pouch before grinning as he activated it. Thank you, Shinra. You were a life savior. And watching as brother and Buddy got beat half to death, Naruto laid back and grinned as he had a good view of all the beautiful carnage, made even more beautiful by the high definition of the feed he was watching. Oh man. What sensei would give to be me right now. Enjoying your little peep show now, are you? Riku's voice came from behind Naruto along with the crackling of knuckles. And instead of panicking or freezing, Naruto simply turned to Riku knowing what about to happen and just egged it on. Meh, would enjoy it more if you didn't have that towel on. That can be arranged. Riku stated and dropped her towel, completely freezing Naruto by catching him in surprise as he just wasn't expecting that. He never saw the next 72 kicks to the crotch coming, however he still couldn't complain. Riku did have an amazing body. After an extended stay at the hospital for unknown injuries, read injuries that make any male cringe, Naruto was released straight into the expedition. And it had been a long expedition to this point. A long one. Naruto had never been a good traveler. Even his training trip was Jiraiya utterly boring until they actually stopped and did something. Even if it was hitting up brothels and bars half the time. At least then they were doing something. Or someone. How he hated that perverted bastard at times. Did he understand how hard it was to perform for him when there was a clown watching him get it on out the window? It had only been a few days, but it was a few days of nothing as the mechanical specs were taken care by crew that knew what they were doing and there was hardly a fiend of any worry around. Sahagin and a few piranhas here and there was all they were running into, and the guard crew could take care of them in the blink of any with a flurry of lead. They of course let him take out a few seeing his boredom, but they were doing the majority of the work so that he could be fresh if a big one came by. And he couldn't really blame them on that as there was said to be some very dangerous fiends out at sea, not to mention that Sin was an oceanic creature by nature, though that didn't mean it could come inland and could even fly. That one he had to wonder about. Just how could something so massive, something that easily outmatched Kurama in height, length and weight, fly around so effortlessly? It really bothered him and he just had to wonder how it did so without wings. And if he did, maybe he could learn how to fly himself. And then go back to Konoha, transform into Pain's diva body, then float above the village and shout, Shinra Tensei, as a prank. After mildly amusing himself with that thought, Naruto returned to his boredom as he looked at the sea brush by the boat as it cruised through the waters with relative ease. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, he sighed out before turning around and leaning on the railing before drawing the pistol Sid had given him just before the expedition had set out and inspected it. He had never used a gun before, however he did deem it an effective weapon and wasn't going to let it gather dirt and rust. By no means was it an effective weapon against fast shinobi, as they would easily weave out of the trajectory, but it would work here against fiends and possibly soldiers if they turned hostile on him. Sid had modified the pistol so that it would use a different round of ammunition than what the others used. This specific pistol fired high-velocity explosive rounds at a semi-auto rate that would even pierce some of the stronger fiends' hides. And while he could probably do more damage with his kunai and explosive tags, those would soon be in low stock and he couldn't just stock up on them, so he had to be careful on how he used them. And seeing that Sid had supplied him with plenty of clips, he wouldn't be running out anytime soon. And even if he did, he could send a message for a new shipment, as he would most likely have to once he headed off to Besaid to find Yuna, weasel his way into her group and then guard her. Shouldn't be too hard, as even if he failed he could still protect her from a distance, cast a genjutsu on her and her friends to alter their thoughts to allow him in, or just kidnap her. Overall, he had too many valid and usable options when he eventually got there. Seeing a Sahagan overboard and blowing its head off with his pistol out of sheer boredom, making some of the crew look at him oddly for a moment, Naruto twirled the pistol along his finger, occasionally catching it by the handle and taking aim at an imaginary target in the sky or sea, before stopping and sighing. This was going to be a long trip. Getting bored, are we? Riku's voice chimed as she exited from the ship's bowels and stepped onto the deck. You should really be careful with that thing. You might accidentally send off a round. Safety-san. Plus my reflexes are fast enough to alter the trajectory and just have it shoot up or into the sea. Naruto placed his other hand over his mouth and yawned. So what are you here for? Are we finally getting close to the site? Riku simply shook her head. Not hardly. That's still a few days south from here, and I've got bad news. A storm is brewing in the south and it looks bad, so we're going to be stopping at the southernmost island of Baj before heading on once the storm passes. Groaning in agony, wondering when the torment of travel would end, Naruto placed his pistol into its holster and slumped over the railing. Great. Just great. Another couple of days added to his already long-winded trip. I think I just might take an extended nap to pass the time. Now don't be like that. We can still find something to pass the time. Riku playfully wagged her finger at Naruto, grinning as it was fun to play around with the sage, as he just was so childlike at times. Considering that he was 17 and well, he was still a kid and could get away with it, unlike her lazy bum of a dad when he wanted to go run off and doing something exciting instead of doing his job. I don't see a towel or a secluded area, so I don't see just how. Ow. Naruto replied before rubbing the back of his head as Riku smacked him across the back of his head with as much force as she could muster. I thought that you'd be over that by now, and hardly doubt even you can fully recover from that. Riku hissed at him with a deep crimson blush adorning her cheeks, remembering who she willingly dropped her towel to catch him off guard so she could absolutely destroy him. And it did work, but there was hardly anything left for him to imagine about her. She only had a yellow bikini on, and that was soaked, giving him a clear sight of her body. High-tier regeneration is a godsend. Naruto muttered to himself before shaking his head, seeing Riku narrow her eyes and glare daggers at him. And besides, I didn't get to see as much as I thought I would. Just enough to keep me interested for a while longer till I see the whole package. Clubbing Naruto upside the head, which hardly did anything more than hurt her arms as it seemed that the rest of his body was made of steel, Riku rubbed her hands and glared at him for a moment longer before shaking her head and joining him in leaning against the railing, watching the sea roll by. Then a great idea popped into her head. Remembering the details of the islands, Riku turned to Naruto with an excited grin. Hey, do you know that there is some ruins just past the southernmost island of Baj? Now what if we head just a little further south and hit them while the storm passes and call it a salvage mission? That way we can pass the time and see if there is anything there worth salvaging. Looking at the bubbling albed girl as she nearly bounced in place at her idea, Naruto blinked at her for a moment. Then he turned away and shrugged. Might as well see if we can. Anything beats this. Alright. Time to go exploring. Riku shouted in triumph and pumped her fist up. I'll tell the captain to head just a bit further and see if we can't get there. After all, I'm in charge of this ship and that makes me captain. And as long as I'm not the first mate, I couldn't care less. And if I was, there would have already been mutiny. Ow. Naruto rubbed his head once more as Riku steamed over his comment. Shut up. Naruto could only grin. Just how easy was it to get a good laugh out of the girl's expense? The weather quickly turned for the worse, but it held out long enough for them to reach the ruins before it really started to get bad. The rain was coming down harshly, stinging to the touch, and the wind was blowing with such velocity that it took small and controlled steps for the crew to safely move forward. Lightning flashed in the stormy clouds, making Riku tremble and worry that this was a bad idea, before the thunder boomed and she nearly jumped out of her skin. The swells were making the boats uninhabitable for the time being, and thankfully, thanks to the anchors and tying the ship down, they wouldn't be going anywhere. So there was no choice now. They were going to stick out here for a while. And at the very least there was something to do here. And it just so happened that the ruins here were massive. It was almost as if it was a temple at one time before it was destroyed, obviously by sin, as the carnage was overwhelming, and with all the pyre flies floating around the structure gave many of the albed the shivers, as there was just something off about this place. However, it did not bother Naruto, as he could sense that there was something indeed here, but it was something to worry over. And even if it was, as long as it wasn't sin, he could deal with it. And even if it was sin, he would find a way to drive it off. He was Uzumaki Naruto, and the impossible was possible with him. Looking up into the black and storm sky and ignoring the gale that had picked up on their arrival, Naruto closed his eyes and let the rain wash over him. It felt oddly relaxing despite the booms of thunder and the flash of lightning. However, it did last long, as there was a loud, feminine yelp and someone clinging onto him right after the boom of the thunder. "Can we hurry up and get inside, please?" Normally Naruto would have poked fun at Riku, but this was truly pathetic and he couldn't pick on her at this moment. She was so afraid of thunder and lightning that she was having a near panic attack, and Naruto had to wonder if there was already some deep-seated fear of it before brother had accidentally zapped her along with the fiend. There had to be something more to this. Sighing and turning to the crew that had decided to come with them, Naruto pointed at the elaborate gate-like door of the temple. "See if it can still open, and if not, blow it open. Even if there is nothing inside, we can use it for shelter at the very least." The two, Nedis and Rop, if he remembered their names correctly, went to the door and attempted to push and pull it open, as it wasn't exactly obvious on which way the door actually swung. However, after a moment it was clear they weren't going to pry it open even after using a few tools. So after setting a few explosives at the gates and heading for cover under some nearby rubble, they hit the switch and blew the doors off their hinges. And after waiting a few moments to make sure it was all clear, they small group entered the temple and saw the devastation of this place. "Well, at least we're in." Nedis chuckled as he knew they used a little too much, after noting that one of the main doors was smashed against the wall on the other side of the room. Shaking his head, as if that was the main goal, as it would most likely calm Riku down, Naruto examined the room for himself. Noting what seemed to be a burn pile, one that hadn't been used recently from what he could see, Naruto placed Riku down. "Let's see if we can find anything burnable and get a fire started." Taking his orders as it was Survival 101 instructions and a necessity at the moment, the three of them scavenged any and everything that was burnable within the room that they could find. Once they did, Naruto started a controlled fire with a jutsu that Jiraiya had taught him, made specifically for camping. And whether he liked the perverted sage methods and habits, he did have to give the man credit. He made sure that he was ready to survive and live in mostly any situation. As the fire crackled and was burning well, Riku seemed to snap out of her phobia and slowly returned to her normal self, slowly, only flinching everything thunder boomed overhead. However, once she did, she was very upset with herself. "I panicked again. I can't keep doing this." "You needn't worry." Rop surprisingly responded from across the fire and shook his head at her. "Everyone is afraid of something, and it is only natural that you will lose your head at times. It is just a matter of learning how to control that fear, and that takes time. Take Nedis for example. He was scared of water when he was little, but now he plays blitzball. Oh, what about you being afraid of bugs after running into a swarm of them a few years back? You keep freaking out every time you see a small group of any time of bugs nowadays." Nedis countered after his friend spoke of his former fear of water. "Don't bring that up. What about your fear of talking to beautiful women?" Rop angrily yelled back at Nedis, who looked furious, if one could see behind the gas mask he was wearing. And as he yelled back Rop, Naruto leaned into Riku and whispered into her ear. Let's go exploring while these two deal with their issues." Agreed. Riku quickly got up and went toward the closest door, which thankfully led to a hallway, with Naruto quickly following. "Geez. I swear those two act more like a couple when they get together. I thought they acted more like us." "Ow." Naruto commented before Riku turned on a dime and slapped Naruto. "We are not a couple." Riku screamed at him indignantly while her cheeks were adorned with a light pink blush. Though whether it was from anger or embarrassment, no one could say. And Naruto honestly didn't care, as he got yet another rise out of Riku. It sometimes was just too easy at times to get her to react out of her norm. "Alright. If you're done goofing around, let's go see if there is anything salvageable in here." Riku calmed down before grabbing a torch and setting the tip of it ablaze with a lighter. Yet at the very moment she did that, a horrible screech filled the hallway and a dark figure from the end of the hallway rushed her. Its speed was commendable, however it just didn't match the honed reflexes of a highly skilled shinobi with a gun that just happened to have explosive ammunition. Naruto openly fired 3 rounds in a quick burst, catching the sword-legged beast in the head. However, unlike the Sahagin or piranhas, this fiend was actually able to survive the full force of the blast, but just barely if that, but the damage of the bullets had nearly taken its head off and mutilated it horribly. The click roared in agony and rubbed its disfigured and burning face against the wall, attempting to dilute the pain. However, it was all over as one more shot was fired and its head was taken clean off. Watching as the body disintegrated and turned to fireflies, Naruto shook his head, having a feeling that fiends would be here. This place was rich in fireflies, and from what he heard, fiends were drawn to the energy they emitted like a moth to a flame. So it wasn't much of a surprise to see such a fiend. Better be careful. Who knows just how many of these things are here? Naruto stated before moving back to the door and opening it just in time to see Netis and Rop draw their guns. No need to worry, boys. Just keep on guard while Riku and I head further in. In fact, you might want to call a few others in to help. Just took out a fiend that took 4 explosive rounds to the head. Seeing Netis and Rop's jaws drop at hear that and seeing them pull out a flare to call for some help, Naruto turned back to Riku with a small grin. That should keep them busy while we roam. However, as they wandered through the halls and passages in this temple, it became obviously clear that there was no way to the rest of the temple. It was odd that they couldn't find any way through, and they could clearly see the rest of the ruins from the windows, but finding a way over to them without resorting to Naruto's abilities was to no avail. Finding a library, or what was left of the library, Naruto frowned as Riku took a book from the shelf, hoping for a map of the place. This entire area was too fresh to be considered ruins. It was as if this place was just recently destroyed within the last decade or so, as there was hardly anything that could be considered ancient. In fact, everything, outside of the sheer amount of rubble, led him to believe that this place was no ruins at all or even a temple. From what he found here, it seemed to be more like a house. Well, a mansion, but his statement was solid. There was bedding, fancy bedding, but bedding nonetheless. There was a library full of books that weren't all historical or based on Yevon, some being children's stories, and finally there was molded pictures of people he had never met. Someone had lived here, and he was betting they had the misfortune of having sin passing by. This doesn't seem right. This place seems like someone lived here. Naruto spoke out loud as he examined every last detail he could find in this room. And from these pictures, it wasn't too long ago. Putting her book down as it was just another kid's story, Riku walked over to examine the painting before her eyes widened, realizing who it was. Former Maester Jiscal Guado. Why would his portrait be hung here? I've found several of him along with a woman and young child throughout the area. I'm beginning to think that this place belonged to him. Naruto explained and withdrew a few smaller portraits he had found from his pouch and handed them to Riku. And as she looked over them, she couldn't help but agree. I think you're right. I think this place was their home, and now that I think about it, it makes sense, especially considering that Jiscal married a normal woman. Raising his eyebrow, not knowing too horribly much about the races of Spira, Naruto just had to ask. And why is that? I don't see anything wrong about a Guado wedding a human. Outside of a few physical differences, everyone is still mostly human, even the Ronso. Sighing as she had to explain, Riku shook her head and plopped down on the bedding within the room, finding it still rather comfortable despite having aged and covered with dirt and moss. The Guado are considered one of, if not the most, racially intolerant race throughout Spira, and believe a Guado must marry a Guado, Ronso with another Ronso, and so on and so forth. For one of such high praise to marry a normal woman, I bet it infuriated the clan as a whole, and he had to keep the entire relationship secret. As such, this place was most likely built so he could protect his family from his own race. And seeing as the Guado aren't seen with the greatest respect either, I doubt his child was looked upon very well either. So in short, he isolated them here to protect them from the harshness of this world, and it didn't seem to work very well from the look of things. Riku finished then inferred as the entire premise was a wreck. Frowning at hearing that racism was a key force in this world, something he detested greatly, Naruto spat. Just how stupid were people in this world? It didn't matter what someone's outward appearance was. All that mattered was that person was human, and they deserved to be treated as such unless they had done something to warrant distrust and hatred. It is all right, child. This world is different from your own. What the? Naruto jumped from his spot and drew a kunai along with his pistol and gazed around the room, looking around to spot where the voice had come from. Instead, he found nothing and alerted Riku that something was amiss and had her slip her claws on and prepare for a fight. What is it? Continuing to look around through squinted eyes, the sage simply growled in his throat. Something just spoke to him, and he knew it wasn't Kurama. However, the more pressing issue was it seemed like he was the only one that heard it. You didn't hear it? A voice. A feminine voice just spoke. Glancing at Naruto with suspicion, worried that he might be going crazy, Riku immediately shook her head of that. Naruto was annoying and he was eccentric, but crazy he was not. If he heard something, it meant he heard something. No, I didn't. What did it say? It was calming, but it knew what I was thinking and told me that this world is not like my own. Naruto growled as he and Riku moved back to back, slowly exited the room and looking around for what had spoken to him. Reaching the room where they had made camp at, seeing quite a few more albed having made it there and were at rest, Naruto's eyes narrowed to a slit as he heard the voice once more. Come to me. We have much to discuss. Through the wreck of that room there lies a passage. The voice stated and directed him to the northern end of the room where did indeed notice a blocked-off passage. Come through there and you will find a flood room with a great beast slumbering. Come alone and it will not startle you as it fears the power you possess. There an underwater passage on the northwest side followed by a door. That is where I reside. Come to me and I will answer your questions. The voice finally stopped and left Naruto weary about the direction he had just received. Glancing across the room, just to make sure no one was playing a prank on him and checking within to make sure Kurama was still passed out as he wouldn't put it past the fox do something like this, Naruto gazed at rubble of the north end for a moment. Finally making a move, he brushed aside the rubble and there indeed happened to be a still usable passage and stairs leading downward and into a great mass of water. Whoa! Riku muttered as she followed behind Naruto before he turned to her. Just how did you? Never mind about that right now. Stay here while I scout up ahead. There is something here and I want to find out just what it is. Naruto ordered the albed girl before creating multiple clones to stay here in case this was a trap. I'll be back soon, but keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Before Riku could respond or argue, Naruto sprinted down the stairs and dove into the water. Thanking that he had goggles on, otherwise it would have been difficult to see underwater. He saw the exit of the temple and swam through it only to enter a bigger pool of water that filled the area outside. Surfacing to catch his breath and to take a look in the area, Naruto noted that it wasn't really all that different from the rest of the ruins. The only difference was this was under a good 20 feet, if not more, of water and had become a good-sized pool. Just taking a minute to absorb the area's layout, noting the pathways above and followed to where they went, Naruto took a deep breath before he sought out the underwater passage on the northwest side. And as he made it there, bursting out at the end of the tunnel and taking a deep breath, it felt as if he was being watched as he did. There was definitely something there and it had simply let him pass by without any trouble. It was just as the voice had said. The fiend here seemed to stand down as he passed by, as if he was afraid of him. Not going to be one to complain about a good thing, as an underwater fight would be difficult even for him. He entered through the doors and ended in a room unlike any other he had seen before. It looked like a place of worship with all the shrines within, and he quickly recognized most of the symbols on the shrines. These were shrines to the other temples. Besaid, Kilika, Jose, Makalania, Bevel and oddly enough Zanarkand. Each shrine was there. However, the owner of the voice was not anywhere to be seen yet. There was still another door at the end of the room. And seeing as no one was here, he made his way to the door, figuring that was where the voice was coming from, before the door suddenly opened for him. He was startled by this and crouched into a battle-ready stance, but there was no one behind it. Still not taking any chances, he drew forth a kunai and inched his way ever so slowly into the room. Yet once he was in, he recognized something was off. The room, outside of being a dead end, was just a round, circular room with a single glowing statue of a creature wrapped in bandages and chains that happened to embedded into the ground. And yet he felt as if there was someone or something in this room, yet he could not see it. Was it possible that it was the statue? But that didn't make any a faith. Naruto muttered to himself at the sudden realization on where he was and what he was standing before. The said statue began to glow eerily before it flashed, nearly blinding Naruto in the process, before a woman dressed in a simple blue and white kimono stood before him. It has been so long since someone has come. And now that you are here, I can't help but sense you are the one we faiths have been calling for. The faiths have been calling for me? Naruto looked genuinely shocked at this bit of news, not realizing that he did not come here on just some random chance. Yes. We have summoned you. You the one that brought peace to your world and can bring peace to ours. The faith responded as she looked upon the sage's form. This tidbit immediately raised alarm bells across the board. Something just wasn't right about that. And he didn't like it at all. That can't be. That would have meant you knew I was trying to transcend worlds. Yes, the faith stated, finished with her observation, and gazed straight into his narrowed and slitted eyes. We sensed this action, and at that very moment we pulled our powers together and drew you to this world as we were in dire need of a champion.
A champion that could raise up and not only end this endless cycle of death and corruption but to free us from this prison Yevon has sentenced us to.
Still not liking what he was hearing, mostly because they eliminated the random nature that the dimensional gate was supposed to offer, Naruto glared at the female faith. So you brought me here sensing I could this. But I have to ask why me? I'm sure there were others that you could have used. The faith shook her head and gazed longingly towards the sage. No. You were the only choice. You are the only one that has a connection to this world, though you don't understand yet as to why you were destined to come here all along, as our worlds have always been closely linked to one another and have shared similar fates. What? Naruto said in confusion, blinking at what was just said. Wait a minute here. You're saying that it was always meant for me to come here due to the fact that our worlds just happen to be intertwined with one another. Not to mention that it sounds like you're saying that major events that happens to one world happens to the other. That just does not seem possible.
The female faith sadly smiled and nodded her head. But it is for you see 1,000 years ago sin was created in this world. Just as Jubi was created in yours. Just how do you know of that? Naruto roared at the mention of the 10-tailed demon and had begun unintentionally draw upon Kurama's chakra and was near moments from activating his chakra form. Closing her eyes, letting fireflies swirl around her for a moment before they disappeared, the faith opened her eyes and responded. You told me, your presence as well as the others that come from your world have allowed us sight there and allowed us to know of your world's history. And yet again Naruto was put on edge at yet another thing the faith had said. So gnashing his teeth at this new bit of information, Naruto hissed out. You mean that there are others from my world that happen to have lived here and or currently living here?
Yes. For you see there is unwritten law that binds our worlds together, and while we faith don't yet entirely understand it ourselves, we know that it allows certain chosen people to transcend the world's borders after death and arrive in the other world. She attempted to explain, for not even she or the other faith knew exactly why this was. Keeping from lashing out at the astral image of the faith in frustration, as it wouldn't accomplish anything, Naruto bit his lip. Of all things to learn this was not something he wanted to hear, especially since there was the prospect of running into someone that he particularly didn't like, aka Orochimaru or Kagami. And hearing that he was brought here, on purpose, really lit a fire in him. While he wanted to good in the world, just to hear he was brought here, partially against his will as he could have ended up somewhere else if they had let him, was infuriating. It was like he had no choice in the matter yet again. He hated destiny or fate, yet it always seemed to find him and drag his ass along for the ride. Still he was able to reel in his emotions just enough to speak again. Why is that you called me here, Faith? If it was just to inform me of this and my purpose here, you can save. I'm not here for you or your kind. I'm here on my own choice and I am helping the people here on my own free will. You are right. I called here to grant you my power. Seeing Naruto's eyebrows raise and feeling the intense distrust coming from him, the Faith continued on. We Faith have more than one way to grant a person power, yet Yevon has forbade it as they fear the power we grant with our summons was dangerous enough. Fireflies began to glow and wildly fly before Naruto, just at the edge of the glowing Faith statue, and beginning to mold and take the shape of what seemed to be a large blade. A great sword it seemed. We have had the power to grant our summoners weapons to help them along. Weapons of great power. So take my blade and its power will be yours. The power of Ragnarok. The Faith called out and her astral image disappeared as the weapon completely formed before Naruto. Taking a moment to examine the scarlet blade, Naruto finally reached for the handle and tugged the blade free. To his surprise, the blade was much lighter than what he had anticipated and could easily be wielded in one hand if the occasion called for it. Swinging it before him a few times to get a feel of the blade, Naruto noted that the blade had two leather straps connected to the hilt and shook his head. Of course they would make a holster for the blade convenient, though once again he wasn't complaining as he shifted the blade onto his back. Yet as he headed out, the Faith's voice echoed from behind. I have one request, champion of the Faith. When it is time, bring the lady summoner to me. She will need my power just as you will. When that time comes, we will see. Naruto exited the chamber and headed back to whence he came. Yet as he emerged from the water to the stairs, he saw one very irate albed standing there, waiting for him. And somehow Naruto knew that this was going to take a long, long time. Well, at least he got something out of it all, even if it was going to be a pain to explain. Flicking his hand through his hair, Naruto looked up into the gray sky above. The weather in the area had cleared, but just didn't seem like the cloud cover would disappear for any reason. He was sure that only a force of nature could clear these skies, and unfortunately he didn't have that kind of power. Some days he wished he had convinced Konan to let him have Nagato's Rinnegan. It would have made things so much easier. And it also would have kept Kagami's filthy hands off of them. However, it wouldn't be too long until his boredom would be alleviated at the very least. Another few days on the boat after the storm had passed had begun to drive Naruto stir-crazy once more, and his patience was wearing thin. He just wasn't a very patient person and tended to act on reckless impulses. And this just almost happened to be one of those moments. But finally they were here, and he didn't have to do something drastic to entertain himself. That small miracle had saved the majority of the albed aboard from having to deal with the Prank King's resurrection. However, there were a few immediate problems that were going to require his attention. First of all, the amount of fiends in the area would greatly slow down any operations, so he would have to go down, with some help at least, to rid the number of underwater fiends. That was probably going to be the easiest part of the day. The second portion, he would have to join Riku to guard her as she traveled down to the submerged station to restore power. Thankfully everything seemed to still work. A true miracle considering it all was underwater, and it just needed power. And once it was on they could have a better view, and lighting seemed to keep fiends away. Which made him wonder just how many fiends occupied the station that he had to clean up around it before Riku and others could dive. And finally the third and hardest part of the day. Just how in the hell was he supposed to hold his breath for great lengths of time? He wasn't a whale and didn't have that kind of lung capacity. In fact, now that he thought about it, he wasn't sure just how long he could hold his breath for. He honestly never tried, as he never thought that he would have to be submerged for lengthy periods of time. And now that he thought about, he could remember Kakashi held his breath for quite a while when he was held in Zabuza's water prison. It was only for a few minutes, but maybe there was something to it. It seemed like he could have gone for much, much longer. Kakashi didn't have to, thanks to Sasuke's and his teamwork, to rescue the scarecrow from Zabuza's clutches. Part of him really wished that he had asked how his former sensei had done that, as it seemed very useful at this moment now that he was going to have to be submerged for minutes at a time, if not longer. Something tells me this is going to be another long day, Naruto muttered to himself as he gazed down towards the waves that wisped along the boat's edges. Preparing to head beneath, he unbuckled his pouch from his thigh, as there were things within that could be damaged by water, mainly scrolls. However, he needed certain things like his kunai at quick disposal, as he would not be able to use his pistol underwater, one of the few downsides to the weapon, and would be forced to become a close-range fighter. Not that there was anything different to that than normal, but his speed, agility and even his strength would be drastically decreased as he was under due to his lack of training for underwater battles. Only mist shinobi were efficient in that style of battle, and that was due to the location of their village being in the land of water, which just happened to be a massive island. And another downside was that his jutsu repertoire was cut while he was under. Fire jutsu were completely off the table, and he had quite a few of those. Earth techniques were simply a waste of time, as their seafloor was too far away to be any help, and wind jutsu were muffled and their power cut to a quarter to what they were capable of. Lightning jutsu, the few that he knew outside of the black lightning techniques that Darui taught him, were too dangerous to himself and the others around him, as the lightning's current was not able to be tamed in water and freely spread in all directions. Water was the only usable element, yet he knew one, maybe two if he counted his newest jutsu he developed, and it was hardly an effective attack while within the water. Honestly, he wished he could learn how to use the spells he had seen others use, but he just didn't have the capacity unless he was in sage form, as it harnessed this world's energy and that included magical capacity. Still, they were below par in comparison to what his jutsu could do, and he scrapped the idea, as if he was only doing genin level damage while in sage form. It kind of defeated the purpose of using it. Sealing away his pistol and his pouch, after sealing kunai in seals on his wrists for quick access, Naruto stood up from his seated position and gave the water beneath the ship a stony gaze as he cranked his neck and prepared to jump in. "All right. Let's get this done." "You don't know how to swim, do you?" Riku commented from behind him just as he was about to dive, surprising Naruto as he stumbled forward and flopped into the water instead of gracefully diving as he planned. Laughing at his misfortune, while he flopped around like a helpless fish for a moment before gaining control to glare at her, Riku crouched down and gave him an amused grin. "Well, it seems like you can swim after all." "I hate you," Naruto growled out as his head floated above the surface of the water. "I don't even know just how long I'm going to be able to do this, as water is just not my element, and I've never bothered to figure out just how long I can hold my breath before. The longest I ever did it was when I was fighting that bastard I used to call my friend, and that was only for a minute, maybe two." "Oh, don't worry." Riku waved him off and shook her head. "I doubt you'll have any trouble. Your conditioning is better than every member of the Psyches, so you should be physically fine while you're under. They might beat you in lung capacity, but you should be able to get through this faster than anyone else could." Rolling his eyes, as he knew the fiends were a lesser threat than the very water that was surrounding him, Naruto sighed as he swiftly turned and kicked an unsuspecting piranha that had tried to bite him, smashing its head in and killing it instantly from the force. Then he turned back to Riku and shook his head. "I swear if I drown I'm going to haunt you." Well then come up for air if you need a dummy. You have those clones to provide a distraction just in case you're swarmed while you're down there. Riku sarcastically responded and told him off as she knew very well he could do this quite easily. And at that moment Naruto smacked his forehead at the epiphany Riku had given him. Oh son of, why did I not think of that? Because you're a reject and have the tendency to gravely annoy me and wake me when I don't want to be woken, you imbecile. A familiar voice roared within his head as he was just about to perform the shadow clone technique. And he still did, but was mildly surprised as his clones came to life in mass and began to scout out the area, taking care of any fiends. Kurama? You finally woke up? Don't get used to it, kid. I'm still plenty tired, but not even I can sleep for months on end even if I'm utterly exhausted and my power nearly completely drained. Kurama commented in a light growl, almost like someone that just woke up and had a headache, hangover. I won't be awake for long, but I've recovered up to 10% of my normal capacity and can be woken if need be.
Nodding to himself as he dived underwater to take a look and scout out the path he and Riku would be taking to the station below, noting how easy this seemed to be despite how murky the water was, Naruto was actually able to continue his conversation with the fox. Well, that's better than nothing. At the very least I know now that just in case I run into sin I can wake your ass up, as I have no doubt I'll be unable to handle it on my own power.
Frowning on his end, Kurama tiredly growled at hearing this and watched as his vessel mapped out his route within the underwater station, checking each corner to make sure nothing popped up, and surprised him later when he took the female under with him. Alright. Tell me what you know, kid, as that doesn't sound good at all. Just what the hell is this sin thing you're talking about? Don't spare a detail, as I need to know everything if we're going to survive. Killing a group of piranhas that were lying in wait, Naruto mentally sighed before he exited the station and went to surface. Well, let me get to the surface. This will take some time to explain. I've got all day. Kurama grunted in response, as he had nothing but time ever since he was sealed away, and despite his exhaustion he knew he needed to hear what his vessel had learned while he was out. This was important. Their survival could be on the line, and that was the last thing he wanted to hear. Emerging and taking a deep breath of air, Naruto flipped onto the deck of the boat. Okay. That wasn't too difficult. I think I can hold my breath for a few minutes more if I had to, but that would be pushing it. Bring me a towel, would you? Naruto asked a crew member as he wanted to dry himself since he was going to be staying on deck for a while longer than what was originally planned. Well, you were under for about 3 minutes, so that's not too bad, Riku stated as she moved to his side to see how he fared while the guy into the ship, but quickly emerged having a few ready. So if you can hold your breath for say 5 minutes, that will be enough. Your clones seem to be taking care of the fiends, so let's get to this. In a moment. I have a long overdue conversation with a certain tenant of mine that's been asleep since my arrival, Naruto stated before he took a towel that one of the crew members had went to get for him. Thank you. Riku's jaw dropped before she dumbly nodded, remembering the conversation he had with her father in her presence, and knew what he was saying. However, it confused the crew member that brought Naruto the towel, as he understood Spirian, he just couldn't speak it. Someone else came with you. Seeing that she had to explain the situation, Riku tried to steer the man away so Naruto could speak to the fox demon. It's hard to explain. I have a demon of devastating power sealed inside of me, Naruto said without hesitation or fear of the man's reaction as he looked into his shielded eyes. It was sealed into me at birth, and over the years I have learned how to wield its power along with my own. It was and still is quite difficult to do so, as its power is capable of such devastation that mountains crumble before its presence and it leaves tsunamis in its wake with only a flick of one of its 9 tails. Everyone on deck was stunned at this revelation, and there happened to be quite a few people there, and Riku could only fear the possibility of what could happen. But it did not seem Naruto cared or happened to be finished with his story. And ever since it was sealed into me, I was hated and treated like trash. I struggled with that hatred, and at times I wanted nothing more than to give up and let the demon inside me take over. But I never did. I persevered and fought for everything from acceptance, respect, and even love, and I eventually made everyone see that I was one of them, not the demon that was sealed inside of me. I made them see I was a hero, and I sacrificed everything to save them, and they finally accepted me and treated me like I always wanted, like a person. And while that respect did not earn me what I truly dream of ever since I was a young child, it taught me what I did was right and brought me to the realization that there was still more good to be done, and that is why I came here. There is good still left undone, and I'm going to do what I can to set things right by any means necessary, even if it requires using all my power and my demons. Naruto finally finished now as he looked at the crowd that gathered during his speech. And each and every one of them was speechless at the story he had told them. Even Riku was left in awe at the raw passion and desire that carried throughout his speech and the determination he had to carry through with his ideal. Even Naruto was left a little weary after a full moment. No one had spoken yet, their gazes never left him, and it was beginning to unnerve him a little. It was just uncomfortable. But finally the man he had been speaking to originally spoke up. That is. The rumors are true. You are really here to save this world. I am just here to help in any way I can. That is all I can do, but I will do everything I can, and if that means to face off against sin, I will do so. I will not stand by as people suffer. Not as long as I can do something about it. Naruto responded as he balled his hands into fists, remembering the days when he was helpless and needed someone to save him. And someone did. And ever since that day, after his mission in life was to become like him and maybe one day surpass him, becoming the most benevolent and beloved Hokage. He would never forget the old man. He was the one that saved him when it mattered the most. He was the one that saved him from the darkness and kept him afloat. And soon after others came, and he no longer feared the darkness ever again. And all of it was thanks to the Sandaime Hokage. Would it be all right if we told the others about this? Another crew member spoke. This one female finally spoke after another moment of silence. Sharing this story would give everyone hope that maybe things will change. And hope is all we have ever had, but it has given us strength over the years to keep at it, as just maybe one day it will all end and we can live in peace. It's fine. Naruto nodded in agreement before looking up into the gray and cloudy sky, feeling a small droplet of rain brush against his cheek. Giving hope to those that need it is sometimes all that is needed. Because if there is hope, there is always a chance, and if there is a chance, there just might be a way to succeed. All that is ever needed is hope. Again everyone was silent this time, but this time Naruto didn't wait for someone else to speak and went inside the ship and went to his quarters to speak with Kurama. And the said fox demon was simply grinning at him. My. Haven't you matured, lil brat? Maybe I should just stay asleep more often. Oh, can it fuzzball? Now let's get on with this, as I'm sure I'm going to need your help. Naruto rolled his eyes as he entered his quarters and closed the door. Let's start at the beginning. 1,000 years ago in this world a horrible war was taking place. Great. Just great. Kurama groaned as he pawed his muzzle annoyingly, as this situation was very much one he didn't want to have happen. You know, sometimes I just wonder about your luck, as I swear shit like this happens to us. Hey, don't even bring up accidentally reviving Jubi, Naruto roared as he clearly knew what his demon was hinting about. That was a trap Kagami set up and caught us in. And I say it was a damn miracle we came out of that alive. That is true, but to put in a similar situation yet again with the odds stacked against us once more, just to save the world, Kurama muttered with his usual distaste before rolling his eyes. But we are here, and as much as I hate to say it, I agree with you, even if for a different point of view. It needs to be utterly destroyed, and the resurrection needs to be stopped, as I can feel something disturbingly off about this world, and if I'm right at what it is. I've sensed something odd about this world too since I've got here, especially when I enter Sage mode. I can't really pinpoint what it is that disturbs me, but there is something drastically different in how this world, I don't know, feels. Naruto responded as he had noticed while he became more powerful with his transformation, it had a different sense to it and he didn't like it. Kurama simply nodded. That is to be expected, as this world runs on magic. However, what most people don't know, and I do, is that magic is a natural energy source, but it does not come from the body originally. It originates in the planet, or to be more specific, it originates in the planet's life stream. Okay, what the hell? I've never noticed this feeling any time before when I've entered my sage form or our chakra state and I have enhanced sensory while I wield them. Naruto immediately questioned this statement, as this answer didn't satisfy his worries. Let me finish. Kyuubi growled at his vessel for interrupting him. Now, as I was saying, you are unable to pick up on anything wrong, as each and every world, as Nibi confirmed with me before we left, possesses a life stream very much like our own, so you wouldn't feel a difference unless something was desperately wrong or out of balance with the planet itself. Oh, Naruto responded in a sheepish manner as he thought Kurama had finished, and as usual came up with a quick response. Wait, that means. Good, you've caught on. There is something out of sort. No, not out of sorts. It is much worse than that. The fox continued before he grimly growled at his next choice of words that followed. The world's life stream is very much like chakra in that of a ninja, as it can be used by the planet or anything on the planet, which explains why the people here are capable of using magic. However, this world's life stream is starting to run dry. At this rate, this world will wither away. This statement shocked the sage and knocked him out of his meditative state as he jumped, alarmed. What? Keep it down, will you? Do you want to alert everyone else to this? The fox roared at his vessel. Naruto immediately calmed down as he heard a knock at his door and realized the Nine Tails was right. The less everyone else knew, the better. Alright, just what the hell is going on here? Is it possible that by wielding magic? No, there is no way that humans, even those on your level of ability, would be able to drain away from the world's life stream like this by just wielding magic for centuries if not millennia. Kurama tread carefully so his vessel would not explode again. Something else has been sapping the world's energy in massive quantities for a very long time. I believe it very well could be this Essen you spoke of. Shit. But that does make quite a bit of sense really. It is possible that it revives itself by using the life stream. Yet the way you stated it means that resurrection would require the same energy taken to revive. Naruto became oddly quiet and his mood turned somber at the mere thought of what he was about to say. Indeed. There is a new Jubi to contend with. Kurama growled out and angrily pawed at the gate. And unlike before, we want efficient backup this time in the form of Kurabi and Hachibi along with the shinobi nations. We're on our own this time. Naruto muttered under his breath as his door opened and Riku entered, looking rather worried. Is there something wrong? I heard you from down the hall. Riku tentatively asked as his voice had sounded startled and was extremely worried that something was gravely wrong. Naruto had never once sounded startled and even looked the part. He was steadfast like a mountain that split apart a great flowing river, as he always seemed calm even when he had heard the Faith's voice in the Baj ruins, something only he heard, and only brought his guard up. Sighing at Riku's entrance, knowing that she was one of the few he willingly allowed in his quarters and had the gall to come in without a response, Naruto shook his head. Don't worry about it, I was speaking with my tenant and he made me aware of an interesting fact that all worlds have in common. This immediately caught Riku's attention and in an instant she plopped down next to him with slight interest in her gaze and curious expression on her face. Refraining from groaning as it was obvious Riku wasn't going to let this drop, as she was indeed curious and he unfortunately made her aware of a small piece of his conversation with the Nine Tails. So the only way he was going to get rid of her easily was either to fib, something she was keen on picking up thanks to years of experience with her father and brother, or to tell her a part truth of his conversation with Kurama. Or you could make the first move and have screaming out your name to all who can hear as you fill her completely like no man can. His tenant came up with an ideal that he believed would please all parties, or at the very least him, while flashing him imagery of them in the act in quite a few different position and sexual acts. He was nearing his limit and would have to rest very soon, and what better way to send him out than to watch his vessel live it up with this gorgeous young girl with a very nice figure that was ripe for the picking. I swear to God, Fox. Now is not the time. Naruto internally roared at the Nine Tails, who he was beginning to realize was a great pervert, and swatted the images out of his head. I will make what Madara did to you look like schoolyard bullshit if you keep this shit up. Kurama immediately shut his lips as unfortunately he told Naruto everything about those years, and it seemed his vessel actually was paying attention to him then and had come up with torture devices for him. That was not favorable for him in the slightest. Alright, I'm heading back to Dreamland if that's the case, you prudish fuck. Kurama growled in defeat and let out a tired yawn. Wake me if you need me, or have the sudden urge to take my suggestion as, just saying, she would go for it for I can smell it. And with another yawn Kurama curled up and went to sleep, stopping any ranting Naruto could throw at him in any way, and leaving the blonde in a very irritated state. Goddamn that fox. Naruto growled out loud, not realizing he's speaking aloud, and wanted nothing more than to go inside the cage and give Kurama the beating of his life. Just suggesting that I even try to bed Riku. Unfortunately, he said that out loud and Riku's eyes widened and her face blushed scarlet at even the hint of having intercourse with Naruto. Yeah, sure, she had thought about it and she wasn't going to kid herself, for she knew she was attracted to him. But the ideal of him saying that aloud and had a conversation of that with his tenant with her in front of him. How dare he? Suddenly Naruto found his face meeting the cold flood and a stinging sensation on the back of his head, much like if Sakura had smacked him, and he groaned as he heard Riku storm to his door. Ow, what the fuck? Shut it, mister. Riku roared at Naruto, turning back and furiously stomping towards him and kicking him in the ribs. She continued yelling at him. If you didn't want to tell me what you two were really talking about, you could have just said it. Storming back to the door and grabbing the handle as Naruto groaned from his new injury and was still confused on what was happening, Riku turned back and looked at him with a stormy gaze. And by the way, I just might have if you weren't such a pervert. And with that she slammed the door shut and stormed off, leaving Naruto in agony and the sudden realization on what just happened. He had said those last few words out loud. And then there was the worst news. Kurama was right and he just missed another golden opportunity. And with that he cursed. Fucking horse shit, Kurama, you are so dead. The only response he got was the snore of the Nine Tails. But if one were paying close enough attention they would have noted the slight amusement within it. How Kurama loved screwing with his vessel. Time slowly trickled by without any real danger, for the fiends here were a piece of cake and caused Naruto no real inconvenience. On the next day, as Riku was too upset to do work the previous day for reasons the other albed could only speculate on, Naruto joined his fellow blonde in returning power to the station. Thankfully there didn't need to be any verbal communication underwater, so he kind of lucked out as Riku had still been mad at him to start the day off and instead used had signals. It mostly went off without a hitch outside of that squid, which his clones had somehow let by, yet again much to Naruto's annoyance. He easily took care of it though. Even if his mobility dropped in water, he was still much faster than much of the aquatic life. And much to his jargon, he really didn't get much of a test drive with Ragnarok as he cut through the fiend with a single swing. Needless to say, it was going to take a while for him to actually get a chance to figure out what was so special about this blade that the Baj faith had given him. All he knew was that it held some kind of power that Yevon feared and forbid them to give out to any of their summoners, for only they were allowed into the chamber of the faiths. So he really wanted to know what it did. Sighing as he would have to wait until an enemy of worthwhile status came around, Naruto kept an eye on his clones as they kept up a perimeter while the albed worked on excavating the sunken airship. He wasn't going to risk his clones goofing off this time as they were nearly done and he didn't want any more slip-ups. He swore that if Kurama had anything to do with his clones he would rip the fox a new asshole. But as he did, his mind began to wander and eventually his thoughts found their way back onto the source of his current problem. And she had blonde hair, spiraling green eyes, and just happened to be his boss's daughter. Riku had become surprisingly cold to him after his slip of the tongue and he was starting to get fed up with it. Of course he expected her to be mad, even if it was a misunderstanding, as he had accidentally let his thoughts slip off his tongue. But it had been a week now and she had yet to relent and kept her contact with him at a minimal while using as few words as possible. Yet as he said, the entire thing was a misunderstanding and he was reaching the boiling point and was about to rip her a new one too. And many of the other albed had noticed his concealed and rising anger, as while he could physically hide it, his aura, for it was far more potent than anyone else's, let them know what he was feeling, and it pissed him off. So everyone was staying out of his way and allowing Naruto to take out his anger on anything he could, whether if it was blowing off a head of Sahagin with his pistol, plowing through piranhas with just a kunai, or driving a Rasengan through the occasional squid. And it was a good thing. He was going overkill on everything in sight. If Kurama was awake, he was sure the fox would have said something along the lines of forget his worries and go get laid. And for one of those few times he felt that the Nine Tails would actually have a valid point. He did seem to be calmer after sex. Maybe it was another trait he inherited from the kitsune? Somehow managing to slip past his usually good senses, mostly because he was having a mock conversation with Kurama, Netis and Rop approached him as they were both on guard duty too. And he was nearly startled when they joined him on the railing and when Rop spoke out. Seems like you're having problems, so what's her name? Netis bit back a laugh but was unable to keep it from his voice as he answered for Naruto. Isn't it obvious? She 15 years old, stands about this high. Netis still was crackling with laughter as he lifted his hand about shoulder height, and has her father's rambunctious personality no matter how much she tries to deny it. As both Rop and Netis burst out laughing this time, not being able to keep it in, Naruto looked at them strangely for a moment. Then before he knew it, a light smile jerked on his lips and he let out a light chuckle. I guess I have been kind of a bummer as of late. You're telling us. At times it was downright scary seeing how you disposed of some of those fiends. Rop responded, still with a tint of humor in his voice but in a far more serious tone, as what he said was true. He was more than over killing the fiends he fought and downright eviscerating some of them. Having noted he had been doing that in his previous thoughts, Naruto sighed and nodded his head. On a few occasions he had went overboard and even used an Odama Rasengan on a group of piranhas, causing a great jolt in the water, nearly tumbling a few ships overboard in the process. But before he could respond, Netis continued on for Rop. Not to mention that your presence has just been screaming bloody murder of the last week and everyone has been too afraid to approach you out of fear of what may happen. Once again that was something that Naruto had noticed. No matter how hard he had tried to mask his feelings, and he was pretty sure he had been successful, his raw aura betrayed his appearance. It also probably didn't help that every time he spoke his words were laced with his killing intent. And yet again as he tried to speak he was interrupted again, this time by another voice from a little farther away as a certain blonde-haired teenage girl rose out of the ship's holds. Hey, why don't you three get back to work? Frowning as Riku's demeanor had yet to change, still seemingly vilifying him for his slip of words, Naruto finally had enough as Netis and Rop jumped back to their positions on the other side of the boat and confronted her. All right, that's enough of this. What is your problem, huh? Almost being startled by Naruto's sudden outburst, it took Riku a moment to gather herself enough to respond. And when she did so with a fiery comeback. What's my problem? My problem? What's your problem, pal? I have had the right to be upset, meanwhile you are throwing a fit because of my attitude. Which is justly deserved, I might add. So why don't you grow up? If he had been anyone else, Naruto would have been taken aback. However, he had grown accustomed to such attacks on his person and he wasn't going to back down at all. And what she said at the very end was the straw that broke the camel's back, and his killing intent spiked and his eyes took an all too familiar form that hadn't in some time. They became dilated and slanted. What was that? Naruto growled out at Riku, daring her to say it again as his aura radiated murder. Just what was that you just said? Right there at the very end of that little rant of yours. Riku was petrified, as this was a form of Naruto she had yet to see. His very image had turned positively feral and he looked like a wild human that had been raised by fiends all his life. Only his clothes said he was a civil being, but the aura he was radiating scared Riku to almost literal petrifaction. And Naruto wasn't finished. Do you know how much I had to endure, little girl? Do you really want to know? As I can certainly tell you, it was by no means a walk in the park. I suffered more than you or practically anyone can even comprehend. Do you understand what it is like to be utterly alone and to believe everyone hates you and believes you to be a demon? To be so mistreating by practically everyone that when someone actually showed kindness and compassion that you clung to that person hoping that they will be your lifeline out of the torment others put you through? To have others constantly put you down and keep you down when you tried your hardest to achieve your goals, as you wished for nothing more than to acknowledge you as who you were, a human being just like everyone else. No, I was treated like I was beneath everyone for the first 12 years of my life. Hardly a soul ever came for me and showed me compassion, and those that did I stuck to like glue and feared they might just leave me and become like everyone else. It took everyone to see me save their asses multiple times for me to finally be seen as one of them, an accepted member of society. Something I dreamed desperately of, and I made it happen. So never use those words against me again, child. Naruto hissed the last word out as he looked down at Riku, who had buckled at his words and was clutching her knees in desperation. Feeling disgusted by this, Naruto turned and jumped off the boat, heading out to find some greater fiend to take care of. He had a lot of anger to work out, and watching a whimpering little girl who hardly understood what it meant to suffer. She might have had a good idea, but her pain hardly compared to his. And now he was starting to sound like pain. Great, his day was getting much better. After having found no greater fiend, to his disliking, and having dispatched hundreds if not 1,000 of Sahagan, for he believed he found a colony of them, Naruto found himself still very displeased. Riku had hit one of the few hot-button issues that could make Naruto explode, and he would not come down from his anger for some time. However, he had a job to do, and despite his displeasure with the little girl at the moment, he would do his job. He would simply put her in her place again if she dare ever utter something like that again. Returning to the main ship, landing on the deck and causing the boat to shake as he did it with a little force behind it, Naruto turned to the closest albed. How has the progress been? The said albed was still a little startled by Naruto's sudden appearance, and the dreadful aura that he was still emitting still made him quite fearful. Everyone had felt his rage when Riku had pushed him beyond his threshold. However, he quickly put that aside as he realized he was being asked for a report and he did not want to anger the furious blonde further. We are making the last preparations to lift the airship to the surface. Soon we'll be heading back. Glad that at least one good thing had happened today and their trip here would be over soon, as he had enough of this annoying bullshit he had been dealing with that dealt with everything from the faiths to Riku, and a small smile cracked his lips and he sighed in relief. Finally. The albed was genuinely surprised this bit of news seemed to relieve the blonde shinobi that much. Then he realized, with the stress that everyone was going through and then the few ordeals that he personally went through, that entire Riku event that everyone knew about, along with whatever else was eating at the teen, had sent him over the edge for a moment. They were lucky that no one died and everything was still intact, as he had never felt such unrelenting bloodlust before, even from the deadliest and most bloodthirsty fiends. He had to give the shinobi credit. He had incredible control over himself. Naruto. The door to the holds opened and Riku walked out, still a fidgety and very nervous about coming up to Naruto, as she had seemingly broken the flood dams the last time she spoke to him. Save it. I'm still plenty furious, Naruto responded as he gazed over to her once before turning his back from it. You just happened to border one of the few subjects that push me to my limit. Can I at least apologize? Riku asked as the other albed up on deck went below, going to give the two time to talk it out. And they also wanted to stay out of the crossfire in case Naruto blew another gasket again. A fair reasoning after what had happened earlier. As Naruto stayed silent, but had yet to leave either, Riku decided to take this opportunity to try at the very least. Look. I'm sorry. I admit that I was angry at what had happened earlier and I went overboard with it. I feel even worse about what I said, as I know it hurt you. I didn't mean it and I wish I never said it. I guess I kind of forget that you aren't like everyone else from this world or my age at that. You grew up differently and in a world that people your age had to mature faster to survive the world you lived in. And in your case it must have been worse with all you grew up with. And for someone like me who has known hardship and hatred from those that believe in Yevon. I made a stupid mistake and should have known better. Staying silent as she apologized, Naruto had closed his eyes before letting out a sigh as he turned to her. It was. However, I will admit that I overreacted and I should have had better control of myself. And I also admit that not talking to you for a few days had me on edge. And this is all because of my slip of mouth from the damn fox teasing me. Wait. What? Riku froze before she jerked back a little. Are you saying that this was all misunderstanding? Yeah. Kyuubi does to me what I kind of do to everyone else, except he almost always has perverted intentions. Which now reminds me a lot of my late sensei. Naruto nodded at Riku's realization before he had his own about the Nine Tails being a violent version of his sensei. Oh. Feel even worse now. Riku looked down for a moment before she moved to Naruto, who had now moved to the edge of the boat. I'm sorry I jumped at you then. I was just upset and… Naruto? What's wrong? Naruto's entire being had gone rigid outside. The shaking of his hands had crushed the railing, his eyes had widened and his mouth was very slightly agape. Riku saw this and was very worried at seeing Naruto like this, and she too gazed at where he was looking only to see the calm sea before them. Not seeing it, Riku turned back to him. Hey, Naruto. This power. What the hell is this? Naruto growled as he tried to control his now shaking body at what he had sensed moving their direction. And there was only one thing it could be, as it was just as powerful as Jubi, if not even more so. It's Sin, it's coming this way. Riku's reaction soon mirrored what Naruto's was only moments before as her body went rigid, especially as she began to notice the water pulling from the boat and in the general direction they were looking. Oh no. And then she quickly ran to the cabin, busting the door open and grabbed the speakerphone before a surprise ship captain. Sin is approaching. Stop all operations and pull out of here now. Shit. Naruto growled as it was much closer than he had anticipated when he first felt the beast, and he knew nothing this powerful could go under his sensory radar, despite that he wasn't in Sage or Chakra form, and catch him off guard. This isn't good. At this rate it will pass through the fleet. There was no hesitation in his action, knowing what must be done. Flaring his chakra to shroud everyone else's presence with his own, Naruto leapt from the ship and onto the water and rushed in the direction he could feel the massive entity known as Sin. Naruto. He heard Riku cry out his name, and as he looked back at her saw her looking at him with wide eyes. Giving her a small smile and nod of his head, he continued rushing head-on with the behemoth that was rippling the water before him. Yet as he got closer, his vision began to blur. He shook his head a few times, and while the first time it restored his vision, the next it became harder and harder to focus and shrug off this feeling. Sin's toxin. Naruto's mind became clear, and for a moment so did his vision, remembering that small acid about what little was known about the great being. Just being near Sin had the ability to cloud vision and cause light amnesia in some cases. However, it was becoming clear this wasn't just clouding his vision. It was clouding all of his senses, not just his vision. His hearing, his focus, and even his ability to sense energy and life itself had become shrouded, and then he heard her voice. Naruto. Stumbling forward at hearing it and finding it very difficult to concentrate as he neared the gargantuan presence of Sin before him, Naruto fell into the water and began struggling to stay above water as he treaded water. This can't be. What is this? Naruto held his head in his hand while the other one kept him afloat in the torrent water. It was no longer just clouding visions and his senses. He was literally engulfed in a vision of something other than what he saw before him. And before him he saw a very blurred image, but a striking image. One that he knew very well, for it was not one he could ever forget. He could never forget the color of that hair. Before he knew it he was pulled under by the ocean's waves and the undertow of Sin's passing. And with a bellow from the beast it dived deep and the water went calm as it passed by the albed ships. The albed could only look on horror at the eerily calm waters as the great calamity known as Sin passed by them without so much as disturbing one of their boats. It was as if it was ignoring them, something the great destroyer was not known for. However, soon it dawned on each of them what had just happened. Naruto. Riku's cry echoed throughout the roaring silence that filled the fleet of ships. The young man that had been recently dubbed a hero by the albed, having saved many of their lives and given them hope by his mere presence that maybe there was a way to defeat Sin, was nowhere to be seen. For he had been taken by Sin. Naruto. Shivering as she felt a cold chill sliver down her spine, Matabi couldn't put back the sense of dread she suddenly settled into the pit of her stomach. Something just happened and she knew it. Something happened to her sage and that horrified her. He was practically strongest being in existence. Even if he did go to another world he would still be on the top end of power. So this feeling that was suddenly overcoming her, she knew something was wrong and she was desperate to figure out what that was. The only problem was even she would be weakened by transporting herself over to the world Naruto had been transported to. The odd glowing spheres of light had passed memories and sights to her when she touched one, and by that she was able to identify the world's seal so she could go there if need be. However, she was going to need help. Looking across the plains of the sanctuary, Matabi yowled loud enough that it echoed from mountain to mountain throughout their preserve, calling to her siblings. They would be the first step of getting the power she needed to transcend. The waves of the ocean gently rocked forth a ferry boat as it pierced through its waves onto its destination. The sun was slowly setting, leaving the sky a brilliant orange that was reflected off the water, giving it an unearthly feel to it. And watching this and standing at the front of the ferry boat was a young woman with brown hair and heterochromatic eyes, stood there watching the waves with a beast-like man standing just off to her side and behind her, acting very much like a bodyguard. Her journey had finally begun, but it felt as if something was missing. Her guardians Lulu, Waka and of course Kamari were here with her, but that wasn't what felt like was missing. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like there's something that was supposed to happen but didn't. That she was supposed to meet someone before she headed out, and that someone would forever change her life. It was a stupid to think something like that before her pilgrimage, but she couldn't quite put the feeling away. It was as if something had interrupted destiny, and she for some reason could sense that. Yuna. She heard from her guardian Waka as he and Lulu slowly approached the two and looked on at her with worry. She knew what they were worried about. She couldn't blame them either, for she too feared what lied beyond. But that fear would not hold her back, but that would not stop her from completing what needed to be done. She would not let doubt cloud her judgment. So Yuna simply smiled at them as she turned to greet them. I'm fine. I'm just taking in the sights before we reach Kilika. Forcing a smile as well, as she could tell that her summoner was putting up a strong facade, Lulu walked over to her and gave her a light pat on the back. I know. We're just worried about you. Yeah. Waka added on as he took her other side and held onto the railing. I know that this can't be easy, yeah, but we're here to help. So don't go on thinking that you've got to bear this burden by yourself. We're here for ya. After a moment of silence, as she fought back the tears and kept her emotions bottled up, Yuna managed to keep up her smile. Thank you. Now, get some rest. Lulu stated as she tended to her baby sister, trying to act like things were as they once were. We've got a big day tomorrow. Yeah. Yuna nodded as she felt a little off-put by Lulu's actions, even though she was still thankful to her that she was trying to retain their normality. I think that's a good ideal. What was that? Everyone had heard the thud of something crashing into the boat. It wasn't abnormal, as fiends were quite often attracted to human intrusion onto their territory and would quite often just be a speed bump to the boat. So Waka filed under that normal circumstance as he tried to relax his jumpy summoner. Must have been a fiend, yeah. Sometimes they get too close and then, boom, boat crushes them under it. That is a lovely image. Lulu twitched as Waka laughed at the image he brought up. However, Yuna smiled as Waka's optimism and laughter had livened up the mood a bit, and she too laughed a little as Kamari walked to railing to see. It is actually kind of funny if you think about it. It's not a fiend. It is a man. Kamari said. He looked down and saw exactly what it was. And there was a young man with waterlogged yet still gravity-defying blonde hair, somehow managing to grip the boat and keep from being towed under it, all the while being unconscious. He would have jumped in to get him out, however he was not a very good swimmer and might get caught in the undertow as well. Without hesitation, Waka jumped over the railing. Waka easily secured the young man, all the while keeping from being dragged under the boat as he swam. With some effort he lifted the unconscious man up, and Kamari grabbed him as the sailors came rushing over to help, as the man overboard had been called. Jumping back over, he looked on the scene of Yuna checking the young man out, as the sailors didn't have any real medical expertise. And Yuna was a white mage, making her the healer on board. Is he okay? Waka asked as he looked on, a little stupefied on how this situation came to be. Yuna was baffled by what she saw as she gave the young man a quick one-over and could believe it. He's absolutely fine. Outside of being waterlogged, he doesn't have a scratch or bruise on him even from when he slammed into the boat. While Lulu narrowed her eyes, as such a thing shouldn't be possible for someone that was quite obviously treading water for a very long time if he was in these waters, Waka laughed a little. Man, he must have some blitz skill to survive out here without drowning, y'all. That may be true, but the question remains why he was out here. Lulu reevaluated the situation on hand for their mystery stranger that they had just found. Not to mention how he could survive with all these fiends out here. Something should have grabbed him. He most likely is just a very lucky shipwreck survivor, ma'am. One of the sailors stated as he and a few of his buddies got the okay to lift him and hefted him onto his shoulders. We'll take him down below and then we'll get those answers when he wakes. For now he needs to rest. We also are going to have to make a slight detour to see if we can find any other survivors if that is the case. Yuna nodded and agreed with that as they took the young man down to the holds below. But as they did, her eyes widened as she caught a particular symbol emblazoned on the back of his shirt. It was symbol she recognized. It can't be. Yuna muttered to herself as this could not just be coincidence, and she made a step forward to follow them. That was when she was snapped out of her focus by Waka. You okay, Yuna? What? Oh yes, I'm fine. Yuna broke out of her funk and realized she must have zoned in on what she had seen. I'm just tired. I think I'll call it a night. Oh, okay. Waka easily let it go as it was around that time and Yuna did need her rest. Get some sleep then, ya. We should reach Kilika a little later than anticipated, so get as much rest as you can. Don't want you tired before your next trial. Yes sir. Yuna gave Waka a mock salute, which in turn made the man grin and laugh a little before she headed down into the holds as well, with Kamari ever so dutifully following his summoner. I don't like this, Lulu stated as she stood beside Waka. She saw something on that stranger she recognized. Just who is he and why was he out here? Waka could only shrug in response, but even he had caught what Yuna had said and what she had said. I dunno, but there is nothing we can do about it. He's out cold and can't give us any answers, ya. So we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out, as something tells me Yuna is gonna get to him first. We won't know what it is she saw until then anyways, for she'll just keep everything to herself until she confronts him. While Lulu knew this was true, and as unfortunate as it was going to happen. That may be, but I'm going to keep my eye on him. Something doesn't seem right and I'm not going to let anything happen to Yuna. I agree with you there, but until we know his intentions, if he has any, we got to play it low, ya. For all this may be the only time we ever run into him and he wants nothing to do with us. Waka commented as Lulu began to make her way to the holds as well, probably going to keep the young man and Yuna within her sights until more was known about him. I can only hope that is the case. Lulu responded, and with that she went into the holds, leaving Waka up on the deck. Man. Why does this stuff happen to us? Waka sighed before he too went down into the holds to get some rest. His memory was groggy. He wasn't sure where he was or just what had happened. Everything was a blur to him and he could only recall certain facts. But at this moment he couldn't even concentrate on those, as a loud deafening ring was breaking any chance that he could focus on them. It felt like the hangover he got from drinking with the old hag after learning he wasn't going to be Hokage for a good while. He also remembered that he ended up in an odd place that was most decidedly not his home, surrounded by. Hey, it seems like he's up. Can you go get him something to eat? A voice called out to him before asking someone to leave and go get some food, breaking his thoughts of his last hangover. He slowly opened his eyes and let the light hit his eyes. He wished he hadn't done that, as he was having a hangover, as it caused a jolt of pain to go through his eyes and into his aching brain. Damn it. Someone turn off the lights, or at least dim them. Huh? The voice sounded a little stupefied by his response before he laughed to himself. Oh right. Ya must still be recovering from when we found Ya. Must have a massive headache, Ya. That's one way of putting it. Naruto growled out as he slowly sat up, as there was some important information he needed to gather, ignoring the shooting pain in his brain and the light sensitivity he was going through. You said you found me? Yeah. Waka stated as he looked at the recovering Naruto as he was groggily shaking off the after effects. Ya were simply drifting on the surface of the ocean, and by sheer chance Ya slammed into our boat and we noticed you after. Ya lucky that it didn't crush you from the undertow and somehow managed to cling onto the boat despite being unconscious. Knowing it was probably more than luck that had guided him to this boat, Naruto frowned as he sorted through this information and pushed through his jumbled memories to remember what was going on. Great, just great. Was anyone else of my crew found? Waka shook his head, as it seemed the sailors were right and he was just a part of another boat that was out in this region. No one else was found. Heck, no wreckage was found either. It was as if you drifted away from where you guys were attacked and were lucky to be found by us. Grimacing at first, as that could be a bad thing, Naruto shook his head of that thought. Maybe he did what he had hoped and drew Sin away just with his presence, or at least gave enough time for everyone else to flee the area and avoid the whale's attention. Still, he had to cover for Riku and the other albed. Their race was despised by most of the others of Spira for their use of forbidden machina and their unwillingness to bend their ways to Yevon and only follow Yevon's teachings instead of using their own eyes and brains to see if there was a better way. Damn. That fiend must have taken out my ship and my crew. Naruto growled as he told a white lie while mixing in a little of the truth, as after all they did need to know about Sin just in case. It just passed by us, but at very presence. Sin? Waka was alerted by this, as only one thing in these waters could take a boat out just by simply passing by. Without a doubt it was Sin. It simply blasted past us and drug our boat under before the scales began to detach and attack us as we bailed the ship. I don't know how I managed to get out of there as after a while as everything begun to become hazy and then I just blacked out. Naruto explained as he continued on with his lying yet truthful story. Must be Sin's toxin. Waka nodded to himself as that part of the story made sense as others had the same reactions to it in the past. But I got to say it was a miracle Ya drifted out of there alive. The scales must have thought you were one of the dead and left you be, Ya. I can't say but it is a miracle I made it here. Naruto stated as he tried standing but simply didn't have the strength as the world spun and he fell back down to a seat position. Whoa. Take it easy there. Waka put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Ya just got out of a life and death situation and have been drifting through the tides for Yevon knows how long. You've got to be exhausted and need to eat a bit to regain your strength. Yuna will be here soon with a plate for Ya. With that one name said, Naruto immediately realized just who he had been picked up by and knew there was no coincidence that this had happened. Sid had asked him to shadow this particular summoner, join her if possible and make sure she survived and hopefully get her to quit her pilgrimage. But most importantly, he was to see the world and see if he could find something that would take out Sin once and for all that would not require the final summoning. Ah, perfect timing. Waka grinned as a brown-haired summoner with a green and blue eye appeared with a tray of food and handed it to the stunned Naruto. He took it in stride, however, and simply gave the girl a small bow. A lady summoner? The honor is mine. The name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki. This caused Yuna to gasp and had Waka simply raise his eyebrow at the young man's name, surprised by it as well. Uzumaki? You by chance aren't related to Lady Uzumaki, are you? Lady Uzumaki. Naruto was caught off guard by this but again kept his surprise very minimal and mostly concealed as it would not do to let them on to that he was an off-worlder. I'm afraid I don't know who you are talking about. My memory is very fuzzy right now and I can't seem to recall a lot of my life. That makes sense. The toxin will do that to Ya. Waka stated as Yuna was giving Naruto a steeled gaze as if she was measuring him. Lady Uzumaki was one of the two guardians of Lord Braska that helped bring forth the last calm 12 years ago. It was said she lived on an island called Konoha that was wiped out by Sin 5 years previously, taking away her husband and newborn son, so she was eager to help my father when the time came. Yuna added as she gauged Naruto's reaction to this tidbit of information. Waka raised his eyebrow again as this was not information that anyone but Yuna would have known about as she met with Lady Uzumaki for a brief period of time. And again he had to wonder just why she was asking this information when it dawned on him. She was trying to see if he was Lady Uzumaki's son. This alarmed Naruto. What she said had aligned situations with his mother and this mysterious Lady Uzumaki and that was not a good thing. But still didn't make any sense on how his mother had arrived here as it took a dimensional rift sealing technique and most of Kurama's power to get here. Then he was reminded of what the faith at Baj had said, that their worlds had always been intertwined and that upon death certain souls would transcend worlds and continue their life at the other. And that meant it was very possible that was his connection to this world that the faith had mentioned. That his mother had arrived here and was still living in this world. None of this surprise showed on Naruto's face as he processed it quickly and shook his head and came up with a convenient lie. I was just a babe at that time. The Uzumaki was a big family and had many members until that day. I was more than likely related to Lady Uzumaki, but when Sin wiped out Konoha my parents were killed and I was taken in by a family friend. Waka nodded as that made sense as he looked just around the age of adulthood and wouldn't know just how closely relate he was to this woman he never heard of before as the rest of his family was wiped out. It happened quite often when Sin came through and destroyed places, even relatively isolated places from the rest of the world. Yuna, however, smiled as she had trapped Naruto into admitting he was from Konoha and that was good enough for her. Kushina had told her quite a bit about Konoha, her husband and son and a little bit about the day life of a ninja. So she figured he would lie about being an off-worlder and she wasn't going to disprove that to the others. That is terrible. I'm sure Lady Kushina would have loved to seen you to know she wasn't the last of her family. Yuna softly responded with a bit of remorse in her voice. Naruto froze at the mention of his mother's name. That erased all doubts and proved that his mother was here at one point in time. However, with what Yuna had just said, it had seemed that she had passed away, most likely dying battling Sin with Braska. Clenching his fist as this was made all the more personal for him, Naruto only nodded before he took a bite of the food that was given to him. Indeed, I would have liked to meet her as well to learn more about my family and their arts. Well, we could look for Sir Orin, my father's other guardian. Yuna spoke and caught Naruto's attention as he returned his gaze to her. He might know where Lady Kushina has gone since she disappeared after my father's battle with Sin. If anyone knows where she went or what happened to her, it would be Sir Orin. This bit of information intrigued Naruto. While it was still more than likely his mother had passed on, as if no had heard from her in 12 years, it was a fair bet she had died. It wasn't in her personality, from what he was told of, to hide out and go silent for that long. It would have driven her batshit crazy. However, there still being a chance to meet her or at least hear of her story was a proposition that he couldn't pass up. It also seemed that Yuna wanted to join him and learn of her fate, and that was making his job even easier. That would be grand, but just where would I find Sir Orin? I doubt he is an easy person to find. Naruto asked, as he was genuinely curious and to see if Yuna knew where he could be found. Every year Sir Orin is found in Luca during the kickoff tournament of the Blitzball season. Lulu spoke as she made herself known, entering the room and having most likely been listening from just outside the door. I have met him on a few occasions over the years, and he is always there, looking out to sea as if he is waiting for something. But as soon as the first tournament ends, he leaves as if he was never there in the first place. I see. Naruto stated as he took another bite before pushing the tray away. Please excuse me, I do not feel well. Oh. Yuna responded, a little surprised before remembering that he had just woke up and was still recovering from Sin's toxin and being out in the ocean for however long he was. Right, you need your rest. I'll come to talk to you later when you have recovered. I look forward to that, Lady Yuna. Naruto lightly bowed before he laid back down and closed his eyes as he began to think on everything he had just learned as the others left and let him be. And that gave him an even worse headache than before. It seems that Yuna believes more than ever that he's Lady Kushina's son. Lulu sighed, put her hand on her forehead and wanted to cry out, wondering just how she originated that ideal and more so on how she managed to prove that there was a good chance that he actually was. Waka could only shrug as he looked over in Yuna's direction as she stood on the deck looking at the water as they passed by and neared Kilika. It is possible, I do have to admit, yeah. Yuna knew more about her than most, and he even admitted that he was from the same family. But I believed him when he said his parents died, as that look he had when he said it. I know that look, yeah. So do I, and that is why I believe him too. Lulu stated as she was starting to get frustrated with the adolescent teen summoner she was guarding. But she knows something that we don't, and that is why she believes otherwise. She won't say what, and that bothers me more as she is normally so open about everything. Yeah, I hear you on that, Lu. Waka sighed as he continued watching Yuna just in case a fiend popped out of the water. But we got to trust her on this. Even if he is Lady Kushina's son, so what, ya? Then it may mean the pilgrimage will be detoured a bit to go find out about Lady Kushina, and is that such a bad thing? While Lulu wanted to respond otherwise, looking over at Yuna, at her sister that she grew up with and helped raise, she could only nod. I cannot see the harm in that. After all, that means we get more time, but don't fool yourself, Waka. She will succeed. You know that too. Yeah. And that's what makes this harder. If anyone is strong enough and has the guts to do this, it is Yuna, and a good part of me doesn't want to see that. Waka cringed as it was eating away at him at what they were doing. I know. But remember, this is what Yuna wants and is why I do have a problem with him now. Lulu was sullen before her face stiffened into a scowl. She is going to ask him to become her guardian, and that is simply something I cannot trust with another, and if there is anyone to break her will, it may just be him. Someone of her age that she can relate to and possible fall in love with. But Lu, is that a bad thing? That may mean this might just end, and isn't that what we want more than anything, y'all? Waka asked, as that was an outcome he could accept if it came down to it. Lulu grimaced as she wanted that too, but she knew otherwise. It wouldn't end, Waka. She would become even more determined to complete her pilgrimage so that the one she loved could live for a time of peace, even if it was to be with another. And think about what if he was to fall for her and then have to watch her willing walk towards her death? Could you do that? Waka flinched as he realized that would be more likely, as Yuna's strong will and determination would get even stronger with a bond like that to defend and protect. And then at the mere thought that the feelings could be reciprocated made it all the worse, and to watch two lives be destroyed by a single act of valor. No, I couldn't. That would be too much for me. Yeah. Waka spoke with a hint of despair in his voice. But aren't you reading too much into this? Lulu nodded, but her steeled gaze did not break. That is possible, but I rather not chance it. There is already too much agony for the four of us. I don't want another to add to the suffering. With that, the two became silent as the possibilities of what could come to be. It was an oppressive atmosphere surrounding them, and others could feel it, and as such the two were given their space on the balcony. As the time passed on, Waka finally broke the silence. Man, this is can't get. Suddenly the boat jolted as if it had ran aground and sent many sprawling to an awkward position or simply flung onto the deck. Yuna was nearly sent flying off the boat, but a quick reaction by Kamari had drug her back into him as he grabbed the railing. What the? Waka looked around at the sea, trying to see what just happened before he noted the water rippling around them, and he cursed himself out. Me and my big mouth. Sin's pawn. A sailor screamed as he looked down off the railing only for a massive tentacle to lash out and grab him. And he was vicious, flung into the air and far away from the boat before 7 other massive tentacles broke the surface and surrounded the boat. And then a massive head of what could only be called a kraken slowly emerged from the depths and roared at the head of the boat. Wasting no time, Waka and Lulu were battle-ready and drawn their weapons and were quickly at Yuna's side as Kamari had withdrawn his halberd. Aim for the tentacles. If we can cut them off we can get free, Lulu ordered as she observed the situation quickly as many of the sailors had drawn either Machina pistols or swords. We'll take the head. Yarg. Many of the sailors screamed they knew what they were doing and started attacking the tentacles, leaving the head to the guardians and summoner. The kraken gave of yet another intimidating roar as its tentacles lashed out at the sailors, knocking a good many down and a few knocked clean off the boat while they ran to the front of the boat to take out the head. Waka threw his blitzball with all his might. While a blitzball would have normally been an ineffective weapon for most, Waka could throw it so hard that it was almost like a cannonball being fired, which actually made him the only Orok in recent years to be put on the all-blitz team year after year. No one actually wanted to be hit by one of his passes or shots because of that reason. So when the ball made impact with the kraken's face, it roared out in annoyance at the blow and drew 2 of its tentacles towards it while the rest continued to battle the sailors in the back. Then it dropped its tentacles down hard on the boat, causing it to tremor as the group barely dodged. We got to take this thing out quickly. It might just take the boat out, Waka called out as he caught his blitzball as it bounced back, acting almost like a boomerang. On it, Lulu focused her mana and with a burst of bolt of lighting fired at the kraken. The kraken took the hit with relative ease, only getting singed from the electric bolt, and went to bring one of its tentacles down onto Lulu when Kamari jumped before her and swung his halberd, cutting into the tentacle and knocking it off its path, however still slammed down with strength to knock both of them to ground. Hold on, Yuna cried as she held her hands together and uttered a small prayer. And a white light surrounded all of them for a brief moment before it faded from them. However, the effects were felt as any soreness in their limbs and body were taken away. Take this. Waka roared as he threw his blitzball again, and unfortunately it had the same effect of only pissing off the kraken, but it decided to sweep one of its tentacles across the deck to knock them into the water. And it would have succeeded it as it smashed into the group, but Kamari had stabbed his halberd down and into the tentacle with enough strength to halt it. The tentacle lashed back and the kraken roared in anger as a mist of purple ooze began to pour out of its mouth at the scrambled party. It enveloped all of them and they could feel it take effect immediately. They began coughing and hacking as it slowly sunk into them. However, another whitish light enveloped them, and as the mist passed over them and the coughing slowly receded and they returned to normal. Good call, Yuna. Lulu coughed lightly as she smiled at the young summoner, knowing she had just used Isuna to heal anything the poisonous mist had caused on their bodies. Then she proceeded to focus more mana and fire a bolt of lightning before knowing this was too much for them to handle. Yuna, you've got summon. We can't take this thing out on our own. Okay. Yuna responded before getting a little space from the flailing tentacles and then closed her eyes. Drawing upon the power that was given to her by the faith of Besaid, Yuna's eyes opened as seal spread around her. And then a seal opened in the sky above and a bird-like creature burst through it and flew at speeds that bent the very air around the creature towards Yuna before touching down at her side. Thank you for answering me, Valifor. I'm in need of your help. Yuna spoke the Aeon as she gently reached for it and placed her hand on its head. Valifor only nodded as she lifted up and hovered by her summoner. That was only for a moment as Yuna pointed her staff at the kraken and the Aeon roared as it flapped its wings with enough strength to create a sonic boom that slammed into its face. That one got its attention as its tentacles lashed out at the Aeon, but it easily evaded and flew above, picking out its next spot before striking. It dashed in with incredible speed and its talon cut into the thick skin of the kraken, drawing blood from the blow before quickly darting out as it lashed back at her. The others weren't done either as they continued their assault trying to bring the beast down. Kamari had joined the sailors in the back cutting at the tentacles that weren't as focused now that Valifor had been summoned and had drawn its attention. Lulu had continued to fell thunderbolts onto the kraken while Waka was doing the same with very pinpoint strikes with his blitzball, hitting the wounds that the Aeon was leaving. But it just didn't seem like they were doing enough damage to bring it down. That was when Yuna focused more onto the power of faith had given her and gave as much as she could to Valifor. Finish it off. The Aeon stopped before her as it suddenly began to gather mana before its mouth, condensing it a physical form of pure energy. And then it fired a beam of pure mana into the kraken, slicing into it as if it was butter and causing the sinspawn to screech out and the tentacles to stiffen and slowly fall back to the sea. Hell yeah! One of the sailors cried out. His cry was brief as the tentacles regained their firmness as the kraken roared in rage and they all dashed found one target. Valifor screeched out as the 8 tentacles caught it before it could recover from its energy ray and begun to squeeze the life from the Eon. And as it did, Yuna screamed as she could feel her pain from their connection and dropped to her knees. It had felt like her very soul was being crushed as the kraken did the same with her Eon. Her vision became blurry and she was started to lose focus, only hearing the roar of the kraken and Valifor's tortured screech. Then the pain began to fade and her vision returned to see her Eon drop down beside her, wounded but otherwise still alive. However, she wasn't prepared for the tentacles to begin falling and crashing down onto the ferry as blood dripped and squirted onto the deck, bathing many in its essence. And before he stood the son of Kushina with his massive blade outstretched and blood dripped from the sword, his eyes now gold instead of blue. "This ends now." Naruto roared out at the kraken, gathering his chakra and condensing it into a single hand and forming his signature technique. And then in a blink of an eye he was on the kraken and had driven the Rasengan into its face, literally shear most of its face off from the sheer force of the technique and just how much chakra he put into it. But Naruto was far from finished. He was going to make sure this thing would not be coming back. Sheathing the blade onto his back, he jumped over the kraken's head and landed on the water, stunning all there. And then he grabbed the back of its falling head and with strength that was simply unheard of in their world pulled the kraken out from underneath their boat, showing just how much larger the Sinspawn was in comparison to the ferry. And then he threw it up into the air and away from the ferry as he drew Ragnarok once more as he felt the blade spark in his hand. And he really wanted to see what was about to happen. "Rend asunder, Ragnarok!" Naruto cried out as the sword literally begun to glow a purple aura around it as he rushed towards the falling body of Kraken before stopping on a dime and swing his blade with a full spin at it. A purple scar of energy followed the blade before it finally erupted in a massive energy scar that cut through the very ocean and obliterated all of the kraken that it sliced through, leaving nearly nothing of it left as the rest turned into fireflies. But the scar did not stop and continued to cut through the ocean like butter and leave the ocean scarred from the blast as it eventually dissipated in the distance. Temporarily, water rushed back to its place, filling the void that Ragnarok had scarred into it only moments, causing ruckus waves to crash into the boat and gave everyone on board a difficult time staying on the deck. Naruto, however, did not care about that at the moment, simply looked at his blade and grinned. That was awesome. Now that he knew he could do that with Ragnarok, he couldn't wait to collect the others to see what they could do. As Naruto begun drooling and thinking of all the possibilities, the others looked on in awe at what they had seen. This young man that was still recovering had, in a matter of moments, completely obliterated a Sinspawn that moments earlier looked like it was about to kill them all. And he did it with such ease and had even threw the massive thing like it was a blitzball. By all definitions, what they had just seen was simply impossible. It was if they were looking at some sort of Superman that could do things that were beyond imagination. And Yuna couldn't help but think of what Kushina had done when she had first seen the red head. She had picked up a Machina lift and threw it over the wall of Bevel in fit of a rage because she couldn't get the thing to work, making both Braska and Orin blush out of embarrassment. While this was a much larger scale, she could see Kushina within him and knew that without a doubt she was his son, the son that Kushina stated with confidence that would be stronger than anyone else. Possibly strong enough to defeat Sin. "All right, that's taken care of," Naruto stated as he landed on the railing in a crouch, next to the summoner and her guardians. "Can we get back on course or do I have to push this clunker to our destination?" With that, the sailors sprinted back to their posts and the captain begun barking out orders to get the boat headed to Kilika. They did not want to piss off the one that made the impossible reality. Whistling as he was impressed with how quickly these guys got to work, probably scared to the point of defecation by what he just did, Naruto was taken a little off guard as Yuna stormed straight to him. Yes? Is there something you want, Lady Summoner?" "I know who you are, Naruto." Yuna started, making Naruto feeling a little uncomfortable at her choice of words before she continued. "And that is why I must ask you this. Will you be my guardian, just like your mother was to my father, to protect me at all costs so that we may bring an end to Sin's destruction?" "Yuna." Lulu cried out to her summoner even though she could not rescind what Yuna had just done, nor would she really want to at the moment. This guy just tossed around a Sinspawn like a doll and blew it apart much like Sin did to anything they threw at it besides the final summoning. It was just that was the only comparison she could come up with, and that scared her. Naruto, however, simply grinned at Yuna. "Yuna, it will be my privilege to be your guardian. I will come with you and protect you from all that will pose a threat to you, no matter what the threat is. And when it comes time, I will help you strike Sin down once and for all." Humming a tune to himself, Naruto ignored all the looks he was getting as he walked out of Kilika's inn, refreshed from a good night's sleep that was interrupted by an insane, bloodthirsty fiend looking to kill everyone. However, it seemed that everyone here got word of what he had done on the boat and was looking at him incredulously, not sure whether to believe the tall tale that was no doubt growing more and more ludicrous each time it was told. Not after that it started out that way. Serious, who would actually believe a single person lifted such a massive fiend on their own and then tossed them over a mile in distance and blast the majority of the fiend away with an aura blast from his blade? That sounded pretty absurd on its own for these people to believe, and the notion of that story getting blown out of proportion was ridiculous. So he ignored the looks and went to go find one of his newest comrades in arms. They had all apparently woken up in the morning and had a few things to do. It was quickly apparent what it was Waka was doing as he was off in the water with his fellow Auroch blitzers. "Come on guys. The tournament is less than a week away." Waka cried out in frustration as his teammates were trying to follow the design of the play. It just wasn't working out very well. "Having a rough time?" Naruto asked as he watched them try again and fail miserably as Dado was decked by Waka's pass and put into a daze. "You don't know the half of it." Waka groaned as Jasu went to go see if his friend was okay. "In the history of Besaid actually having a blitz team, we have never won a game. No matter how hard we try, we just seem unable to even get a single win, even when we are lucky and don't get Luka in the first round like we've had in the last 3 years straight." "Wow. That sucks." Naruto felt genuinely bad for Waka as it seemed that he was a very good player and his team just had the worst of luck, and it all seemed worst when they kept getting beaten by the defending champions in the opening round over and over again. That just seemed cruel. "Will you look at what we've got here?" A voice came out from beyond Naruto and he and Waka looked over at who it was. "Oh great, speak of Sin Ya." Waka groaned as it was none other than Bixen from the Luka Goers. "It's the lovable losers of Spira, the Besaid Aurochs," Bixen announced, and then he and his fellow teammates laughed at their opposition. "So what are you guys doing out here, trying to train so you don't lose so miserably in the opening match again?" Waka simply growled in his throat at the insult but took it nonetheless as responding would only add fuel to the fire. Naruto narrowed his eyes as this guy was already rubbing him the wrong way. A part of him just wanted to punch him in the face. Repeatedly. In sage form. With a massive metal gauntlet strapped to his fist. With 9-inch long claw blades attached to it. And then that just happened to be on fire. Bixen saw Waka's reaction and simply smirked at him. "Oh, is it because you're trying to go out a winner when you retire? As if I don't know how it is that you keep getting put on the all-blitz team every year, as it just feels like a sham to me. You aren't even that good, and I guess the officials feel so bad for you guys losing year after year that they have to give something to you. And what is it that you are even gonna do when you retire, huh?" Bixen kept going, oblivious to Waka growing anger and the eye twitch he was getting from Naruto. "I heard that you were gonna be a full-time guardian. Well, I feel bad for your summoner as you obviously aren't fit to protect her. She'll probably get kidnapped or killed before you even leave Luka and sold off into a sex slave ring. Though I wouldn't mind that too much as she is quite the looker." Waka was steaming and he had climbed out of the water, fists clenched. He had crossed the line and he was going to make damn sure he paid for that. He could take all his blitzball insults to him and his team. But bringing Yuna into this had pushed him past the limited, and he was going to make sure that he paid for that. That was when Naruto placed his hand on his chest and held him back, simply giving him a look that said, "I've got this." "That's a lot of trash talk you're spouting there. I wonder just how much you can back up." Naruto responded before calling out to one of the Aurochs, "Hey Letty, can I see that ball for a second?" Catching the ball that was passed over, Naruto gripped and got a feel for it before taking a few steps back. "I'll make you a deal right here and now. If you can catch this pass of mine, the Aurochs will pull out of the tournament and never play a game again." "Hey." Waka started as he was not ready to agree to this deal but backed down from Naruto's stare. Besides, if this guy's superhuman feat of throwing the kraken was anything, he could easily throw a blitzball that could not be caught. "I'll accept that deal right here and now. Anything to get these losers out of the way so they can stop humiliating the rest of us." Bixen grinned and got ready to catch what was sure to be an easy throw in his mind. "Really? You don't want to hear the other end of the bargain?" Naruto raised his eyebrow as the deal had another stipulation and this guy was simply too cocky to see he had no chance. "Don't need to, because it won't even happen. Now throw that ball so I can kick these guys out for good," Bixen said as he was getting excited over having eliminated the losers once and for all. Naruto simply shrugged. It was this idiot's funeral. "All right then, here it comes." With a simple flick of his wrist, the ball simply disappeared from everyone's sight. And then the split second later the collision was heard and Bixen bent over onto his knees and screamed out to the far plane in pain. And then grabbed his testicles and rolled on the dock in severe pain as they both had just been crushed into dust as Naruto caught the ball on the bounce back, not that anyone saw it bounce back. All the goers backed off in horror, seeing their leader rolling around in agony, and more so as Naruto approached and knelt over him. I would suggest you get used to that because when it comes time in the tournament I'm going to make sure every pass I throw in our match with you guys will hit those every fucking time. And that goes for all of you too. Naruto stood back up and challenged the rest of the Luka team, stomping on the dock with enough power to shake it just to make sure all attention was on him. Even you women, I will hit you so damn hard that your ovaries will be bleeding for the rest of you forsaken lives if you, any of you, so much utter another insult to an opposing team again. And don't think I won't find out as I have my ways. Now get the fuck out of here, Naruto roared and enforced his presence upon them. Needless to say the goers got going, scrapping Bixen off the dock and rushing away from the fuming Naruto. And all of this was seen by Lulu and Yuna who had stopped by to watch their practice moments before the goers had arrived. And even they were stunned at what had just transpired. Not that they should have been. Naruto did say he would protect Yuna from all threats and even if it was only an insult he stepped in and protected her honor. After a few moments had passed Waka simply blinked before he looked over at Naruto. Did you just say you were part of the Oroks? I am now. Naruto twitched as that guy even got under his skin and he was looking forward to getting into the sphere against them. A grin formed on Waka's face at the very thought of Naruto playing for them. Oh man. We are so gonna win the cup this year. Yup. That guy's gonna never have kids again or even have an erection after I'm done with him. Naruto nodded as he was going to uphold threat and make sure every pass he had made contact with his testis. At this Waka, and everyone else for that matter, took a step back from Naruto realizing that his threat was for real. And yet for some reason he couldn't really feel sorry for Bixen. The guy was an ass. Getting to the temple was mostly uneventful as the fiends were easily dispatched and even Ocha the Crusaders had warned them about was taken care of by Naruto after he jumped into Ocha's mouth unleashed a clip of ammunition into the poor fiend. That was why Waka was giving him a glare as they walked up the steps to the temple. Alright, what is up with you? You've been staring me down since the forest and it is getting annoying. You use an albed weapon. Waka said in a very unpleased tone at the holster pistol on Naruto's hip. Those are forbidden, yeah. They are not. Naruto simply countered as they continued walking up the steps and made it to a platform with one last set of stairs left before he turned to Waka. Handheld Machina weapons, aka guns, are an officially sanctioned weapon of Yevon. Every soldier of Bevel has at least a rifle or pistol on them at all times. Furthermore, they are one of the few Machina sanctioned to be usable for public use and to defend oneself and their possessions. While Waka knew this, for it was something he did not like, he simply shook his head and crossed his arms over his chest. Yeah, I know that, yeah. But doesn't change the fact of the matter that they simply bad. Machina like that caused sin. At this Naruto bit his lip for a moment before he let out a laugh. Do you really believe that? As Waka growled at being laughed at, Naruto decided to explain what thought from everything he had gathered so far. From where I stand there is no proof or evidence that even remotely points to sin came to be from the bad Machina that were brought about due to the war outside of Yevon saying so. And as for bad Machina, how is that even possible? Machina don't have feelings or even thoughts at that matter. They can't be bad because they don't have a choice. The wielder, however, does, and it is the wielder that can be bad, good, or even someone that's in the gray. However, that wielder doesn't have to use a Machina to be good or bad. He can pick up anything and still be whatever he wants to be. A sword, gun, magic, or using their very own two fists. All that matters is the person's choice. So if anything, sin came about most likely from the war portion of the Machina war, not the Machina that were used. Waka was visibly flustered at Naruto's remarks. If he was in a clearer state of mind he would have even seen the valid points, but because this was a religious and political issue combined that Yevon had cultured through their teachings he could not see clearly. He was really angry. Shows what you know, yeah. Just how do you know that sin didn't come about from the Machina? I don't. Naruto simply responded as both Yuna and Lulu looked a little shocked to see Naruto be the one to back down. I cannot say they didn't because I was not around 1000 years ago to see just what brought about sin. What I can say, however, Naruto dug in on his position and locked his gaze with Waka's. Is that even if it was the Machina that did bring about sin, it would have been from the sheer destruction that was being caused from them by the war. War caused them to be built and to be used, and that is what caused sin as it arrived and ended the war in one fell swoop. That is documented by Yevon in their archives and teachings, so blame Machina if you must. But remember the reasoning behind the Machina is the true cause. With that being said, neither seemed to back down for a moment before Naruto took a step back as he looked over at Yuna, Lulu and Kamari in an apologetic manner. Now I believe we should drop this as we are upsetting our comrades. Our differences in opinion should not have come to what it did, and I apologize. To all of you. At this, Waka was brought back out of his anger and the sudden realization that others were looking at them and actually afraid. With that he became withdrawn and slunk his head back. I'm sorry guys. It's okay. Yuna was the first to respond, trying to smile and relieve some of the tension that was still in the air. You were only defending your beliefs just like he was defending his. Just, don't get so worked up about it. Just try to be more civil about it next time. Lulu added with a quirky smile on the corner of her lips at Waka's sullen reaction. That's for sure. I didn't mean for it to get like that, but I am stubborn, hard-headed, and I don't back down, so when something like that starts. Man, I'm sorry. Naruto offered his hand to Waka. Yeah, me too. Waka nodded as he accepted Naruto's gesture and shook his hand, but he was still quite upset about the argument and at himself for letting it get to that point. I'm gonna go clear my head, y'all. The others just nodded before Yuna beamed a smile at him. Sure thing. We'll wait here for you. Thanks. Waka stated before he sullenly trotted down the stairs to sulk for a little bit, possibly take out his anger on a few fiends in the area. Soon as he was out of earshot, Lulu gave Naruto a dirty glare that made the young man shrink back just a nudge and look at her incredulously. She didn't say a word, but that look was all she needed to get her message through to him. Don't mess with Waka. Yuna came to his aid as she was slightly curious about something. While I do have to admit that everything you said has truth to it, but most people don't actually own guns or use them. The only people that do on a regular basis are Bevel soldiers, the Crusaders and the albed. And considering you aren't a soldier, that only leaves. See? Naruto immediately countered her argument by coming up face to her and holding his eyes open with his fingers. My eyes are blue, not spiral green like your right eye. Yuna stepped back with wide eyes in stunned terror. You know? Yeah. All albed have green spiral eyes like that. They're the only race in Spira that have that feature, and I should know. I was taken in by the albed. Naruto responded before he flashed a smile at her. It's kind of ironic really, as I was supposed to find you and help you on your pilgrimage. What do you mean that you were supposed to find Yuna? Lulu narrowed her eyes and gave a cross gaze to Kamari, was now on edge as he and Lu took a step in front of Yuna to guard her, for while he did say he was there to help, they were both offset by the rest of his words. Naruto immediately began backtracking and waving his hands in an erratic manner. Whoa, Sid just want. Uncle Sid. Yuna rushed forward and walked right through Kamari and Lulu and right in front of a taken-back Naruto. Uncle Sid sent you to help me on my pilgrimage? I would have thought he would have not wanted me to undergo this journey, especially after everything my mother told me of him when I was young. And he doesn't? Naruto honestly answered as he scratched the back of his head. But that is his place to come and tell you to stop this pilgrimage. He sent me to give you the best protection there is around until he has the chance to come talk to you in person. I couldn't refuse, as he has done so much for me, and it also allows me to get out and see the world and do as I said I would. To defeat sin? Lulu questioned, feeling a little more comfortable as she did know of Yuna's heritage but was still put off by this mercenary. If only that was possible. However, in 1,000 years no other way has been discovered, making it a fool's errand. It is not. Naruto glared at Lulu with a little displeasure at her comment. It is only impossible by those that are unwilling to put forth the effort. That is why I respect the albed people, as they try their hardest in everything they do. Whether it is from the smallest thing of making their daily life just a bit easier to finding ways to combat sin, they put all of their effort into it. And since I live with a similar motto, I won't stop until I find another way. That is my promise, and I don't break promises. Naruto finished with finality as he gave her one last glare. He was really having an issue with his fellow guardians today after such a great bonding moment to start the day. After a moment of silence, Yuna chimed in again as she was still interested on her uncle. So my uncle sent you to guard me until we meet him? When will that be? I dunno. Probably after he finishes the couple of projects he's got going on at the moment. When they'll be finished I don't have a clue, but something tells me they'll be done sooner rather than later. Naruto shrugged his shoulders at that question, as with Sid there was no definitive answer when he would show up. He would just show up at some random point in the future before the pilgrimage was over. As for guarding you till then, know I am your guardian and I will stick with you till sin is beaten one way or another. Naruto added on as he smiled at the young summoner. As I said, I don't go back on my promises, and that is one of them. You accepted me as your guardian and I will protect you even if the others don't like me. Yuna simply smiled back. You really are like your mother. From your behavior to your beliefs and even the things you say. They are all so similar to hers. I've been told that a lot recently. Her personality must have been so infectious that I got contaminated at birth. Naruto sheepishly grinned and gave a hearty laugh, as it seemed very true from all he was told about her. This small talk brought Lulu back into the conversation as she remembered the question and answer session on the ferry. I thought you said your parents were dead and that Lady Kushina could not be your mother? At this Naruto sighed and shook his shoulders. I don't know myself, but it seems like there is a chance that she very well could be my mother. My mother's name was Kushina Uzumaki, and while I'm unsure how this could be her as my mother did die on the day of my birth, I'm gonna figure it out. And if it is her, I've got a whole new slew of questions that need answers. Lulu continued to frown for a moment before nodding. While at the very least that would explain why he was so hesitant earlier to believe Lady Kushina was his mother like Yuna believed her to be. To his knowledge she was dead, and having her appear somewhere else was very disturbing to him. Seeing Waka returning up the stairs, looking like he had recovered and was back to normal, Lulu gave Naruto one last glance. Since Yuna wants it, I will say nothing, but just remember I've got my eyes on you. That's fine. Naruto responded as Yuna scowled at Lulu, as it seemed none of her other guardians were getting along with him before he shrugged his shoulders. Be suspicious of me and subject me to questions. I will be honest and forthcoming with all I can be. Just know that I'm entitled to secrets just like you are and our summoner is. A guy has to have some secrets, K? At that Lulu blushed at the way Naruto said it was extremely suggestive and turned away from him. Yuna giggled as she caught the reference too, but just found it funny that Naruto was teasing with it. Again, something Kushina did back then now that she was older and could understand some of her taunting of poor Orin. Kamari simply ignored this line of conversation and returned to his usual post of flanking Yuna. He got what he wanted out of all this talk. Naruto was no threat to Yuna and would protect her with his life just as he would. That was all that mattered to him, and he could put up with his eccentricities just as he put up with Lulu and Waka's. And Yuna's for that matter. This was what Waka walked back to, and he blinked in confusion. What did I just miss? Nothing at all. Naruto bit back a laugh before motioning to the stairs with his head. Race you to the top? I'll give you a good 5-second head start. Bring it on. Waka agreed with gusto before the two got set to race up the rest of the stairs. You've got the honors, Yuna. Okay. Yuna nodded and started the count. Ready, set, go. With that, Yuna turned around and took off up the stairs, laughing as she did. What? Hey! Waka cried out as he chased after his summoner, who decided she was participating in the race. Naruto just counted to 5 before he disappeared in a blur, only to appear at the top of the stairs just as Yuna was at the final step and Waka was a step back. And with that, the shinobi once again proves. Who the hell are you, and why are you not wearing any more clothing than that? That just screams out rape me at the top of its lungs. Well, excuse me. You are a rude thing, aren't we? A dark-skinned summoner responded as Lulu and Kamari casually made their way up the stairs. Doesn't the man who literally just appeared out of thin air at least introduce himself before demanding an introduction from a beautiful woman such as me? I would, but that would imply that I think you're important enough to introduce myself to. I was merely asking that, as you were only a couple of steps from being put into the ground and severely injured if I had not had complete control over myself. Now I simply just don't care. Naruto blandly responded to the woman with a snippy attitude before turning to Yuna. That was a good race there, lady. You at least beat Waka and almost had me too. Next time, I guess. Yuna panted with a smile before bowing lightly to the dark-skinned woman and her buff companion. Please forgive my guardian for his manners. He can kind of be, a jerk. The woman scowled as she was very, very displeased and wanted to reach out and slap Naruto for his insult and tone. I admit that. Naruto could only nod before he crossed his arms over his chest. But in this case, me being a jerk might just actually be warranted, but please, let me try and be civil about this before I judge you too harshly. The name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki. With this, the buff man inhaled deeply, surprised by his name. The woman simply twitched at the insensitive brat and had half a mind to leave them be and just leave. However, she would not simply allow a chance to flaunt herself off to others. Pass. My name is Donna, a summoner that hails from Mayan. This is my guardian Barthelo. I can tell that you must be Summoner Yuna, the High Summoner's daughter. I am. Yuna nodded and felt a little put off by the woman who just seemed so full of herself. My. Your fame must have helped gather you this many guardians already, and you have hardly even begun your journey. But don't you know, dear, that is quality before quantity? Donna begun her gloating and was starting to draw out Naruto's ire, who had begun to look for a blitzball to throw. I only have the need of one guardian, as you can see. Also, I would never be seen with such riffraff. Barthelo, what's wrong? Would you? Barthelo began as he looked at Naruto. Happen to be related to Lady Uzumaki? She is my mother, yes. Naruto nodded as he felt the gaze this haughty woman's guardian was giving him, and it was disturbing him. What? Donna bit back shout as she looked at the young man she had dubbed a brat earlier. At this, Lulu, who had heard the entire conversation and was put off at being insulted as well, had to step and take down this woman a peg. She deserved it. My Aren't we overconfident in calling the son of Lady Kushina riffraff? And I thought you knew about quality. Yeah, besides. Naruto begun as he was gonna tear this wench a new one. I don't like being recognized for lineage or even titles. I go by deeds. I've thrown a giant seaborn sinspawn and a sandworm over a mile in distance in the last month. What have you done recently? At this everyone stopped looked at Naruto as if he had gained a second and then third head but got the desired effect from Dana as she took a step back. She had heard after she was done praying that someone that had just come off the ferry had literally thrown a kraken over a mile in distance and destroyed it with a single overdrive. The fact that this was that person and he happened to be the son of Lady Kushina and was guardian to late High Summoner's daughter put her in awkward position. Try to continue belittling a celebrity and a so-called superhero, or to save face and get out of there. Dana chose option B. Barthelo were leaving. Dana hastily retreated before giving a small bow to Yuna. A bid you adieu, Lady Yuna. And you as well, Lady Dana. Yuna gave her a bow back before Dana and Barthelo quickly made it past them and headed down the stairs. Waka simply blinked at Naruto as this ended and made Naruto take a step back. Yes? Are you really Lady Kushina's son? Waka asked. Everyone face faulted as they completely spaced out that Waka was not there for that part of the discussion earlier. The wait was killing him. All they could do was sit around and wait for Yuna to be finished with her prayer to the faith within the chamber of the faith. Now this wouldn't be a problem usually as he could go off and go do something, but he was kind of waiting to go in after Yuna was finished. Discreetly. Didn't need the others to know that he was gaining the forbidden powers that the Aeons could grant. However, it was the code of the Guardian to stay and wait for their summoner to finish. And again, that wouldn't be too horrible as he had a few gadgets he wanted to fiddle around with, but there came the next problem. He didn't want to upset Waka again, so after a quick conversation after Yuna went into the chamber he would refrain from using Machina unless within combat scenarios that required it. It was the price he had to pay to try and get along with his fellow Guardians. So Naruto was bored out his mind. He had started to resort to a chakra control exercise of spinning a kunai on his fingertips. Each and every fingertips. The problem was he was starting to lose focus and they were starting to prick his fingers and cause him to curse. Damn it. Naruto yelped as he dropped the rest of his kunai before solemnly sighing and picking them up and putting them back into the storage seal of his pouch before he leaned back against the wall. You know. They should put something in here for the Guardians waiting on their summoner to do. While Waka was of a like mind and had resorted to bouncing his blitzball of the wall, he shook his head. That's not the way it is, y'all. All we can do is wait for Yuna and hope nothing we do interrupts her prayer to the faith. If we did anything in here much more than this it could cause the summoner to be excommunicated or worse. Really? Naruto raised his eyebrow at this as the faith he met at Baj was most definitely not the kind that seemed likely to excommunicated someone because there was something going on outside. Yes, really. Lulu glared at Naruto for asking such a dumb question. At least it was in her mind. So if you wouldn't mind keeping whatever it was you were doing to a minimum, everything will be fine. Naruto only sighed in defeat after Lulu practically bit his head off. He turned to Kamari for a second before thinking otherwise. He wasn't sure what the Ronso thought and he wasn't too eager to really find out right now. That growl he had was really intimidating, even to him. So after a few more agonizing minutes of boredom and fidgeting, Naruto was all but ready to pull out some of his gadgets and start tinkering with them. In fact, he had pulled his shirt sleeve back to reveal a Machina wristband only for the door to the chamber to open. Yuna exited with sweat drenched over her body while she slowly waddled forward. She was utterly exhausted and it showed as her eyelids were half closed and her skin was deathly pale. Kamari was quickly at her side and assisted her. It took a few moments but finally her skin rejuvenated and returned to its normal color and her strength had returned. Sorry. Yuna panted as she was still getting used to how much effort it actually took to call the faith and have them answer her call by providing her with their power. I'm still not quite used to this. Don't you worry. Every summoner has to go through this and it takes them time too. Lulu patted Yuna on the head and gave her a soft smile. Besides, you are doing just fine. This time it only took 3 hours instead of 3 days. Naruto paled at that. She had to pray to the Besaid faith for 3 days just to be able to summon Valifor. How did she even survive that? Was there water and food in there for the summoners so they didn't die from starvation or dehydration? Also, what if this faith was a total dick to him and wanted him to go through the same praying procedure like all the summoners did? He wouldn't do that for anything. It is time, warrior of the faith. A voice echoed from around him and he immediately knew that it was the faith beckoning him to come to his chamber. Enter so I may bestow you my greatest power onto you. Naruto chose to ignore it as he approached Yuna and gave her a grin. However, he was worried as Yuna was looking around, for it was like she had heard something too, and that only meant one thing. The faith was talking and only certain people could hear it. So he de-escalated the situation as tapped her on the shoulder. "You okay, Yuna?" Yuna snapped out of her funk and nodded, but still looked distraught. "Yeah, but I just swore I heard the faith speak again." "Well, you did just finish praying to him. Maybe you're a little delirious still and thought you heard him again." Naruto gave a fair reasoning to her before giving a hardly laugh. "Let's get you topside so you can get some fresh air and some nourishment." As Lulu and Waka nodded in agreement, Yuna could only go with his reason, but something felt off as she followed them through the completed trails. She heard exactly what the faith had said, and it had bothered her greatly. Warrior of the faith. Bestow his greatest power. Just what did the faith mean by that, and just who was it talking to? Then a thought hit her with great impact just as they exited the temple and were hit by the fresh air and sunlight. She turned around immediately and looked at her comrades to note that one was missing. "Where is Naruto?" At this, the other three guardians looked perplexed as Yuna was. He had simply vanished. "What the? I was sure he was with us." Lulu looked surprised as she walking alongside him and Waka just a moment ago, and now he was nowhere to be seen. "Just where did he?" "Yuna." Yuna ducked back into the temple, sprinting as fast as she could. Her guardians reacted quickly, but she made it to the elevator first and went down before they could get to her. They would have to take the next run, and that would give her enough time. Rushing through the trials, which had yet to be reset by the temple priests, she entered the waiting area and came to a screeching halt at the sight before her and ducked into the shadows to not be seen. Naruto had exited the chamber of the faith with shit-eating grin on his face as he gazed at the new metal gauntlets on his fists, inspecting them before giving them a slight tap against one another. Then blades suddenly snapped out from above each finger, and then the entire gloves were set ablaze with an intense heat that somehow did not affect Naruto in the slightest as he looked at them in awe. "Hellish claws are right. Yuna." Naruto started in awe before he frowned and looked over at the entrance. "I'll give you props for the attempt, but sneaking up on me is impossible for one such as yourself. Now what are you doing here?" With that, Yuna slowly walked towards Naruto, not sure what to think of what she saw and what she was putting together in her mind. What just happened?" "Aw, that." Naruto sheepishly grimaced as the rest of the group had quickly rushed in after Yuna and was now glaring at him for making them come all the way back here. "I guess since I'm coming with you guys I can tell you thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.